Chapter 304. Realm Guard Alliance. Supreme Lord Lu. Supreme Lord Lu glanced at Jian Xian and said, Jian Xian, I never thought that you would come back after disappearing for so many years. Are you here to be buried with the Pale Sword Sect? Jian Xian glanced at Supreme Lord Lu. Destroy my Pale Sword Sect? Your Realm Guard Alliance? Old man Lu, there is still the corpse of the previous Supreme Lord hanging at the foot of my Pale Sword Sect's mountain. But don't worry, sooner or later your corpse will also be hanging there. Supreme Lord Lu was not angry. Is that so? Then let's wait and see. Let's see whether my corpse will be hanging at the foot of your Pale Sword Sect's mountain, or the bodies of everyone in your Pale Sword Sect will be hanging at the foot of my Realm Guard mountain. Jian Xian sheathed his sword. Then let's wait and see. After saying that, he grabbed the unconscious Shang Yu and looked at Yi Xian. Let's go. Yi Xian nodded and seemed to have thought of something. He looked at the Beast King not far away. Beast King, for the sake of the Realm Guard Alliance, your demon race's younger generation has almost died, and even half of the city has been destroyed. Let me ask you, did you suffer a loss? Ah. After saying that, he turned and flew into the sky on his sword. Soon Yi Xian and Jian Xian disappeared into the horizon. In the sky above the Thousand Beast City, the Beast King's face was gloomy and grim. Loss. This time it was a loss and a loss of blood. At this moment, Supreme Lord Lu suddenly said, Beast King, in the future when the Pale Sword Sect is destroyed, a third of their assets will belong to your demon race. Hearing this, the Beast King's face eased a little as he looked at Supreme Lord Lu. When will you make your move? Supreme Lord Lu smiled. Soon. Once the matter in Green State is over, we will make our move immediately. The Beast King asked in a low voice, How confident are you? Supreme Lord Lu's mouth curled up. 70 to 80%. The Beast King thought for a moment and said, Jian Xian and Yi Xian aren't simple at all. Especially that young man Yi Xian. He's extremely mysterious. Lord Lu said softly, Don't worry, his confidence comes from that mysterious woman. As for that mysterious woman, someone will deal with her in the future. The Beast King nodded and did not say anything more. He glanced down at the Thousand Beast City below and his face darkened once again. This time, the demons had suffered a great loss. When they were about 10 miles away from the Tsang Sword Sect, Jian Xian suddenly stopped and handed Shang Yu to Yi Xian. Take him back. Yi Xian was stunned. Eldest martial uncle, you're not going back? Jian Xian glanced in the direction of Azure Sword Sect and shook his head. I don't want to go back. As he spoke, he glanced at Yi Xian. If there's nothing else, try not to leave the sect. With that, he turned around and disappeared into the horizon. Yi Xian shrugged his shoulders and brought Shang Yu back to Azure Sword Sect. In the Azure Sword Hall, Qin Beihan looked at Shang Yu for a long time. In the end, he looked at the old man beside him. Is there a way to cure him? The old man walked up to Shang Yu and looked at him carefully before he nodded. His dantian is broken and he needs spiritual items to recover. The price is not small. Qin Beihan nodded. Cure him at all costs. The old man nodded. Understood. With that, he left the hall with Shang Yu. Qin Beihan looked at Yi Xian. What are your thoughts on this trip? Yi Xian thought for a moment and said, Our Azure Sword Sect is in a bad situation. Qin Beihan smiled. Anything else? Yi Xian shook his head. Nothing else. He turned to Qin Beihan. Sovereign, forgive me for being blunt. Based on the current situation, our Azure Sword Sect has no chance of winning, especially those forces in the Azure Firmament world. Most of them will stand on the Realm Protection Alliance's side. As for us, we have no hope. Qin Beihan smiled. You still haven't looked far enough. Yi Xian said, Sovereign, please enlighten us. Qin Beihan smiled. In the Azure Firmament world, on the surface, the Realm Protection Alliance is the strongest. But below that, there are other strong forces. These forces have deep foundations that even the Realm Protection Alliance fears. For example, the Profound Gate. Yi Xian said in a low voice. They will deal with the Realm Protection Alliance? Qin Beihan smiled. They won't deal with the Realm Defense Alliance, but what the Realm Defense Alliance wants to do will seriously affect their interests. Yi Xian asked. Sovereign, do you know what the Realm Protection Alliance wants to do? Qin Beihan nodded. Do you really think that people like us eat rice for free every day? The Realm Protection Alliance's ambition is not small. He looked at Yi Xian. You need to make a trip back to Azure Province. Yi Xian was puzzled. Why? Qin Beihan spoke softly. Even though I don't know what their final objective is to stop the Realm Protection Alliance from obtaining the Origin Heart, it's obvious that everything they're doing is for the sake of the Origin Heart. Presently the territory of Azure Prefecture is in utter chaos, and blood is flowing everywhere. The origin heart should be emerging soon, so you have to obtain it first. Yi Xian thought for a moment and said, Sect Master, I think that you'll have a better chance if you head there yourself. Qin Beihan shook his head. The Realm Protection Alliance will find out at the first possible moment if we leave the Firmament Sword Sect. At that time, the Firmament Sword Sect will probably cease to exist by the time we return. As for you, the Realm Protection Alliance won't be able to notice you at all if you sneak out, right? As he spoke, a spurious smile arose on the corners of his mouth. Obviously, Yi Xian's ability to conceal his aura hadn't been able to fool Qin Beihan. Yi Xian nodded. Then I'll head back. He had been in the Divine Central Continent for some time, and it was indeed time for him to go back and take a look. As if thinking of something, Yi Xian said, Sect Master, I've seen my eldest martial uncle. Qin Beihan said softly, I know. Yi Xian hesitated for a moment, then chuckled. Sect Master, did my eldest martial uncle have a melodramatic fight with you over the position of Sect Master? Qin Beihan glanced at Yi Xian and shook his head. It's not what you think. Your eldest martial uncle, this isn't something you should worry about. Previously, I was afraid that the Realm Protection Alliance would target your relatives in Qingzhou, so I sent junior brother Zhang Xian to Qingzhou to discuss things with him. He isn't someone who holds grudges. Yi Xian's heart warmed when he heard this. He nodded. I understand. With that, he bowed slightly and left the hall. Yi Xian didn't return directly to Qingzhou, but made a meal. Inside Cloud's Word Hall, Yi Xian put a piece of lean meat in Yu Qi's bowl and grinned. Master, this is delicious. Yu Qi glanced at Yi Xian. This time, you went to save Shangyu, and dared to challenge the younger generation of the demon race in Thousand Beast City alone. The senior brothers are very satisfied with you. When you return, there will be a reward. Reward? Yi Xian hurriedly asked. What reward? Yu Qi shook his head. I don't know, but it shouldn't be too bad. She paused for a moment, then continued, Did you meet your eldest martial uncle? Yi Xian nodded. I did. Master, does eldest martial uncle have a grudge with the sect master? Yu Qi shook his head slightly. This matter is rather complicated. He should have been the sect master back then, but unfortunately, forget it, there's no point in telling you these things. Yi Xian. Moments later, after Yu Qi finished her meal, she flicked her finger and a ray of sword light suddenly entered between Yi Xian's eyebrows. This sword Qi was given to me by master, but to me it's useless. You should keep it, it should be of great use. When you return, be careful. With that, she turned and returned to the inner hall. Inside the hall, Yi Xian tidied up and left Cloud's Word Hall. He made a table of dishes and sent them to array Dao Peak. Seeing Yi Xian, the lady in the hall glanced at him, but didn't say a word and continued to embroider her things. Yi Xian chuckled. Senior Aunt Gu, I'll be returning to Qingzhou in a while. The lady nodded slightly but didn't say a word. Yi Xian thought for a moment, then grinned. My trip will be a little dangerous. The lady glanced at Yi Xian but still didn't say a word. Yi Xian was a little helpless. He bowed. Take care, Senior Aunt Gu. With that, he turned and was about to leave. At this moment, a black box suddenly flew in front of him. Yi Xian was overjoyed. He quickly caught the box and turned to the lady. Senior Aunt Gu, this is? The lady said plainly, a temporary sword array, keep it for self-defense. Yi Xian quickly said, Thank you, Senior Aunt Gu. With that, he turned around and disappeared without a trace. In the hall, the lady shook her head slightly, a faint smile on her lips. After Yi Xian left the Cloudy Sword Hall, he went to the weapon crafting peak. Obviously everyone there knew him. Along the way, the disciples of the weapon crafting peak greeted him as senior brother. Yi Xian also greeted them back. Soon Yi Xian came to the belly of weapon forging peak and saw Zhan Tai. Yi Xian quickly bowed. Hello, Senior Aunt Zhan. Zhan Tai said plainly, What's the matter? Yi Xian chuckled. Nothing, I'm just here to see you, Senior Aunt. Zhan Tai was expressionless. If there's nothing, then go. I'm busy. But Yi Xian did not leave. He just stood there. Zhan Tai looked at Yi Xian. What's the matter? Yi Xian hesitated for a moment and then he said, Martial Uncle Zhan, I'll be returning to Azure Prefecture this time to stop the Realm Defense Alliance from obtaining the origin heart of Azure Prefecture. You're aware of this as well. I'm still so young and I'm still so weak. Once I return, it will be dangerous. Zhan Tai nodded. It's quite dangerous. What should we do? Yi Xian rubbed his hands and smiled. That, Senior Aunt Zhan, you are the best weapon forging master in Azure Firmament World. You must have many treasures. Do you have any good equipment that I can lend to junior nephew? I promise I will return it. Zhang Tai said plainly, no. Not even a single hair. Yi Xian sighed. Sigh, forget it. Life and death are decreed by fate. Riches and honor are determined by heaven. Senior Aunt Zhan, I will take my leave. Finishing his words, he turned and walked outside. But Zhang Tai did not have any intention of stopping him. Yi Xian walked very slowly. Very, very slowly. Half a day passed and he did not walk out. Just at this moment, Yi Xian suddenly stopped. He turned to face Zhang Tai. Senior Aunt Zhan, once I return it will be very dangerous. Are you really not going to think about it? Zhang Tai shook his head and sighed. How can your skin be so thick? Chapter 305. An hour later, Yi Xian left Weapon Forging Peak. In his prison tower there was an additional flying sword. Added with the graceful sword that Zhang Tai had custom-made for him, he now had a total of 2 flying swords. Moreover, they were both heaven tier. Now he was completely unafraid of true defensive magic tier elites. He was elated. Just like that, Yi Xian left the Pale Sword sect contentedly. He didn't go to find Lu Banzwang or Ling Han. Now he would cause trouble for whoever he went to. However, he didn't immediately return to Azure Province. Instead, he went to an ancient city called Drunken Immortal City. The headquarters of the Drunken Immortal Inn was here. The Drunken Immortal Inn wasn't listed as a super force in the Divine Central Continent, but no one dared to underestimate them. Because they were rich. Very, very rich. Once they had a lot of money, it would be very useful. For example, they could invite elites from other realms. The Kuraki Academy had done this before. However, the price was a little high. Ordinary forces couldn't afford it. When Yi Xian arrived at the Drunken Immortal Inn, he immediately flashed his black card. Soon an old man arrived in front of Yi Xian. Yi Xian had seen this man before. It was the 3rd floor master from before. Seeing Yi Xian, the 3rd floor master smiled slightly. Young friend, long time no see. You're already a sword emperor. As he spoke, he paused slightly and then said, How is your master? Yi Xian smiled. She's fine, she's fine. The mysterious woman was definitely fine. Who would dare to provoke her? The 3rd floor master made an inviting gesture. Young friend, please sit. Yi Xian didn't stand on ceremony. After sitting down, he took a sip of tea and then said, 3rd floor master, to tell you the truth, I've come this time to sell some things. The 3rd floor master smiled slightly. Naturally, no problem. Yi Xian nodded and then took out everything in one go. A huge pile. These were his spoils of war. Other than the few heaven-ranked treasures, the rest were useless to him. They were just taking up space, so he decided to sell them all. The 3rd floor master looked at the items in front of him and then looked at Yi Xian with a strange expression. Needless to say, these things were all robbed by this fellow. It was really a lot. Yi Xian smiled and said, 3rd floor master, how much can these things sell for? The 3rd floor master sized up the items. These items aren't worth much. They're worth around 1 billion or so top-grade spirit stones. Little friend, do you have anything good? Yi Xian grinned. No, I'm very poor. The 3rd floor master shook his head and smiled. How about this? I'll give you a favor. I'll give you 2 billion. Pack all these things up for me. Yi Xian hesitated for a moment before he said, Isn't this senior coup? The 3rd floor master laughed and said, Talk about those things. Yi Xian smiled and said, 5 billion. It's settled then. It was best not to take advantage of such things. If he took too many advantages, no one would be willing to interact with him in the future. The 3rd floor master didn't say much. He pointed his finger and a storage ring flew in front of Yi Xian. Yi Xian didn't even look at it. He kept the storage ring and cupped his fists. 3rd floor master, I'll take my leave. The 3rd floor master smiled and said, Take care. Yi Xian turned around and left. After Yi Xian left, the 3rd floor master went silent for a long time. Then he turned around and walked into an inner hall. In the inner hall there was a black mirror. The 3rd floor master walked in front of the black mirror and bowed slightly. I wonder if the floor master has made a decision. A moment later, a voice came out from the mirror. Are you tempted by the Realm Defense Alliance's offer? The 3rd floor master smiled bitterly. I am tempted. Their offer is very tempting. However, I'm still a little hesitant. Why are you hesitating? The voice in the mirror asked. The 3rd floor master thought for a moment and said, That youth isn't simple. If he continues to grow, he might become the 2nd sword master. Furthermore, my Drunken Immortal building has a good relationship with him. If we were to betray the Realm Protection Alliance now, all our previous efforts would be in vain. A moment later, a voice rang out from the mirror again, "We will not help either side. As for business, whether it is the Realm Defense Alliance or that youth, as long as they come to us, we will do business with them. As for the rest, we won't interfere. If High Lord Lu comes again, just tell him that this is my intention. He will understand." The third floor master bowed slightly, "Understood." After he finished speaking, just as he was about to turn around and leave, the voice from the mirror spoke again. "As for that young man, if it's possible, help him secretly. However, do not expose yourself." The third floor master was stunned for a moment before nodding his head. "Understood." With that, he turned around and left. After leaving the drunken immortal Yin, Yi Xian did not linger and returned to Azure Province. This time he didn't ride the cloud ship. Instead, he flew on his sword. In any case, he had enough top-grade spirit stones. Now, he had about 10 billion top-grade spirit stones in the prison pagoda. 10 billion. What did that mean? Besides that, there were many heaven-grade treasures. Returning to Azure Province this time could be considered as returning home in glory. Azure Province. The current Azure Province was in a state of desolation. Especially after the spirit energy in many places had dried up, it was even more desolate. The chaos in Azure Province wasn't just caused by the exhaustion of spirit energy and the invasion of foreign enemies, there was also internal strife. When disaster descended, the first thought of countless people was to protect themselves. As long as nothing happened to them, who cared about the fate of others? Moreover, Blue Waves Academy that had once fought for Azure Province had vanished without a trace. Now, many people had begun to reminisce about Blue Waves Academy. Because when Blue Waves Academy and Yi Xian were around, Azure Province still had some order. As for now, so long as one had the strength, one could do as they pleased in the entire Azure Province. The spirit energy in Azure Province was getting thinner and thinner. Those with strength and ability had begun to flee Azure Province and head for the Divine Central Continent. However, none of the students of Blue Waves Academy had left. They were all waiting for Yi Xian to appear. The nation of Ning. Because of Yi Xian, no cultivators of the Divine Central Continent had invaded the nation of Ning, mainly because they didn't dare. However, there were exceptions. On this day, a group of cultivators from the Divine Central Continent arrived outside the imperial city of the nation of Ning. The leader was a man with a knife scar on his left cheek. He had a long scar that looked like a centipede and it was very ferocious. Behind him were more than 20 people. Most of them were at the Divine Combination realm. At this moment, an old man beside the scarred man said in a low voice, "The nation of Ning is Yi Xian's territory." The scarred man smiled savagely. "Yi Xian? I received news that Yi Xian has fled to the Divine Central Continent. Not only that, but the Realm Defense Alliance is also hunting him down. He doesn't dare show himself at all." The old man frowned deeply. "Brother Li, I think we'd better not provoke Yi Xian, especially when he's still alive." The scarred man said coldly, "Most of the places in Azure Province have been occupied by the Devil Sect and the Blood Sect. We've already looted most of the other places. Only the nation of Ning and the Great Cloud Empire are still considered wealthy. But Lian Wanli of the Great Cloud Empire is too powerful. The nation of Ning is the only one left." With that, he glanced at the people behind him. "After this, we'll all return to the Divine Central Continent. What do you think?" The people behind the scarred man were somewhat hesitant. Obviously, they were still somewhat afraid of Yi Xian. After all, Yi Xian had slaughtered countless cultivators of the Divine Central Continent outside the imperial city of the Jiang Nation. Seeing their hesitation, the scarred man's face darkened. "The timid will starve to death and the bold will die. The nation of Ning is so wealthy. If we do this, we won't have to worry about food and clothing for decades to come." The old man beside the scarred man shook his head slightly. "Brother Li, the Devil Sect and the Blood Sect haven't attacked the nation of Ning. I think they're also afraid of Yi Xian. We really don't need to take this risk." The people behind the scarred man nodded. Although they all wanted to make a fortune, their lives were the most important. The scarred man's face grew even more unsightly at the sight of this. He glanced coldly at the crowd and said, "All right, let's cut the crap. Those who want to stay, stand behind me. Those who don't, leave immediately. However, don't blame me for not reminding you that the nation of Ning is very wealthy. Moreover, Lord Tuoba is only at the Dharma-controlling realm. There isn't even a law-controlling realm expert in the city. If you let this duck go, don't regret it in the future." Hearing the scarred man's words, some people behind him were tempted. The old man sighed in a low voice and said, "I've said what I should say. Brother Li, since you insist on going your own way," the old man doesn't want to say anything more. Anyway, I don't want to take this risk. Goodbye. After saying that, he turned around and left. Among the more than 20 people, 5 or 6 people also left with the old man. After hesitating for a moment, more than a dozen people finally chose to stay. Obviously, they were tempted by the wealth of the nation of Ning. The scarred man glanced at the people behind him and said with a smile, "The timid will starve to death and the bold will die. As long as we finish this job, we'll immediately leave Qingzhou and hide. Even if Yi Xian is still here, what can he do to us? Follow me." After saying that, the group of people went straight to the imperial palace of the nation of Ning. When passing through the city gate, several guards suddenly stopped the scarred man and the others. The leading guard glanced at the scarred man and the others and said, "What do you want?" The scarred man revealed a savage smile. "What do we want?" As soon as he finished speaking, he suddenly strode forward, and the guard didn't even have the chance to react before he slapped his palm against his chest. Bang! The guard's body instantly exploded into a mist of blood. The expressions of the other guards changed drastically when they witnessed this scene, but they didn't move forward because they would be giving their lives away. The scarred man's smile grew even more savage when he saw the guards retreat. "Brothers, it's time to change our destiny. Charge with me." As soon as he finished speaking, he was the first to charge forward. But it wasn't long before he stopped because a man was standing not too far away from him. The scarred man's expression instantly changed when he saw this man. "It's you? Weren't you at the Central Divine Prefecture?" As soon as he finished speaking, he turned around and ran. The man before him was exactly Yi Xian. The scarred man hadn't even taken a few steps when Yi Xian appeared in front of him again. The scarred man's face instantly turned pale. In the next moment, his knees bent and he knelt before Yi Xian. "Big brother, I was wrong." Yi Xian was speechless. P.S. Recently, some readers have said that they want to curse me. It's fine. So long as they don't say I'm ugly, then they can curse me however they like. However, if they dare to say I'm ugly, then I won't hold back. Chapter 306. Yi Xian was stunned. He's terrified just like that? And at this moment, the knife-scarred man who was kneeling in front of Yi Xian suddenly stood up. He dashed forward and instantly appeared in front of Yi Xian. Then, with a dagger in his hand, he slashed at Yi Xian's throat. He was extremely swift. Yi Xian shook his head and smiled when he saw the scarred man suddenly attack. So that's what he's trying to do. Unfortunately, he's greatly underestimated my strength. It didn't take long for the scarred man to stop, and there was a sword in the center of his forehead. When they saw this scene, the other group of over 10 turned around and fled. However, a flying sword suddenly flew out, and it was like a butterfly flying through flowers as it passed through the group of over 10 people. In just a breath of time, the heads of over 10 people flew up into the air. It was an extremely bloody scene. The scarred man stared fixedly at Yi Xian. "Weren't you at the Central Divine Prefecture?" Yi Xian grinned. "I just returned. Are you angry?" The scarred man's expression instantly turned extremely unsightly when he heard Yi Xian. "He just returned. In that case, he just made it in time. This was the worst luck of 8 lifetimes." The scarred man thought for a moment and said, "I admit defeat this time. So long as you're willing to spare my life, then I." Meanwhile, Yi Xian's sword suddenly moved forward. The sword instantly pierced through the scarred man's forehead. Yi Xian shook his head and smiled. "You're overthinking things." As soon as he finished speaking, he withdrew his sword, turned around and left. The scarred man's eyes were wide open on the spot, and he died with everlasting regret. After Yi Xian entered the city, he hadn't even taken a few steps before he stopped. 2 women were standing not too far away from him. It was Tuoba Yen and Jianji. Yi Xian ran up to the 2 girls as soon as he saw them. Then he hugged them. "I missed you so much." The 2 women's bodies stiffened. Obviously, they did not expect Yi Xian to act like this. At this moment, Tuoba Yen suddenly pushed Yi Xian away and glared fiercely at Yi Xian. Yi Xian said with a straight face, "This is a pure hug, no other thoughts." Jianji suddenly asked, "Are there any impure ones?" Yi Xian was speechless. After a while, Yi Xian followed the 2 women back to the Ning Kingdom's imperial palace. Inside Tuoba Yan's chamber, Tuoba Yen glanced at Yi Xian. "Azure Province is getting more and more chaotic." Yi Xian nodded slightly. "The Realm Defense Alliance wants to obtain the Green Prefecture's origin heart. Once they obtain the Green Prefecture's origin heart, the Green Prefecture's spiritual energy will completely disappear within a year. At that time, the situation was even worse than now." Tuoba Yen frowned deeply. "Is the Realm Protection Alliance really going to destroy the Azure Province?" Yi Xian nodded. The Azure province is worthless in their eyes. With that, he paused slightly and continued, a senior once told me that the stronger some people are, the less human they are. Because to them, apart from the great Tao of immortality, everything else is fleeting. This kind of people no longer have any humanity, only divinity. This was what the mysterious woman said to him. In fact, he could feel that the mysterious woman did not care about many things. At her level, there should be very few things that could make her care. At this moment, Tuoba Yen suddenly said softly, will you become such a person in the future? Jianji looked at Yi Xian. Meh. Yi Xian was stunned. If I had the mysterious woman's strength, would I also become indifferent to everything? After thinking for a moment, Yi Xian shook his head with a smile. I don't know, but I will try my best not to become such a person. The great Tao, immortality, these were things he had never thought about before. Before he left Azure City, his greatest wish was to cure his younger sister's cold illness and make her happy. Of course, after he left, he had experienced many things, met many people, and had many more thoughts. If he reached the peak one day but the people by his side were gone, then it would be the peak of loneliness. When he thought up to this point, Yi Xian suddenly turned to the two women and smiled. I feel that problems will arise when one lives for too long. What? Because we're free. So, don't care about the great Tao of immortality. Living well in the present is the most important thing. Tuoba Yen shook his head with a smile, but it's difficult for us to live well right now. Yi Xian nodded, and then he walked to the entrance of the hall. He just stood there and no one knew what he was thinking. Tuoba Yen glanced at Yi Xian and did not speak. After a short while, Yi Xian said softly, I'm leaving. Tuoba Yen stood up. So soon? Yi Xian smiled. You can't bear to? Tuoba Yen glared at Yi Xian. Why is your skin getting thicker and thicker? Yi Xian laughed, walked over to Jianji, and then flipped his right hand and a saber appeared in his hand. It was the heaven-grade saber. Jianji was stunned when he saw the saber, and then he took it with eyes filled with fondness. Heaven-grade. Such a treasure was undoubtedly an extremely rare existence in Azure Province. What about me? Tuoba Yen suddenly asked. Yi Xian smiled, and then he gave the heaven-grade armor that he was wearing to Tuoba Yen. His current opponents were either at the true defensive magic realm or above, so this armor was not that useful to him anymore. Tuoba Yen was stunned when he saw the armor that Yi Xian handed over, and then he shook his head. Keep it for yourself. Yi Xian forcibly placed the armor in Tuoba Yan's hand. For me, this thing is not that useful anymore. With that, he waved his right hand and over 20 zombies suddenly appeared in the hall, all of them at the Myriad Law realm. Yi Xian took out a spatial ring and handed it to Tuoba Yen. There is a decaying corpse scripture in the spatial ring. You have to study it. With these zombies and my 12 golden men, as long as true defensive magic realm experts don't come, Ning country should be safe. Tuoba Yen glanced at Yi Xian. You're not staying here? Yi Xian chuckled. If I stay here, where will I sleep? Hearing this, Tuoba Yen looked provocatively at Yi Xian. Where do you want to sleep? Yi Xian said seriously. On the bed, of course. Tuoba Yen said indifferently. Then sleep on the bed. Yi Xian laughed and so he stayed. At night, Yi Xian once again came to Tuoba Yan's bedroom. Since Tuoba Yen wanted him to sleep on the bed, he naturally did not stand on ceremony and went straight to the bed. But soon he was stunned. Because there were two people on the bed. In addition to Tuoba Yen, there was also Jianji. Two people. Tuoba Yen sat up and looked at Yi Xian with a spurious smile. Didn't you want to sleep? Come on up. The provocation was self-evident. How could he back down? Yi Xian said seriously, since you strongly requested it, then I'm coming. With that, he jumped onto the bed and lay down between the two women. The two women were stunned. He really came up. Yi Xian held one in each hand and said seriously, sleep. On Yi Xian's left, Tuoba Yan's face was full of black lines. Clearly, she had underestimated the thickness of Yi Xian's skin. This guy's skin was thick to this extent. On the other hand, Jianji was still eating and did not say anything. Just like that, Yi Xian hugged one woman on each side. At first, it was quite satisfying, but soon, it became a little torturous. Holding two great beauties in his arms and not being able to do anything, it was very torturous. Late at night, Jianji was already asleep, but Tuoba Yen did not fall asleep because Yi Xian's hand was touching somewhere it should not be touching. Tuoba Yen grabbed Yi Xian's hand and warned, "Don't move." Yi Xian said seriously, "I'm not moving. I'm serious." Tuoba Yen glared at Yi Xian. "Anji is still here." Yi Xian said seriously, "I'm not afraid." Tuoba Yen. Another hour passed. At this time Tuoba Yan's breathing was a little rapid. Because she had a special physique, and now that Yi Xian's hand was restless, her body, which had a special physique, was starting to. At this moment, Tuoba Yan suddenly hugged Yi Xian. Yi Xian was shocked because he discovered that Tuoba Yan's body was burning like fire. Yi Xian hurriedly turned to the side and asked softly, "What's wrong?" Tuoba Yan hugged Yi Xian tightly and buried her head in Yi Xian's chest, her body trembling slightly. Yi Xian was about to say something when Tuoba Yan's pajamas suddenly slipped. At the same time, her hand touched a forbidden area for men, intolerable. Therefore Yi Xian blocked the world prison pagoda and gave her a taste of her own medicine. As the saying went, love in the middle of the night, two bodies as one, the golden spear fighting fiercely, the sweet dew dripping on the head of an inch of heart. That night he did not sleep, moving and trembling as he entered the immortal boat. That night he did not sleep, nor did he rest. Daybreak. The person on the bed had yet to get up. It was not until noon when the sun rose that Yi Xian sat up. At this moment he was the only one on the bed. Comfortable. Comfortable all over. It was as if his meridians had been cleansed. Yi Xian clicked his tongue in wonder. Could doing this kind of thing really help him cultivate? Last night the two of them were still immersed in that. Later on, the two of them decided to try the yin-yang meridian that he had once achieved. As for the feeling, it was still very wonderful, but both of their bodies had changed a little. But in that situation the two of them did not care so much. Without thinking too much, Yi Xian washed up and left the sleeping quarters. Then he came to the main hall. At this moment, Tuoba Yan was attending the morning court session. At this moment, Tuoba Yan was dressed in a dragon robe and had an invisible majesty between his brows. He was a completely different person from last night. Seeing Yi Xian arrive, Tuoba Yan put down the memorial in his hand. Court dismissed. Soon the officials retreated. In the hall, only Yi Xian and Tuoba Yan were left. Tuoba Yan was expressionless and did not speak. Yi Xian walked in front of her and said with a smile, "I'm going to leave. As for the Ning Kingdom, you don't have to worry. There are already powerhouses secretly guarding it. However, when necessary I hope you can hide. Of course, I'm talking about when you have no other choice." Tuoba Yan said solemnly, "The Realm Defense Alliance?" Yi Xian nodded. "The Realm Defense Alliance will make a big move soon. Before that, I have to go and stir up some trouble." Tuoba Yan was silent for a moment and then said softly, "Be careful." Yi Xian smiled and then leaned over to Tuoba Yan's ear. "Do you still have that medicine? Give me some for self-defense." Tuoba Yan. Chapter 307. Tuoba Yan kicked Yi Xian angrily. Yi Xian laughed. After coaxing and pestering he finally got a few white jade bottles. After getting what he wanted, Yi Xian did not stay and left Ning Kingdom. The Realm Defense Alliance should already know about his return to Azure Province. If he stayed in Ning Kingdom now, it would be disadvantageous to the country. After Yi Xian left, Jianji suddenly appeared in the hall. Seeing Jianji, Tuoba Yan seemed to think of something and blushed. Jianji sized up Tuoba Yan and was a little surprised. "Dharma Defense Realm?" Tuoba Yan nodded. Jianji was a little incredulous. "You were still at the Dharma Defense Realm yesterday. Why are you at the Dharma Defense Realm today?" Tuoba Yan was about to speak when Jianji suddenly said, "Was it because of your dual cultivation last night?" Hearing this, Tuoba Yan's face suddenly turned red like a burning cloud. She glared at Jianji angrily. Jianji said softly, "The commotion was too big. It woke me up." "Tuoba Yan," Jianji asked again, "was it really because of dual cultivation?" Tuoba Yan hesitated for a moment and nodded. It was indeed because of dual cultivation. Last night, after dual cultivation, she discovered that she had inexplicably improved. This improvement was too unexpected. Seeing Tuoba Yan nod, Jianji nodded slightly, appearing to be in deep thought. No one knew what he was thinking. After leaving Ning Kingdom, Yi Xian arrived at Great Cloud Empire on his sword. In the palace of Great Cloud Empire, Yi Xian saw Lien Wanli. At this moment, Lien Wanli's arm had recovered. Seeing Yi Xian, Lien Wanli smiled slightly. "Long time no see," Yi Xian said with a smile. "Not too long." Lien Wanli glanced at Yi Xian. "Walk with me." In the Imperial Garden on the gravel Xiao Dao, the two walked side by side. It was very quiet. The surrounding experts of Great Cloud Empire had already retreated stealthily. After a while, Lien Wanli suddenly said, "This Azure Province should not be able to be saved, right?" Yi Xian nodded. "The Realm Defense Alliance will soon seize the Azure Province's origin heart. Once they take away the Azure Province's origin heart, the entire Azure Province's world energy will dry up in a short period of time. At that time, this land will no longer be suitable for cultivators to live in. Lian Wanli turned to look at Yi Xian. Can you stop it? Yi Xian smiled bitterly. That's hard to say. However, no matter what, I will do my best to prevent this Qingzhou origin heart from falling into the hands of the Realm Protection Alliance. He didn't know what the Realm Defense Alliance wanted the origin heart for, but he knew that nothing good would happen. Lian Wanli said softly, these powerhouses don't treat people as humans too much. Yi Xian was about to say something but suddenly he said with some surprise, Dharma defensive state? Lian Wanli smiled faintly, I just arrived not long ago. Now even if I encounter a Dharma defensive state expert I can still kill him. Yi Xian sighed in a low voice. Others said that Yi Xian was a monster, but in fact the real monsters in Azure Province were Shaoan and Lian Wanli. Especially Lian Wanli, this was a person who was seriously underestimated. After a while, Lian Wanli suddenly stopped. She squatted down and saw a row of ants slowly crawling on the ground. Lian Wanli said softly, in the eyes of those high and mighty cultivators of the Realm Protection Alliance, we are just like these ants. Saying that, she looked up at Yi Xian. After this matter, I'm going to focus on martial Dao. My goal is to reach the Supreme Realm for the time being. Yi Xian said with a smile, let's do it together. Lian Wanli smiled faintly, do it? 2 hours later Yi Xian left the Great Cloud Empire and came to a small city. In the city, he walked to a tavern where an old man with a long sword on his back was sitting. Yi Xian walked behind the old man and bowed slightly, greetings martial uncle. The person in front of him was Zhang Xian, who Qin Beihan had sent to protect the people around him. Zhang Xian nodded, sit. Yi Xian sat opposite Zhang Xian. Zhang Xian glanced at him, is everything done? Yi Xian nodded, almost. Zhang Xian nodded. The Realm Protection Alliance will be making a move soon, and there are signs of the origin heart appearing in the secluded desolate mountain range. Yi Xian said in a low voice, this matter is of great importance. The Realm Protection Alliance will definitely send many experts, right? Zhang Xian said, even Supreme Lord Lu will come personally. Supreme Lord Lu. Yi Xian's face darkened. This person was an expert above the True Defense Law stage. Although he could kill True Defense Law stage experts, he was still no match for a top expert like Supreme Lord Lu. At this moment, Zhang Xian said, don't worry, the sect master will personally hold Supreme Lord Lu back. Leave the rest to us. Yi Xian hesitated for a moment, then asked, do you want a decisive battle? Zhang Xian smiled, more or less. In short, the origin heart must not fall into the hands of the Realm Protection Alliance. This time, the sect master did not ask you to stop the Realm Protection Alliance, but to train you. Of course, given your current strength, you will be of great help. Yi Xian nodded. Understood. As long as it was to cause trouble for the Realm Protection Alliance, Yi Xian was willing to do it. Zhang Xian nodded, go to the secluded desolate mountain range first, don't go out in the open, then hide and wait for an opportunity. As for your family in Qingzhou, don't worry, the sect has sent people to secretly protect them. Yi Xian stood up and bowed, martial uncle, martial nephew will take his leave first. With that he turned and left the tavern. After leaving the small city, Yi Xian headed straight for the secluded desolate mountain range. 2 hours later Yi Xian arrived at the secluded desolate mountain range. When he arrived his expression suddenly changed. All the trees in the entire mountain range had withered, and the ground had cracked open, with waves of heat seeping out from the cracks. He did not expect that many places in Qingzhou had reached such a level. If the Realm Protection Alliance seized the origin heart, the entire Qingzhou would undoubtedly become like this. At that time, Qingzhou would no longer be able to produce new martial artists, because there would be no spirit qi. A moment later Yi Xian entered the mountain range. This time he had completely concealed himself so no one could discover him. Not long after Yi Xian walked, he stopped and said, Guru on the second floor, can you sense the heart of origin? After a moment of silence, the second floor expert suddenly said, not interested. Not interested. Yi Xian's face darkened. How could he not be interested? He hurriedly said, the origin heart must not fall into the hands of the Realm Protection Alliance. Second floor expert, if you can feel it, we can go and get it first. Not interested. This was the second floor expert's answer. There are benefits. Yi Xian said. What benefits? The second floor expert suddenly asked. The corners of Yi Xian's mouth twitched. What benefits do you want? Bang. At this moment, the second floor of the prison tower suddenly shook violently, and then an angry roar came from the second floor. "Let me out!" Yi Xian. In all fairness, he really did want to let this god on the second floor out. Although this guy was a little hot-tempered, he was still alright. He wasn't particularly bad. The problem was, without the second layer of the Tao Law, he could not do anything. After a moment, Yi Xian smiled bitterly. "Second floor expert, you also know that I have no way to open the second layer of the seal. How about this? When things here are over, I will find the second Tao Law and let you out. When that time comes, you can go wherever you want. What do you think?" The second floor expert was silent for a moment, then said, "You big hoodwinker." Yi Xian's face darkened. "Second floor expert, you have to speak with a conscience. When have I, Yi Xian, ever hoodwinked my own people?" This time the second floor expert did not speak. This was because after following Yi Xian until now, she realized that although Yi Xian was usually a little slippery, he was very good to his own people. After a moment, the second floor expert suddenly said, "Underground." "Underground?" Yi Xian was delighted and hurriedly asked, "You mean the heart of the origin source is underground?" The second floor expert said, "Yes." Yi Xian asked again, "Where is it?" After a moment, the second floor expert said, "Its aura is erratic, we have to find it." Yi Xian smiled bitterly. Naturally, he knew that the heart of the origin source was underground, but the problem was, if he did not know the exact location, how could he find it in such a large underground place? At this moment, the second floor expert said again, "Trick it out." "Trick?" Yi Xian's expression froze. How could he trick it? The second floor expert did not speak. After a moment, Yi Xian sighed softly. This second floor expert was a little unreliable. Did he really think that Yi Xian's mouth was invincible and could do anything? Yi Xian thought for a long time. In the end, he still decided to give it a try. Who knows, he might really trick it out. Yi Xian sat on the ground. He patted the ground and said, "Well, I think you should be able to hear me. It's like this, the Realm Defense Alliance is waiting for you to come out. If you come out, they will definitely capture you and then your end will be very, very miserable. Of course, it's useless if you don't come out, they will force you out." At this point, he paused slightly and then said, "If you believe me, come out and follow me. Don't worry, I will never hurt you, and I will not let the Realm Defense Alliance hurt you." After that, Yi Xian waited quietly. However, there was no movement. At this moment, the second floor expert suddenly said, "I'm afraid you are a fool." Yi Xian, the second floor expert suddenly said angrily, "Tell it that there are benefits, understand? Benefits?" Yi Xian suddenly understood. That's right, if there were no benefits, why would it follow him? Thinking of this, Yi Xian quickly said, "If you follow me, not only can you keep yourself safe, but you can also have whatever you want." After that, Yi Xian waited. However, there was still no movement. Yi Xian said indifferently, "Second floor expert, look, your method is useless." At this time, an illusory beast suddenly appeared in front of Yi Xian. It was the second floor expert. However, it was not her real body. The second floor expert looked coldly at Yi Xian, and the next moment she slammed her claw on the ground. "Come out or not." Boom. The whole ground shook violently. At this time, the second floor expert slammed her claw down again and said angrily, "Come out or not." Boom. The whole ground collapsed. Yi Xian. P.S. A reader invited me to wash her feet, and as I was washing, the girl asked the handsome guy, "Do you need any other service?" I really don't understand what she means. Also, I don't know why the brother took me to wash her feet instead of taking me to eat. In your eyes, am I such a person? Chapter 308. Yi Xian was dumbfounded at the sight of the angry guru on the second floor. Was this girl crazy? She had such a bad temper. Just as the second floor guru continued to slap the ground, a ball of white light suddenly appeared in front of her. This was? Yi Xian was stunned. The second floor guru glanced at Yi Xian. "She's out." After saying that, she disappeared directly. She was out. Yi Xian was dumbfounded. He quickly looked at the ball of white light. In the white light, there was a fist-sized little girl. The little girl was very, very small, wearing a small white doo-doo, and behind her head were two small whips. At this moment, her two little hands were clenched tightly, and she was glaring at Yi Xian. Yi Xian spread his hands. "I didn't do it." The little girl suddenly pointed at Yi Xian angrily. "Human, damn human, you destroyed the earth, destroyed the heaven and earth spiritual energy, you will suffer retribution." Yi Xian said seriously, "I really didn't do this." With that said, he walked towards the little girl, and at this moment, a white light screen blocked in front of him. The little girl looked at Yi Xian warily. "Don't come over or I'll kill you." Yi Xian squeezed out a smile. "I am not a bad person." The little girl glared at Yi Xian. "Bad people always say they're not bad. You have a strong murderous intent, you must have killed many people." "Yi Xian." The little girl looked around warily and then said, "Where's that little girl just now?" "Second floor, Guru." Yi Xian thought for a moment and then pointed to his chest. "She went inside." The little girl looked at Yi Xian's chest and the next moment she flew into a rage. "Human! Do you think I'm as stupid as you? I'm the invincible, the most invincible, the smartest heart of Qingzhou." Yi Xian was dumbfounded. Was this a demon? The little girl still wanted to say something, but the Almighty on the second floor suddenly appeared again. It had to be said that the second floor god's appearance was very cute, especially his pair of crystal blue eyes, which were extremely beautiful. Unfortunately, his temper was 2F** king explosive, exploding at the slightest provocation. Seeing the god on the second floor, the little girl let down her guard. She floated in front of the god and begged, "Can you protect me?" Obviously, she had witnessed the strength of the second floor's Almighty. The Almighty on the second floor glanced at the little girl and then pointed at Yi Xian. "He can do it." The little girl glanced at Yi Xian and shook her head. Too weak. You can't even beat me." Yi Xian was speechless. The Almighty on the second floor pointed at Yi Xian's chest. "It's safe inside." The little girl glanced at Yi Xian's chest and blinked. "Can I go in?" The Almighty on the second floor nodded. The little girl floated in front of Yi Xian and then hugged Yi Xian, trying to push her head against Yi Xian's chest. But no matter how hard she tried, she couldn't get in. Yi Xian was speechless. The little girl turned to look at the Almighty on the second floor, her eyes full of doubt. "She can't." The Almighty on the second floor looked at Yi Xian. "Let her in." Yi Xian hesitated for a while and then said, "Can I go in?" He had never pretended to be a living person before, and he didn't dare to because the mysterious woman had told him that if a living person went in, the prison pagoda would automatically defend itself and kill the other party. The Almighty on the second floor looked at the little girl. "She's not human." The little girl blinked. "Am I not human?" The Almighty on the second floor asked. "Are you?" The little girl looked at her body and then said, "I think I am." The Almighty on the second floor was expressionless. "That's just what you think. Hurry up and go in." The little girl still wanted to say something, but Yi Xian and the Almighty on the second floor's faces suddenly changed. The next moment, the Almighty on the second floor disappeared from the spot, and Yi Xian hurriedly grabbed the little girl and sent her into the prison pagoda. Less than a breath's time after the little girl and the Almighty on the second floor disappeared, an old man suddenly appeared in the sky above Yi Xian. The person who came was Yi Xian's old acquaintance, Mo Xiu. Seeing Yi Xian, Mo Xiu's brows furrowed. "It's you." Yi Xian chuckled. "Elder Mo, long time no see. You're getting younger and younger." Mo Xiu stared at Yi Xian. "Yi Xian, did you see something?" "What?" Yi Xian frowned. "See what?" Mo Xiu stared at Yi Xian, not saying a word. Yi Xian looked around. "Is there something here?" Mo Xiu asked in a low voice. "What are you doing here?" Yi Xian grinned. "Guess." Mo Xiu stared at Yi Xian for a long time, then smiled and said, "Yi Xian, your good days are coming to an end. Also, your blue sword sect's good days are also coming to an end. Once we get our hands on the origin heart of Qingzhou, you will realize how foolish it is to go against my realm defense alliance." Yi Xian shrugged his shoulders. "Wait until I finish cultivating my divine art. At that time, you will discover that targeting me, Yi Xian, was the stupidest decision your realm protection alliance has ever made." Saying this, he grinned. Who doesn't know how to boast? Saying this, he turned around and left. Mo Xiu did not stop Yi Xian because he knew that he could not stop him. Yi Xian. Regardless of whether he was willing to admit it or not, Yi Xian wasn't someone that a true Imperial Magic Realm expert could kill now. At the very least, an ordinary true Imperial Magic Realm expert couldn't. After Yi Xian left, a few old men suddenly appeared by Mo Xiu's side, and one of them said in a low voice, "We sensed the aura of the origin heart earlier, but we didn't notice anything after arriving here. How strange." As he spoke, he glanced at the direction Yi Xian had left. "That person is slightly strange." Mo Xiu spoke indifferently. "He's always been strange." The old man hesitated for a moment and then he said, "Then could the Qingzhou's origin heart have already?" Mo Xiu shook his head. "Absolutely impossible. The origin heart is extremely vigilant, and it's impossible for it to easily trust humans. Moreover, with Yi Xian's strength, it's impossible for him to capture it and take it away without making a sound. Moreover, there are no signs of a battle here. Otherwise, I wouldn't have let him go. The old man thought for a moment and then he nodded. Indeed. If he was able to obtain the origin heart so easily, then it would be too unreasonable. However, his aura is strong and he's even a sword emperor. Even if his potential isn't as great as the firmament sword master from all those years ago, it isn't much inferior. If it's possible, then it's best to eliminate him as soon as possible. Emoshio nodded slightly. Don't worry, the Exalt has a plan. So long as we obtain the origin heart, then we'll immediately annihilate this person and the firmament sword sect. Now we'll let them have their fun today. As soon as he finished speaking, he turned around and left. The old man and the others turned around and left as well. On the other side, after Yi Xian found a place with no one around, he immediately entered the World Prison Pagoda. Within the pagoda, a little girl was looking all around the first level, and her eyes were filled with curiosity. As he gazed at the palm-sized little girl before him, Yi Xian was slightly amused. He hadn't expected that the Qingzhou's origin heart would actually be such a little girl. The little girl looked curiously for a long time, and then she suddenly smiled in the end. Her smile was extremely brilliant and extremely happy. Yi Xian was a little curious. What are you smiling at? The little girl looked at Yi Xian and blinked her eyes. Safe, it's safe here. Finally, I don't have to hide everywhere. And I'll be staying here from now on. Help me get some food, I want some spiritual fruits. Very, very big, very sweet ones. As she spoke, she seemed to have thought of something. With a wave of her hand, a large pile of crystals fell in front of Yi Xian. Purple source crystals. There were more than 1,000 of them. Moreover, these purple source crystals were extremely big, at least twice the size of the ones he had obtained before. The little girl looked at Yi Xian. These are all for you. Go and get me something to eat. Yi Xian gulped, and then kept all the purple source crystals without batting an eyelid. Following that, he nodded his head. Okay, I'll go get them now. If you have any other requests, feel free to tell me. Don't stand on ceremony. Really, don't stand on ceremony? Little girl? Chapter 309. More than 1,000 purple source crystals. Yi Xian really did not expect this little girl to be so rich. Resource crystals were something that even a true defensive magic realm expert needed. Moreover, above the Dharma realm, the common currency among experts was the purple source crystal. This was because resource crystals had enough spiritual energy and were extremely useful. On the contrary, things like top-grade spirit stones were not so useful to experts above the Dharma realm. Of course, top-grade spirit stones were also very useful, because top-grade spirit stones were needed to nurture newcomers. Purple source crystals were too precious. Before reaching the Dharma realm, it would be a waste to use them. Inside the pagoda, the little girl no longer paid attention to Yi Xian. She strolled left and right until she reached the second floor. Even Yi Xian did not know how she got there. And Yi Xian also discovered that the prison pagoda did not reject this little girl at all. Although this little girl was a little wary of Yi Xian, for some reason she was not wary of the great god on the second floor. This made Yi Xian extremely depressed. Was he more terrifying than the great god on the second floor? Yi Xian no longer paid attention to the little girl and left the desolate mountain range. It had to be said that Yi Xian did not expect to obtain the Qingzhou origin heart on this trip. One must know that the Realm Protection Alliance had been fighting for the Qingzhou origin heart for a very long time. For the sake of the Qingzhou origin heart, the Realm Protection Alliance could be said to have racked their brains. If the Realm Protection Alliance knew that the Qingzhou origin heart had fallen into his hands so easily, who knew if they would die of anger? Of course, he naturally would not be stupid enough to tell others about this. If he did, the Realm Protection Alliance would definitely go crazy and come after him. After leaving the desolate mountain range, Yi Xian decided to return to Jiang country to take a look, because he had not been back for a long time. Jiang country's imperial capital. Yi Xian arrived at the gate of Jiang country's imperial capital. The gate was broken and the city walls were in a mess. Moreover, there was the smell of blood and rotting corpses. Yi Xian was silent for a moment before walking in. There were very few people in the city and rotten corpses could be seen everywhere. There were also new corpses and broken limbs everywhere. Yi Xian walked all the way to Blue Waves Academy. It was still the former Blue Waves Academy, but there was no one there. No, someone was there. Yi Xian arrived at the peak of the Blue Wave Palace. And inside the Blue Wave Palace, Yi Xian discovered some people. Not only the Blue Wave Palace, but all the other palaces on the mountain had people. Yi Xian walked into the Blue Waves Palace. There were at least 100 people inside the palace and some of them were still sleeping. When they saw Yi Xian walk in, some people only glanced at him before withdrawing their gazes. Yi Xian glanced at the surroundings and said, "What are all of you doing here?" Everyone looked at him but no one answered. At this moment a man walked out. He was about 20 years old and had a roguish air. The man walked to the front of Yi Xian and sized up Yi Xian. "Are you also here to seek asylum?" "Seek asylum?" Yi Xian was puzzled. "What do you mean?" The man smiled. "What do you mean? You don't know?" "My Blue Waves Academy's dean Yi Xian said that as long as you pay the best quality spirit stones, you can come to my Blue Waves Academy and receive my asylum. You see, Qing province is in chaos now, but no one dares to invade my Blue Waves Academy." Hearing this, Yi Xian's complexion sank. "Are you from Blue Waves Academy?" The man took out a token. "Do you see this? Student token. I am a student of Blue Waves Academy. Now, I am in charge of everything in Blue Waves Academy." Yi Xian glanced at the token and his complexion suddenly became gloomy. This token is real. However, this person is fake. There were not many students in Blue Waves Academy and he knew all of them, but this person was definitely not among them. Yi Xian pondered for a moment, then asked, "How many best quality spirit stones?" The man smiled. 1,000 best quality spirit stones. 1,000. Yi Xian was about to speak when the man grinned. "It's 1,000 best quality spirit stones a day. 1,000 a day." Yi Xian knitted his eyebrows tightly when he heard that. He had sensed that there were at least several thousand people on Blue Waves Mountain. 1,000 a day. After a moment of silence, Yi Xian suddenly turned to the people in the hall. "From now on, you don't have to pay the best quality spirit stones a day." Hearing this, everyone was stunned. But the man in front of Yi Xian looked somewhat sinister. "Brother, are you here to cause trouble?" As he spoke, he pointed at Yi Xian's chest. "Even the cultivators of the divine central continent don't dare to invade my Blue Waves Academy. Who the fuck are you?" Yi Xian smiled. "You're only at the Nether Passage realm. You definitely don't have the ability to do this. You must have someone behind you, right?" The man smiled sinisterly. "Of course I have someone behind me. Behind me is Blue Waves Academy's dean Yi Xian. Have you heard of Yi Xian?" Yi Xian nodded. "Yes, a very very handsome man. I admire him very much." The man sneered. "Since you've heard of him, why don't you get lost?" Yi Xian smiled. "Tell the person behind you to come out." The man wanted to say something but Yi Xian suddenly kicked. Bang bang. The bones in the man's knees instantly shattered, and he fell to his knees in front of Yi Xian. Seeing Yi Xian suddenly attack, everyone in the hall was stunned. Someone dared to attack Blue Waves Academy? In front of Yi Xian, the man roared hysterically. You bastard, how dare you! Dean Yi will not let you off." Yi Xian shook his head. "I think he will let me off." The man stared at Yi Xian with hatred. "He will definitely not let you off. He will definitely exterminate your entire family." Yi Xian touched his nose. "I think he won't exterminate my entire family. I can be sure of this." The man wanted to say something but at this moment, an old man not far away suddenly stood up. He looked at Yi Xian with some disbelief and said with a trembling voice, You are Dean Yi?" "Dean Yi?" Everyone looked at Yi Xian at the same time. At this moment they realized that the person in front of them was somewhat familiar. The reason why they did not recognize Yi Xian was because Yi Xian had left for a long time, and not everyone had seen Yi Xian before. In front of Yi Xian the man also looked at him. As he looked, the man's expression became somewhat ugly, and in the end, his body had already started to tremble. Obviously he had already recognized Yi Xian. The man said with a trembling voice, Your Excellency, I was as blind as a bat. Yi Xian said with a smile, "Tell me who told you to do this?" The man's expression became somewhat ugly and he hesitated for a long time and finally shook his head. "If I don't speak I will die, if I speak I will die and my entire family will die." Yi Xian said indifferently, "You want to bargain with me?" The man hurriedly said, "I dare not, I just hope that your excellency can protect my family." Yi Xian smiled, "If you really want to protect your family then you should commit suicide. Once you commit suicide, I believe that those people behind you will definitely not cause trouble for your family. However, you dare not commit suicide." The man's expression became somewhat ugly, and just when he was about to speak, Yi Xian suddenly pointed his fingers together. The man's right arm was directly sent flying. Blood spurted out like a fountain. The man's face instantly turned pale. Yi Xian smiled, "You still won't speak?" The man was about to speak but at this moment, a middle-aged man nearby suddenly said, "I know who it is." Yi Xian faced the middle-aged man, and at this moment the man in front of him hurriedly said, "It's..." At this moment, a ray of sword light had already pierced the man's forehead. The man looked at Yi Xian in a daze. Yi Xian smiled, "If you had admitted your mistake from the beginning and confessed, then I would have let you live. Unfortunately, it's too late now." After saying that, he walked to the middle-aged man nearby, and the latter slightly bowed, "Greetings, Din Yi." Din Yi. Everyone hurriedly bowed to Yi Xian when they heard the middle-aged man, and some of their eyes even revealed undisguised excitement and happiness. "Yi Xian. He's back again." Yi Xian smiled, "There's no need for all of this." As he spoke, he gazed at the middle-aged man. The middle-aged man spoke in a low voice. "The power behind that man is a group of mercenaries from the Central Divine Prefecture. They're staying in the Imperial Palace of the Jiang Kingdom right now, and they're in charge of the Imperial capital." The Imperial Palace of the Jiang Kingdom. Yi Xian nodded slightly and then he turned around and left. He suddenly stopped when he arrived at the entrance and then he said, "All of you'll be staying here from now onward, and you don't have to pay top-grade spirit stones. However, if we return one day, then I hope that all of you can leave at that time. This place is for all of you to stay temporarily, not for all of you. I hope all of you understand." As soon as he finished speaking, he left Darkwave Hall and headed straight for the Imperial Palace of the Jiang Kingdom. Yi Xian was very clearly aware that a person's heart wasn't content. On many occasions when he gave others convenience, they would take it for granted. Moreover, if he didn't deal with many things well, then it would cause a huge amount of trouble in the future. It didn't take long for Yi Xian to arrive at the Imperial Palace of the Jiang Kingdom. At this moment, the Imperial Palace of the Jiang Kingdom was in a very miserable state because everyone had left. Yi Xian hadn't intended to ask them to return right now. Because the Realm Defense Alliance hadn't been dealt with yet, so it was very likely that they would be targeted by the Realm Defense Alliance if they returned. After he entered the Imperial Palace, Yi Xian went straight to the Supreme Harmony Hall. It didn't take long for a man to obstruct his path, and the man gazed coldly at Yi Xian. "Fuck off." Yi Xian smiled and then he raised his sword and swung it. The man's head instantly flew into the air. It didn't take long for a few dozen people to charge out from all directions and surround Yi Xian. At the same time, a middle-aged man walked over to Yi Xian. He glanced at Yi Xian with a slightly vigilant expression. "I'm the leader of the Hunyuan mercenary group. May I know who you are?" Yi Xian smiled. "You're the one who occupied Blue Waves Academy and collected the so-called protection fee every day?" The middle-aged man's eyes narrowed slightly. "You're from Blue Waves Academy?" Yi Xian nodded, "Yes." The middle-aged man gazed at Yi Xian for a long time, and then he said, "Your Excellency, forgive me for speaking bluntly, but Yi Xian has already died in the Central Divine Prefecture, and even his corpse has been eaten by wild dogs. Your Excellency is risking your life for Blue Waves Academy. It's not worth it." Yi Xian was speechless. "P.S. My friends, I haven't had any holidays during the new year. Just consider it as a holiday. Because I have some matters to deal with during this period, so I can't stay at home every day. Thank you." Chapter 310. I died in the Central Divine Prefecture? Yi Xian was flabbergasted. "Are you sure that Yi Xian died in the Central Divine Prefecture?" The middle-aged man laughed coldly. "How could it be fake? Yi Xian offended the Realm Defense Alliance, so how could he have survived the Realm Defense Alliance's bounty?" Yi Xian nodded. "You're right." As he spoke, he suddenly pressed the fingers of his right hand together and swept them forward. A sword howl resounded, and then a ray of light flashed. In an instant, the mercenaries around Yi Xian and the middle-aged man were instantly slashed into two at the waist. The middle-aged man was stunned by this scene. An instant later, he gazed at Yi Xian with terror. You're Yi Xian." Yi Xian smiled. "You're right. I'll reward you with a sword strike." As soon as he finished speaking, he waved his hand. The middle-aged man's head flew into the air while blood sprayed out like a fountain. The middle-aged man's eyes were wide open. Obviously he died with everlasting regret. Yi Xian took the spatial rings of everyone here and glanced at them. There were all sorts of things within them and there were over 1.6 billion top-grade spirit stones. 1.6 billion. In the Qingzhou region, it was already very very terrifying to be able to have 1.6 billion. It was obvious how many cities these fellows had plundered during this period of time. Yi Xian took the spatial rings and was just about to leave. Suddenly, the voice of the god on the second floor resounded. "She went to the fourth floor." The fourth floor. Yi Xian was stunned, and then he hurriedly entered the pagoda. The little girl wasn't on the first floor, nor was she on the second floor, nor was she on the third floor. The fourth floor. Yi Xian was stunned. How did she get up there? I don't know. This was the answer from the god on the second floor. Yi Xian gulped. This second floor guru, this is not normal. How could she have possibly entered? How would I know? The guru on the second floor was a little angry. At this moment, a white light suddenly flashed on the first level. Soon the little girl appeared in front of Yi Xian. Yi Xian quickly asked, You went to the fourth floor? The little girl nodded. Yi Xian asked again, What's on the fourth floor? The little girl glanced at Yi Xian. It told me not to tell you. It also told me to be careful of you. You are a very thick-skinned person. As she spoke, she flew in front of Yi Xian, and then pinched Yi Xian's face with her small hand. She said with some doubt, It's not very thick. Yi Xian was speechless. At this moment, the little girl suddenly stretched out her little hand. Where's the spirit fruit? Yi Xian hurriedly took out some spirit fruits and gave them to the little girl. When she saw the spirit fruits, the little girl instantly beamed with joy and grabbed them. Unfortunately, the spirit fruits were too big, even bigger than her body. However, this didn't stop her from eating them. In just a few bites, the spirit fruit had been completely devoured by her. The little girl stretched out her hand again. Clearly she wanted more. Yi Xian placed all of the spiritual fruits in front of the little girl. These were his trophies from the battles he had won in the past. He didn't sell all the spirit fruits to the third-floor master of the Drunken Immortal building, but kept some for himself. Seeing so many spirit fruits, the little girl was incredibly excited. She picked up a spirit fruit and started munching on it. At the side, Yi Xian smiled and said, Is it delicious? The little girl nodded her head. Yes, it's delicious. Yi Xian smiled and asked, What's on the fourth floor? Little girl shaking his head, he said, I can't tell you. Yi Xian said seriously, Aren't we friends? Friends? The little girl glanced at Yi Xian. Then what is it? Yi Xian. The little girl looked at Yi Xian and then shook her head. You're a human. Humans are the most untrustworthy. Not a single human is good. Saying that, she seemed to think of something and put the spirit fruit aside, her expression a little sad. This place was originally fine, but you people wantonly destroyed it. A lot of blood flowed into the ground. You people are really bad. After saying that, she even glared at Yi Xian. Yi Xian was silent. Destruction. Obviously, because of the wanton destruction of the Qingzhou continent, the outside was no longer suitable for this little girl to live in. Moreover, the Realm Protection Alliance was looking for her everywhere. If she fell into the hands of the Realm Protection Alliance, she definitely wouldn't have a good ending. Yi Xian collected his thoughts and smiled slightly. Little girl. I still don't know your name. The little girl shook her head. I won't tell you that my name is Xiaolinger. Yi Xian nodded. Okay, I won't know your name is Xiaolinger. Xiaolinger looked at Yi Xian and blinked, feeling that something was wrong. But she didn't think much of it and continued to nibble on the spirit fruit. Yi Xian also didn't ask Xiaolinger what was on the fourth floor, because it was meaningless to ask more. When he got the Dao Law, he would naturally know what was on the fourth floor. However, this little girl could actually go to the fourth floor. This really shocked him. Since she could go to the fourth floor, it was possible that she could go to the fifth, sixth, the ninth floor. Yi Xian was a little curious about what was locked up on the ninth floor. After playing with Xiaolinger for a while, Yi Xian left the prison tower. At this time, the voice of the great god on the second floor sounded again. You must bring that woman back as soon as possible, otherwise you're finished. The mysterious woman. Yi Xian smiled bitterly. Where could he find the mysterious woman? But to be honest, he really missed the mysterious woman a little. After a while, Yi Xian shook his head and turned to leave. After leaving the palace of Jiang country, Yi Xian went to the Devil Sect. At this time, the overall strength of the Devil Sect could be said to have skyrocketed, because in Qingzhou, they could develop unscrupulously without anyone stopping them. Not only that, but they also had the support of the Realm Protection Alliance. Under such circumstances, the strength of all the disciples in the Devil Sect was greatly improved. In the main hall of the Devil Sect, Ku Mingshu suddenly opened his eyes and saw a man in a gray robe standing not far away from him. The man in the gray robe just stood there without any aura, as if he didn't exist. Seeing this person, Ku Mingshu's face changed and he quickly got up. Senior? The man in the gray robe nodded slightly. Sect leader Ku, how have you been? Ku Mingshu quickly said, May I know why you're here, senior? The man in the gray robe said indifferently, Sect leader Ku should know about the matter between the Pale Sword Sect and the Realm Protection Alliance, right? Ku Mingshu nodded slightly. Yes. Right, my devil sect won't participate in it. The man in the gray robe spoke indifferently. Sect leader Ku, if I were you, I would stop right now and leave Qingzhou. Ku Mingshu frowned when he heard this. The devil sect was developing rapidly right now, so it would be a great loss to leave now. The man in the gray robe said, Sect leader Ku, if you're unwilling to leave now, then your devil sect won't be able to leave in the future. Ku Mingshu gazed at the man in the gray robe. Senior, please tell me what to do. The man in the gray robe said, Now that the Green Province is in chaos, the Origin Heart is about to appear. Once the Origin Heart appears, your devil sect and blood sect will no longer have any value to the Realm Defense Alliance. At that time, the slightest mistake will cause your devil sect and blood sect to be doomed eternally. Ku Mingshu hesitated for a moment and said, I don't think so. Exalt Lu promised my devil sect that the entire Qingzhou will belong to my devil sect in the future. You believe that? The man in the gray robe spoke coldly. Don't you know what the Realm Protection Alliance is like? Right now they need your devil sect. Therefore they will agree to any of your requests. However, once they obtain the Origin Source Heart, your devil sect will no longer have any value to them. As he spoke, he paused slightly before he continued. Moreover, the Quintessence Core is about to emerge in the Pine Prefecture. Once it does, then the Pine Prefecture will become a huge vortex. If your devil sect continues staying here, then it's impossible to guarantee that you won't be swept into the vortex. At that time, it'll be difficult for your devil sect to leave. Ku Mingshu was still hesitating. The man in the gray robe spoke abruptly, Since sect leader Ku isn't willing to leave, then I won't say anything further. As soon as he finished speaking, he turned around and left. Right at this moment, Ku Mingshu suddenly said, Senior, please wait. The man in the gray robe stopped, and Ku Mingshu asked, May I ask if there are any other powers besides the Pale Sword Sect that are acting against the Realm Protection Alliance? The man in the gray robe spoke indifferently. What do you think? Ku Mingshu hesitated for a moment, and then he bowed slightly. Senior, please enlighten me. The man in the gray robe fell silent for a moment, and then he said, The Profound Gate has expressed its intention to join us. Ku Mingshu was shocked when he heard this, and he was about to speak when the man in the gray robe had vanished. Within the hall, Ku Mingshu sat on the chair and fell silent for a very long time. At this moment, his heart was like a tempestuous storm. The Profound Gate. That's an extremely mysterious power, and it's definitely extremely strong. If it was just the Pale Sword Sect, then it would definitely be unable to defeat the Realm Protection Alliance. But if the Profound Gate was included, then it would be difficult to say. Moreover, there might be more than one Profound Gate. At this moment, Ku Mingshu was in a dilemma. Should I leave or not? If he left now, then it would truly be a loss for him. But if he didn't leave, then he really didn't want to get involved in the muddy waters of Qingzhou. Within the hall, Ku Mingshu fell silent for a very long time, and then he shook his head and sighed. There was a pitch-black vortex somewhere in the starry sky. Suddenly, a star cloud shuttle flew out from within the pitch-black vortex. A middle-aged man and an old man stood on the star cloud shuttle. The old man glanced at the surroundings and frowned deeply. It's so remote. The person we're looking for shouldn't be here, right? The middle-aged man shook his head and smiled. We can't miss any place. If we still can't find him, then once that person gets angry, our Spirit Void Star Palace will probably be completely destroyed. When he heard this, the old man seemed to have thought of something, and fear instantly appeared in his eyes. That woman. That terrifying woman. The middle-aged man shook his head slightly. I wonder where exactly that person is. Alas. The old man said in a low voice, This world should be under the jurisdiction of the Realm Protection Alliance. Should we go look for them and ask them to help us search? Realm Protection Alliance? The middle-aged man looked at the old man. Why haven't I heard of it? The old man said indifferently, A third-rate power. It's normal that you haven't heard of it. The middle-aged man nodded. Then let's go meet them. I hope we'll be able to gain something this time. Otherwise, I don't dare to return. In next to no time, the star cloud shuttle vanished into the boundless starry sky. Chapter 311. After leaving the Devil Sect, Yi Xian immediately entered a mountain range. This time he had come to the Devil Sect out of compassion. As long as the Devil Sect was still in Qingzhou, there would definitely be countless people who would suffer. Although he could not change the current situation in Qingzhou, He was still willing to help the countless living beings in Qingzhou as long as it was within his power. As for himself, there was only one thing to do now, and that was to cultivate. The Realm Defense Alliance would soon make a big move, and before that he had to improve his strength. Although there was the Pale Sword sect, countless facts had told him that people could only rely on themselves. Only by relying on himself could he be relied on. In the mountain range, Yi Xian came to a small stream and sat on a boulder beside the stream. A moment later, a small empty character suddenly appeared between his brows. Space Dao Law. He was now in the Dharma Defensive Realm, and what he needed to do was to break through to the true Dharma Defensive Realm. Although he did not have a spirit sword, he wanted to give it a try. The so-called true Dharma Defensive Realm was to be able to control space. Regarding space, Yi Xian actually did not know much because his Dharma Defensive Realm had been improved by relying on the Space Dao Law. To put it bluntly, it was a little overstated. Since Yi Xian began to sense everything around him. He felt the wind, the earth, the river, and also space. This space was a little illusory and even a little mysterious. When a warrior cultivated to a certain level, they could sense space, but feeling it did not mean that they understood it or recognized it. Gradually, the space around Yi Xian began to fluctuate. At this moment, space was no longer illusory but could be seen with the naked eye. With the help of the Space Dao Law, Yi Xian began to change the space around him. Soon, the space around him became distorted, and he himself also began to distort. However, Yi Xian stopped very soon because he had felt a sharp pain. Not daring to experiment on himself, Yi Xian began to change the space in front of him. Gradually, the river in front of him began to distort. A few days later, the Devil Sect suddenly announced that they were leaving Qingzhou. On the Qing State path, the Devil Sect leader Ku Mingshu's cloud ship suddenly stopped, and an old man silently appeared in front of Ku Mingshu. The person who had arrived was precisely Mo Xiu. Ku Mingshu smiled and said, "Elder Mo." Mo Xiu glanced at Ku Mingshu and said calmly, "Sect leader Ku, why did you suddenly announce that we're leaving the Azure State?" Ku Mingshu smiled and said, "Nothing, I just feel that it's time to go back." Mo Xiu's eyes narrowed. "Is that true?" Ku Mingshu nodded, "Of course." Mo Xiu stared at Ku Mingshu for a long time. In the end, he shook his head and sighed, "Sect leader Ku, the old man once promised you that once you get your hands on the Origin Heart, Qingzhou will belong to your Devil Sect. If you leave now, all your previous efforts will go to waste." Ku Mingshu laughed and said, "The Devil faction is not greedy. The Azure Prefecture is too big for us to swallow." Mo Xiu said in a low voice, "Brother Ku, tell me honestly, did someone say something to you? Or is someone threatening you?" Ku Mingshu shook his head and smiled, "Brother Mo, you're overthinking it." Mo Xiu nodded lightly. "Since it's like that, then the old man won't say anything further. Brother Ku, take care." Ku Mingshu cupped his fists and said, "Farewell." Just like that, the Devil Sect left the Azure Prefecture. In midair, Mo Xiu stared fixedly at the Devil Sect's army that had vanished into the distance, and his expression was gloomy. No one knew what he was thinking. Meanwhile, an old man appeared by Mo Xiu's side and he said in a low voice, "There's something strange about this." Mo Xiu's expression was gloomy. "I presume that the Pale Sword Sect did something to make the Devil Sect decide to leave the Azure Prefecture." The old man asked, "What should we do now?" Mo Xiu fell silent for a moment and then he said, "Send the World Protectors into the Azure Prefecture, and we'll deal with the rest ourselves. Besides that, the Exalt Lord has given the order that the Origin Heart will appear in a few days, and the Pale Sword Sect might make a huge move. During this period of time, transfer all the true Imperial Law Realm experts back and ask them to swiftly rush to the Azure Prefecture." The old man said in a low voice, "Is this a decisive battle?" Mo Xiu's voice was fierce. "If the Pale Sword Sect dares to stop us from obtaining the Origin Heart, then we will fight to the death." With that, he turned around and disappeared into the horizon. In a certain small city, a middle-aged man walked into a tavern. It was drizzling outside the tavern. The middle-aged man sat down in front of an old man who bowed slightly. "Senior brother." These two people were Zhang Xian and Qin Beihan. Qin Beihan nodded. "Has the Realm Protector Alliance made any moves?" Zhang Xian nodded. "I just received news that they have already begun to mobilize all the true Imperial Law Realm experts. It seems that they want to transfer these people to the Azure Prefecture. It seems that the Origin Heart is about to appear." Qin Beihan lifted the cup in front of him and took a small sip, before he smiled and said, "It seems that the Realm Protector Alliance is determined to obtain the Azure Prefecture Origin Heart." Zhang Xian said in a low voice, What do they want the origin heart for? I really can't figure it out. Qin Beihan said with smile. This origin heart has a lot of uses. However, they should have another goal, but I don't know what it is. In addition, if I'm not wrong, they should also want the divine central continent's origin heart. Zhang Xian's expression changed slightly. If they want the divine central continent's origin heart, will the celestial sect of wonders and the aristocratic families of the upper world agree? Qin Beihan shook his head and smiled. You are still so naive. Think about it, if the Realm Protector Alliance manages to deal with these forces, then who in the divine central continent can stop them? As long as the Realm Protector Alliance is willing to pay the price, they can be dealt with. Zhang Xian's expression darkened. As Qin Beihan said, as long as the celestial sect of wonders, the 10,000 Beast Mountain range, and the aristocratic families of the upper world do not object, no one in the divine central continent can resist the Realm Protector Alliance. Zhang Xian asked again, what should we do now? Qin Beihan said softly, tell them to get ready. Once the origin heart appears, even if we can't snatch it, we must destroy it. We must not let it fall into the hands of the Realm Protector Alliance. Zhang Xian nodded slightly. As if thinking of something, he hesitated for a moment and then asked, Senior brother, there is something I don't know if I should ask. Qin Beihan smiled. Then don't ask. Zhang Xian said in a low voice, I still have to ask. Otherwise I won't feel comfortable. Senior brother, if I'm not wrong, when Yi Xian entered my Blue Sword sect, you should have already discovered his true identity, but you did not expose him. Moreover, you protected him with the power of the entire sect and made an enemy of the Realm Protector Alliance. At this point he glanced at Qin Beihan and did not say anything else. Qin Beihan smiled. You want to say that I have another purpose? Zhang Xian nodded. Qin Beihan said softly, I have a purpose. Zhang Xian looked at Qin Beihan. Qin Beihan smiled. First, we will eventually fight the Realm Protector Alliance. It is unavoidable. You should know very well how Master died. Master. Hearing this, Zhang Xian's expression suddenly darkened. Because the Master of the Seven Sword Immortals had been ambushed and killed by the Realm Protector Alliance. However, the Realm Protector Alliance had never admitted to it. But everyone knew that it was done by the Realm Protector Alliance. Qin Beihan said softly, back then eldest senior brother wanted to lead the entire sect to fight the Realm Protector Alliance, but I stopped him. At this point he shook his head and smiled. Because of this, eldest senior brother still can't get over it. And little junior sister, after that she no longer interfered in any matters of the sect. She locked herself in the Cloudy Sword Hall every day, and junior sister Gu, she has been guarding Master's body until now. Zhang Xian sighed. To tell you the truth, I also blamed you back then. But I have thought it through these years. Back then we were just sword emperors. If we had followed eldest senior brother, our Blue Sword sect would have been annihilated. Qin Beihan shook his head slightly. In fact, how could I not hate myself? Master adopted us all, especially me. I still remember back then I was just a beggar on the side of the road. It was Master who brought me back to Blue Sword sect, let me practice the sword, let me eat my fill and wear my clothes, and when Master died I was powerless. The feeling. As he spoke, he raised the cup in front of him and drained it in one gulp. Zhang Xian also raised his cup and drained it in one gulp. His eyes had already turned icy cold. After a moment, Qin Beihan shook his head and smiled. No matter what, it's time to put an end to all the grudges of the past. At this point he looked at Zhang Xian and smiled. I haven't answered your question. The reason why I accepted Yi Xian was indeed a little selfish. He is quite mysterious, especially the mysterious woman behind him. He is definitely not an ordinary person. Great Sword Immortal? Zhang Xian asked. Qin Beihan shook his head. If it was just a Great Sword Immortal, the Realm Protector Alliance would not be so afraid. It should be someone who surpasses the Great Sword Immortal. Hearing this, Zhang Xian's expression suddenly turned solemn. Surpassing the Great Sword Immortal. This kind of person was rare in the Blue Firmament world. There were very few of them in history. Qin Beihan continued, my selfish motive is that since his enemy is also the Realm Protector Alliance, we should form an alliance with him and hope that the mysterious woman behind him will act. However, after interacting with him, I found that he has a good temperament and values relationships. He is also a good seedling. So, I sincerely hope that he will sincerely join my Blue Sword sect. Zhang Xian nodded. He is indeed a good person, but he is a little hot-tempered and can't stand being bullied. Qin Beihan laughed heartily. If our founder could stand being bullied, he would not have killed the Realm Protector Alliance's Supreme Lord Lu. If he did not use that sword, our Blue Sword sect and the Realm Protector Alliance would not be at each other's throats today. However, if he did not use that sword, our Blue Sword sect would have to lower our heads for the rest of our lives. Song Xian shook his head and smiled. That's true. Who cares if he is hot-tempered or not, as long as he has the ability? Qin Beihan nodded slightly. If the Origin Heart appears, tell that kid not to participate in this matter. It's best to have him hide. If we win, it's naturally good, but if we lose, we have to leave some incense for the Pale Sword sect. As they spoke, the two of them looked at each other and smiled. Then they picked up their wine glasses and drained it in one gulp. P.S. How many readers came from Mighty Heavenly Sword Domain? Or could it be that most of the readers were new readers? Chapter 312. Beside the stream, Yi Xian was still sitting quietly. He had been sitting here for 3 days and 3 nights. There were no shortcuts on the path of cultivation. Even if there were, one could not be taken. This was one of Yi Xian's realizations. Because at this moment he realized that his Dharma defensive realm was actually not very powerful. Without the Space Dao Law, strictly speaking, he could not be considered a Dharma defensive realm. The Space Dao Law could be used as a reference, but it could not be relied on. 3 days later, Yi Xian no longer used the Space Dao Law, but relied on his own ability to comprehend space. And after a few days, Yi Xian could already change space without the Space Dao Law, but he still could not disintegrate space. To reach the true Dharma defensive realm, he must disintegrate space, in other words, control space. While Yi Xian was cultivating, he did not notice that Xiao Linger was currently climbing to the top of the prison pagoda. It was not that she did not want to fly, but that she could not fly. Or rather, it was very strenuous for her to fly. Who knew what she was going to do up there? After an unknown period of time, Xiao Linger finally climbed to the top. At the top, there were 3 swords stuck in the ground. The 3 swords were inserted quietly at the top of the pagoda, as if they were suppressing something. Xiao Linger climbed to the front of the 3 swords and glanced at them. Finally, her gaze fell on the sword in the middle. When she saw this sword, Xiao Linger's eyes lit up, because there was a stick of candied hawthorn hanging on the hilt of this sword. Xiao Linger took the candied hawthorn off, peeled off the parchment and licked it. In an instant, her whole body quivered. So sour. Xiao Linger blinked, her expression a little interesting. After a moment, she licked it again and her head trembled. Although it was sour, it seemed delicious. Just like that, Xiao Linger sat at the top of the tower, leisurely licking her sugar-coated haws. After a while, she suddenly looked at the bottom of the sword in the middle. There was a small box placed there. The box was very, very small, only the size of a palm. If one did not look carefully, they would not have noticed it. Xiao Linger climbed up to the box. There was a small piece of white paper on the box. There were only 2 small words on it. Strictly speaking, they were not words at all. They were twisted and crooked. These 2 small words were, white. Stay. Xiao Linger did not recognize these 2 words at all. She gently opened the small box and no one knew what she saw. Xiao Linger clapped her hands excitedly at the top of the tower. Not long after the Devil sect left, the Blood sect also left Qing province. As soon as the 2 sects left, some of the cultivators of the Divine Central Continent noticed that something was amiss. Thus they too left or went into hiding. However, Qingzhou did not calm down. On the contrary, it was still as chaotic as ever. This time it was the native cultivators of Qingzhou who were in chaos. Everyone knew that there was no order in Qingzhou at the moment. No one cared about anything. Under such circumstances, many people began to act recklessly. Most of the time, it was their own people who caused the most trouble. A few days later, a group of mysterious experts suddenly appeared in the lands of Qingzhou. Then more than a dozen cities were suddenly massacred. Not only that, but cultivators in many places also died tragically for no reason. At this moment, the entire Qingzhou was in a state of panic. As for the desolate mountain range, the entire mountain range suddenly began to crumble layer by layer. Not only that, but a faint red appeared on the ground. 30 people gathered in the sky above the desolate mountain range, and their leader was none other than High Lord Lu. Beside High Lord Lu was Emoshio. And the people behind them were all true defensive Dharma realm experts. High Lord Lu looked down. This chapter is not finished. Please continue. Fong. Has everything been set up? Emoshio nodded slightly. Yes. As soon as the Origin Heart appears, it will not be able to escape. High Lord Lu looked around. What's the Blue Sword sect's movement? Emoshio said in a low voice. I've received news that Blue Mountain's 7-sword immortals have left Qingzhou. At this time I estimate they are already in Qingzhou. It seems they are prepared to fight to the death with us. High Lord Lu lightly said, no matter. This Blue Sword sect has indeed let them live comfortably for too long. Emoshio nodded. Not only did Blue Sword sect want revenge on the Realm Protection Alliance, but the Realm Protection Alliance also wanted revenge on Blue Sword sect. One had to know that the corpse of a High Lord from the Realm Protection Alliance was still hanging at the foot of Blue Mountain. At this time High Lord Lu said, no matter what, this origin heart is of great use to His Excellency. There must be no mistakes. Emoshio nodded. Understood. I'll go arrange it. Finished speaking, he turned around and left. In the sky, High Lord Lu slowly closed his eyes. In fact, he wasn't worried about Blue Sword sect because he knew Blue Sword sect inside out. What he was truly worried about was the mysterious woman behind Yi Xian. That woman was too terrifying. Even thinking about it, he still felt a lingering fear. A moment later, High Lord Lu suddenly opened his eyes. Send someone to investigate Yi Xian's whereabouts. A powerhouse immediately turned around and left. Somewhere in the mountain range, Yi Xian was still sitting quietly next to a small stream. He had been sitting here for quite some time. Nighttime. In the sky, stars filled the sky and a bright moon hung high in the sky. The earth was silent. In Yi Xian's ears, there was only the sound of the flowing river. In the middle of the night, Yi Xian's right hand slowly lifted up. In an instant, the space around his raised hand actually began to distort. Yi Xian's right palm opened and the space immediately returned to normal. At this time, his right hand lightly pressed down on the river in front of him. In an instant, the river in front of his palm actually disappeared. Space decomposition. By the river, Yi Xian took a deep breath. Right now, he had not reached the true defense realm, but he already had the power of the true defense realm. The reason why he had not reached the true defense realm was because he did not have a heaven-class sword to devour. Realms did not rely solely on enlightenment. Every advancement required various aspects. Moreover, the true defense realm did not only involve space decomposition. One's soul, mental strength, physical body, and all other aspects had to reach a certain level to be called the true defense realm. However, right now he only lacked swords. As long as he had enough swords, he could step into the true defense realm at any time. Yi Xian did not leave. He was still sitting by the river. At this moment he suddenly thought of Yu Qi's words. What was a sword celestial? The so-called sword celestial referred to having one's own Tao of the sword. And what was his Tao of the sword? He had thought about this question before, but he did not think it through thoroughly. Sword. Why did he want to learn the sword? In the beginning, his motive for learning the sword was very simple. He just wanted to become stronger and he felt that swordsman was very cool. But now he realized that the path of the sword Tao was much more complicated than he had imagined. Especially when he was comprehending in the sword tomb of the Pale Sword sect, he understood that the Tao of the sword actually contained too much. Moreover, everyone's Tao of the sword had its own uniqueness. Then what was his Tao of the sword? At this thought, Yi Xian gradually became dazed. His sword intent was the good and evil sword intent. As for good and evil, he actually did not understand it very well. This was because the matters of the world were too complicated. Many times, good was not necessarily evil and evil was not necessarily good. Good person? Bad person? If this chapter is not finished, please continue to the next page. Looking at it from different angles might result in different results. But what about the Tao of the sword? What was his Tao of the sword? Yi Xian asked himself again. There was no answer. Not only was there no answer, but it was also a little chaotic. Just like that, Yi Xian sat in silence for an entire night. At daybreak, Yi Xian seemed to have thought of something and he took out a wooden figure. This wooden figure was none other than Yi Ling. Looking at the wooden figure, Yi Xian's lips curled into a smile. Soon, a memory of the past surfaced in his mind. It was something that happened many years ago. He carried his younger sister on his back and went shopping. At that time, his younger sister had 2 pigtails and wore a floral dress. At that time, he was already the heir of the Yi family, so he did not have to live a hard life. Yi Xian carried Yi Ling to a noodle shop. The 2 siblings sat down and Yi Ling looked at him with a bright smile. Soon, 2 bowls of steaming hot noodles were served. The siblings each had a fried egg in their bowl. Yi Ling picked up the noodles and started eating, while Yi Xian looked at her quietly. His face was also full of smiles. Very satisfied. Very happy. Because he could give his younger sister nice clothes and good food. Moreover, no one in the Yi family dared to bully his younger sister anymore. After a while, Yi Ling picked up the bowl and drank the soup. As if thinking of something, she looked at Yi Xian and grinned. "Brother, why aren't you eating?" Yi Xian smiled. "Are you happy?" Yi Ling hurriedly went to his side and hugged him tightly. At this moment, Yi Xian suddenly gasped. Yi Ling quickly asked, "What's wrong, brother?" Yi Xian smiled. "I'm fine." Yi Ling nodded and then leaned her head on Yi Xian's shoulder. She did not notice that there was blood slowly dripping from Yi Ling's back. As the heir of the Yi family, in order to fight for the interests of the family, he had to fight with the other families almost every day. Getting injured was a common occurrence. However, he was very satisfied, because he could change his younger sister's fate through his own efforts. Until now, he could not forget the life he and his younger sister had led when that woman left. At that time, his younger sister could not even afford a bowl of noodles. Not to mention a bowl of noodles, the siblings almost starved to death several times. The saddest thing for a man was to not have the ability to protect the people around him. At that time he was still young. In the face of this sudden change, he was at a loss and did not know what to do. In fact, the one who was the most afraid at that time was not Yi Ling, but him. Because looking at his younger sister, he did not know what to do in the future. At that time, it was the time of his life that he was the most afraid, confused, and fearful. Under the sunset, Yi Xian suddenly pulled Yi Ling out of the noodle house. Yi Ling tightly held onto Yi Xian's hand and the siblings slowly walked into the distance. On the way. "Brother, can we eat noodles every day in the future?" "Yes." "Really? Really?" "Brother promises you." "Well, then I want to add more eggs, one at a time." "No problem." "Hee, brother is the best. By the way, brother, do you know what my biggest wish is?" "What is it?" "Hee, I want to open a noodle house in the future. I will make noodles for you every day." End of this chapter. Chapter 313. By the river, the smile on Yi Xian's face gradually widened. Sister. Be it in the past or now, he did not have too many thoughts. He only wanted his sister to be well. Of course now he also hoped that more people would be well. Tuoba Yen Jiangjiu Shaoan Jianji Mo Yunqi Ling Han, and the others, he hoped that everyone would be well. Of course he also hoped that he would be well. However, it was not an easy task for everyone around him to be well. Strength. He had to have strength. Powerful strength. When he thought of this, Yi Xian suddenly came to a realization. Sword path? What kind of sword path did he want? Actually, he only wanted to become stronger. Strength. When he thought of this, a sword intent suddenly swept out from Yi Xian's body. Good and evil sword intent. Two sword intents spread out from Yi Xian's body and drifted in all directions. The two sword intents drifted in all directions like a gust of wind. Soon the entire mountain range was filled with Yi Xian's sword intent. And his sword intent was also quietly changing. Strength. A man must have strength. If he didn't have strength, he would be nothing. Even if he had strength, he might not be able to keep it a secret. Meanwhile, Yi Xian's sword path was the path of an expert. The sword was only a way for him to become stronger. Of course, he also liked the sword. What was his sword path? This time Yi Xian had an answer. His sword path was the path of an expert. How strong must he be? He was not ambitious. As long as he was strong enough that no one dared to bully him, he would be free. When he thought of this, Yi Xian stood up. The moment he stood up, the sword intents in the entire mountain range suddenly gathered towards Yi Xian. Soon, the sword intents all surged into Yi Xian's body. Yi Xian's expression suddenly changed, and he quickly sat down cross-legged. He opened his right hand and a sword suddenly appeared in his palm. In next to no time, the sword in his palm started to tremble violently. At the same time, strands of sword intent surged incessantly into the sword, and the sword in his hand trembled even more violently as if it was on the verge of shattering. Yi Xian's expression was solemn because he noticed that his sword intent was raging within his body at this moment. He'd utilized his sword to draw it out, but it didn't seem to have any effect. What was going on? Yi Xian quickly asked, "Second floor guru?" The Almighty on the second floor did not reply. Yi Xian asked again, "If you don't speak, I'm going to die." At this moment he was extremely uncomfortable. It felt like his body was about to explode. At this moment the second floor guru suddenly said, "Sword intent changes guide." Idiot. How can I guide it? Yi Xian was burning with anxiety. I don't know either. Hearing this, Yi Xian was so angry that he almost went berserk. If you don't know, then why did you say it? Without asking the second floor guru any further, Yi Xian quickly released his sword intent again. Soon, his sword intent floated around like before, and at this moment he felt much more relaxed. However, those sword intents, At this moment Yi Xian seemed to have thought of something and he frowned. My body can no longer contain my sword intent. Does this mean that in the future, my sword intent will become one with heaven and earth? At this point his expression suddenly changed. Sword immortal? Have I become a sword immortal? With that said, this chapter is not over, please continue to the next page. He pointed his fingers forward. A ray of sword light shot out, and a giant rock dozens of feet away was instantly pierced. Yi Xian was stunned. Because he realized that the feeling was different. This feeling was very strange, very strange, because when he used the sword just now, the speed of the sword was much faster than before. Not only that, he felt that there was something else in this sword. Spirituality. He thought of this word. Yi Xian turned around and pointed his finger again. The moment he pointed, the sword on the ground in the distance suddenly flew up, and the next moment, it directly pierced through an ancient tree dozens of feet away from him. Now he could use the sword as he pleased. Not only that, but he also realized that as long as he willed it, his sword intent would appear in the surroundings at any time. Now his sword intent was everywhere. A moment later Yi Xian suddenly received a voice transmission, and in the next moment he flew up into the sky on his sword. His speed was extremely fast and in the blink of an eye he disappeared into the vast horizon. The desolate mountain range. At this moment the desolate mountain range had changed beyond recognition. The ground had cracked and magma flowed out. The surroundings were filled with a pungent smell of blood. On this mountain range, there was a huge light formation that covered the entire desolate mountain range. In the sky above the desolate mountain range, High Lord Lu and the others waited quietly. On the other side, Qin Beihan and the others were also waiting. They were all waiting for the birth of the origin heart of Qingzhou. Not only Pale Sword Sect and the Realm Defense Alliance, but many forces in the Divine Central Continent were also paying attention to you. Because this time, it was very likely that this would be a battle to the death between the Realm Defense Alliance and Pale Sword Sect. This battle was very likely to affect the entire structure of the Divine Central Continent. Whether it was the Realm Defense Alliance or Pale Sword Sect, they were both top forces. If these two top forces were to fight to the death, the impact would be enormous. Therefore, many forces were constantly paying attention to Qingzhou, including the Mystic Gate. The one who had come to Qingzhou this time was Mu Xiaoling, who Yi Xian had met once before. And the one who had transmitted the voice transmission to Yi Xian was also Mu Xiaoling. In front of a waterfall, Yi Xian landed on his sword. Beside the waterfall sat a woman. This person was Mu Xiaoling. Seeing Yi Xian, Mu Xiaoling got up and walked in front of Yi Xian. Then she sized up Yi Xian with some surprise in her eyes. You seem to have become stronger again. Yi Xian smiled. Miss Mu, how is my sister? Now the one he was most worried about was Yi Ling. Mu Xiaoling nodded slightly. Don't worry, she's fine. The current her is already at the Dharma controlling realm. However, this time, we didn't tell her about the matter between you and the Realm Defense Alliance because we didn't want to affect her. Please understand. Yi Xian smiled. It's fine. In fact, he also didn't want Yi Ling to know about the matter between him and the Realm Defense Alliance. Otherwise, who knew how anxious this girl would be? Mu Xiaoling glanced at Yi Xian and said softly, You really want to stop the Realm Defense Alliance from obtaining the Azure Province's origin heart? Yi Xian nodded. Mu Xiaoling shook her head slightly. It's not wise to go head-on against the Realm Defense Alliance. However, the grudge between your Azure Sword Sect and the Realm Defense Alliance is indeed unresolvable. Yi Xian smiled. You didn't come here just to chat with me, right? Mu Xiaoling said, Of course not. This time I came to ask if you are willing to leave the Azure world. Leave the Azure world? Yi Xian was a little puzzled. What do you mean? Mu Xiaoling pondered for a moment and then said, This world is very big, much bigger than you can imagine. Outside there is a wider stage. This chapter is not finished, please continue to the next page. If you are willing to leave, my celestial sect is willing to protect you. Yi Xian didn't even think about it and shook his head. In this kind of situation he couldn't leave. Azure Sword Sect had treated him well. If he left now he would be too inhumane. Moreover, he had many friends and family in Azure Province. If he left, it would be difficult to protect them from the Realm Defense Alliance. You don't want to go out and take a look? Mu Xiaoling asked. Yi Xian smiled. I want to, but not now. Mu Xiaoling said in a low voice, Forgive me for being blunt, but if you don't leave now, you might not be able to leave in the future even if you want to. Yi Xian frowned. Do you know something? Mu Xiaoling hesitated for a moment and then said, The Realm Defense Alliance isn't that simple. You should know that even a genius like the Azure Sword Master couldn't destroy it, let alone now. Although many powers in the Divine Central Continent don't like the Realm Defense Alliance, it is still the #1 power in the Azure world. At this point she looked at Yi Xian. My celestial sect has also heard of the mysterious woman behind you. She shouldn't be simple, but I can only tell you that the Realm Defense Alliance isn't simple either. If it's possible, it's best that you leave the Azure world with us now. Yi Xian shook his head and smiled. I appreciate Celestial Sect's good intentions. Mu Xiaoling said in a low voice, don't you think about your sister? If something happens to you, what will happen to her? Yi Xian was silent for a moment and then said, my sister is someone close to me. For her, I am willing to do anything. But if I leave now, I will be running away. I will be a coward. Behind me are my friends, my brothers, and my woman. Do you understand? Mu Xiaoling looked deeply at Yi Xian. Then I wish you good luck. With that she turned and left. Next to the waterfall, Yi Xian shook his head with a smile. Actually, I also want to run, but in life there are some things that I have to do even if I know I might die. At this moment he took out the voice transmission stone. Soon, a voice rang out from the voice transmission stone. A moment later Yi Xian turned around and soared into the sky on his sword. In the blink of an eye he disappeared into the vast horizon. Yi Xian arrived at the edge of the mountain range, where he saw Qin Beihan and Song Xian. Yi Xian bowed slightly to the two. Greetings Sect Master, greetings Martial Uncle. Qin Beihan nodded. Azure Prefecture may be in chaos. Tell your friends in Azure Prefecture to pay attention. Yi Xian nodded. I will inform them. Qin Beihan added, if chaos breaks out, don't interfere. Yi Xian grinned. I can already fight against the true Imperial Law stage. Qin Beihan smiled. I know, but you have more important things to do, and that is to live well. Live well? Yi Xian was a little puzzled. Just as he was about to ask, Qin Beihan suddenly said, 10 miles to the right, your master is waiting for you. Go. Yi Xian hesitated for a moment, then nodded and turned to leave. Looking in the direction Yi Xian left, Qin Beihan softly said, Shangyu Nangong Yi Xian. The future of the Blue Sword sect may have to rely on these three little guys. Song Xian nodded. Fortunately, the three of them seem to have a good relationship. There won't be any internal strife in the future. Qin Beihan smiled. Although this kid has a bad temper, if he treats someone as his own, he will be very loyal. Unfortunately, this temper, Sai is just too irritable. Just like eldest senior brother back then. With that, the two looked at each other and smiled. P.S. Today is Valentine's Day, I'm a little busy, I have a few appointments. End of this chapter. Chapter 314. On the other side Yi Xian came to a small mountain. Yu Qi was sitting quietly at the top of the mountain. Yi Xian walked to Yu Qi's back and bowed. Greetings master. Yu Qi nodded. Sit down. Yi Xian sat beside Yu Qi. Yu Qi raised his head to look at the distant sky and said softly, do you know the most glorious era of Pale Sword Sect? Yi Xian nodded. When Pale World Sword Master was still alive. Yu Qi nodded. Back then, when Ancestor was still alive, the entire Azure world, including the Realm Protection Alliance, had to lower their heads to Pale Sword Sect. That was the most glorious era of Pale Sword Sect. Unfortunately, after Ancestor left, Pale Sword Sect no longer had someone like him. Speaking of this, she seemed to have thought of something and said softly, actually, eldest senior brother was the most likely to become someone like Ancestor, unfortunately. Speaking of this, she did not continue. Yi Xian hurriedly asked, unfortunately what? Yu Qi was silent for a moment, then said softly, unfortunately, his sword heart had once collapsed, otherwise he would not have achieved what he has today. Sword heart collapsed? Yi Xian frowned. How did it collapse? Yu Qi said calmly, women. Women. Yi Xian. Yu Qi raised his head to look at the distant sky and said softly, that year, eldest senior brother was too amazing, so amazing that even the younger generation of Shen Gate could not suppress him. This made the Realm Protection Alliance afraid. They did not want a second Ancestor to appear in Azure World, but they could not kill eldest senior brother. Thus they used a honey trap. Honey trap. Yi Xian's expression froze. This was so fucking melodramatic. Yu Qi said again, a woman from the Realm Protection Alliance deliberately approached eldest senior brother. Eldest senior brother did not care at first, but unfortunately, that woman was not an ordinary person. In short, the two of them ended up together. However, in the end, eldest senior brother killed her with his own hands. Yi Xian frowned. Even if she's from the Realm Protection Alliance, she shouldn't have killed him. Or did the other party do something? Yu Qi glanced at Yi Xian and nodded. That woman was also sincere towards eldest senior brother. No matter what, she wouldn't harm eldest senior brother. The Realm Defense Alliance had no choice but to change their method, and that was to use that woman to kill me, who was the previous sect leader of our Blue Sword sect. Speaking of this, she lay on the ground. After a moment of silence, she said, that time, the previous sect master was surrounded and killed by dozens of mysterious experts. After the incident, eldest senior brother could not accept this reality. His sword heart instantly shattered, and his strength directly dropped from the True Defense Law realm to the Nether Passage realm. Not only that, he who was originally a sword immortal, also dropped to the level of sword master. Yi Xian fell silent. He did not expect that the Realm Protection Alliance and Song Sword sect had so many grudges between them. At this time Yu Qi said, eldest senior brother has left the sect for a long time. He has never returned to the sect because second senior brother stopped him from taking revenge against the Realm Protection Alliance. Regarding this matter, he has always been brooding over it. Yi Xian said softly, Master, you definitely can't take it to heart, right? Yu Qi gently brushed her hair behind her ear. In the beginning I couldn't take it to heart, it was definitely because second senior brother was afraid of death. But after so many years I gradually understood his painstaking efforts. Eldest senior brother's temper is the same as yours, a fiery one who cannot bear the slightest bit of anger. But second senior brother is different, he considers many things. At that time, if we went to fight the Realm Protection Alliance, not only would we lose, we would also lose countless Song Sword sect disciples. Speaking of this, she looked at Yi Xian. He was right. Yi Xian grinned. Master, what do you want to say? Yu Qi looked at Yi Xian. There was a complicated expression in his eyes. You are very outstanding, just like eldest senior brother in the past, but your temper is too explosive. I am a little worried that in the future I worry that in the future when you encounter something, you will not consider the big picture, only acting according to your temper. At that time, you will harm many people around you. Yi Xian was silent for a moment, then smiled and said, Actually, I am also quite smart. Yu Qi shook her head slightly. I am not saying you are stupid, not only are you not stupid, but many times you are quite shrewd, but if someone annoys you, you will disregard everything. Regarding this, I am very worried. Hearing this, Yi Xian's heart warmed slightly. He smiled and said, This can't be helped, I am a person who cannot bear anger, and I also cannot bear to see my friends and brothers being bullied. But master, then again, people only live for a lifetime, why let themselves be bullied? In any case, I, Yi Xian, will not casually bully others, but if anyone dares to bully me, I will definitely beat him to death. In Qingqing he understood a truth. As a person you can be a good person, but you absolutely cannot not have a temper. Because often the ones who are bullied the most are the good people. Yu Qi glanced at Yi Xian. She lightly patted Yi Xian's head. I did not say that you cannot fight back if you are bullied. What I mean is, in the future you need to consider things more carefully, understand? Yi Xian smiled and said, I understand. Yu Qi shook her head slightly, glib tongue. Saying this, she seemed to have thought of something and fell silent. Yi Xian said softly, Are you worried about the Realm Protection Alliance? Yu Qi nodded. This time the Realm Protection Alliance has mobilized their entire army, if they are allowed to obtain the origin heart of Qingzhou. Forget it, let's not think about this. In short, after so many years of grievances, it is time to put an end to it. Saying this, she looked at Yi Xian. If things reach the worst situation, you leave, find a place to hide, and do not appear again, understand? Yi Xian was silent. He knew that the entire Blue Sword sect, including Yu Qi's master, had already prepared for the worst. A battle of life and death. At this time, Yu Qi suddenly patted his head. Did you hear that? Yi Xian grinned. I heard it. Saying this, he sat in front of Yu Qi and said seriously, Master Yu, can we discuss something? Yu Qi blinked. What? Yi Xian said seriously, There are so many swords in the sword tomb. Yu Qi shook her head. No, those swords are left there for the sect disciples to study. Moreover, many of the swords are the inheritance of some sect seniors, don't touch them. Saying this, she paused slightly, then said, If one day we are no longer here, you can do whatever you want with them. Not here. Yi Xian was silent. After a moment he said softly, How can we not be here? We must all live well. On the other side, above the clouds, Lu Xun glanced down. At this moment, the wasteland mountain range had completely collapsed, turning into a land of magma. Beside Lu Xun, Mo Xiu said in a low voice, The time should be right. Lu Xun nodded. Let them begin, draw out the origin heart. Emoshio nodded slightly, then turned and left. After a moment, a huge blood-red light curtain suddenly covered the entire wasteland, and within this light curtain, countless blood continuously soaked into the ground. In the clouds, Lu Xun and the others stared down, while around them hundreds of thousands of true Imperial Law Realm experts were waiting for the Origin Heart to appear. Just like this, they waited and waited. Several hours passed, but there was no movement from the ground. Even at dawn the next day there was still no movement. In the clouds, Lu Xun frowned deeply. What's going on? Beside him, Emoshio hesitated, then said, maybe there is not enough blood. After a moment of silence, Lu Xun said, then continue. Emoshio was a little hesitant. What? Lu Xun asked. Emoshio said in a low voice, this grand formation consumes too many spirit stones. We have already spent nearly 100,000 violet origin crystals. 100,000 violet origin crystals. Even if the Realm Defense Alliance was rich and overbearing, it still felt somewhat painful. Lu Xun was silent for a moment, then said, continue at all costs. Emoshio nodded, turned around and left. Chapter 315. In the wasteland, countless drops of blood seeped into the earth every day. Whether it was the Realm Defense Alliance or the Pale Sword Sect, they were all waiting for the Qingzhou Origin Heart to appear. Once it appeared, the war would begin. However, the Origin Heart didn't move at all. 2 days later, the faces of Supremacy Lu and the others sank. They had already noticed that something was wrong. High in the clouds, Supremacy Lu said, something's wrong. Emoshio's face was gloomy. No one knew what he was thinking. Supremacy Lu suddenly said, could it have been obtained by the Pale Sword Sect? Emoshio shook his head. That's impossible. The Pale Sword Sect couldn't have obtained the Qingzhou Origin Heart without anyone knowing. You should know that without the support of the Grand Array, if the Origin Heart resists, it will cause the world's spiritual energy to fluctuate. Unless it willingly follows the Pale Sword Sect. However, that's impossible. Willingly follow? Supremacy Lu shook his head. He also felt that it was impossible. The Origin Heart was extremely wary of humans, so it was impossible for it to willingly follow them. After a moment of silence, Supremacy Lu said, let's go to the Divine Divination Sect and ask that old faker to help us. Forget it, I'll go myself. With that he turned and left. Not long after, Supremacy Lu returned to the Central Divine Prefecture. He arrived at the top of a barren mountain. There was only a dilapidated palace on the mountain. Above the palace's entrance was a plaque with 3 words that were almost unrecognizable. Divine Divination Sect. Lu Xun walked into the hall. Inside the hall there was an old man lying on the ground. This old man wore a loose gray robe, and his entire body exuded a strong smell of alcohol. Supremacy Lu walked in front of the old man and placed a wine bottle beside him. The old man immediately sat up and grabbed the bottle, drinking it in one gulp. A moment later he lay back down in satisfaction. Supremacy Lu said, I have a request. The old man waved his hand. Old man Lu, if it's about divination, then don't mention it. Supremacy Lu said, you must help me with this. The old man sat up and stared coldly at Lord Lu. You should know why our divine fortune-telling sect ended up like this. It's because we divined the secrets of heaven and were punished by heaven. Supremacy Lu nodded slightly. I naturally understand, but this time it's very important to our Realm Defense Alliance. This is the last time. After this time I will not come here again. Is that okay? The old man fell silent for a moment before he said, what is it? High Lord Lu said in a deep voice, the Green Province's Origin Heart. The old man shook his head. You don't have to waste your efforts. The Origin Heart has already fallen into someone else's hands. Hearing this, Lord Lu's pupils shrank. What do you mean? The old man said indifferently, what do you mean? The Heart of Origin is no longer in the Green Province. It has fallen into the hands of someone else. Supremacy Lu glared at the old man. How did you know? The old man fell silent for a moment before he said, Old man Lu, even though I don't know what your Realm Defense Alliance wants the Origin Heart for, but I'll say one more thing. The Origin Heart of Azure Continent can't be compared to the Origin Heart of Darkwave Continent. It is blessed by the heavens, so it's best if you don't have any designs on it. High Lord Lu's expression returned to calm. Who has it? The old man laughed bitterly. Do you really think I'm so divine? If I was, then the divine fortune-telling sect wouldn't have fallen to such a state. All I know is that the Origin Heart isn't in the Green Province's Origin Heart. As for who has it, I really don't know. High Lord Lu spoke in a low voice. Is there any way to find out? The old man shook his head. That person was able to sneak away with the Origin Heart under the noses of both your Realm Defense Alliance and the Pale Sword Sect. He is absolutely not an ordinary person. As he spoke, he lay down. Old Man Lu, I've told you everything I know. Let's go. Within the hall, High Lord Lu remained silent for a moment before he said, It isn't in the hands of the Pale Sword Sect. The old man shook his head. I don't know. I really don't know who has it. Old Man Lu, you should be aware that our Tao of Divination is only able to calculate a rough direction. As for the details, not to mention me, even the founding ancestor wouldn't be able to accomplish that. High Lord Lu glanced at the old man, and then he turned around and left. After High Lord Lu left, the old man sighed softly. Your Realm Defense Alliance is probably going to suffer. After High Lord Lu left the Central Divine Prefecture, he directly returned to Pine Prefecture. High above the clouds, High Lord Lu looked down at the desolate mountain range. At this moment, the grand formation around the mountain range had been withdrawn. Emoshio spoke in a low voice. Are you sure that the Origin Heart has been taken? High Lord Lu spoke softly. It should be true. The Pale Sword Sect? Asked Emoshio. High Lord Lu fell silent for a moment, and then he shook his head. It's impossible for them to seize the Origin Heart without making a sound. Moreover, if they obtained it, they would definitely destroy it. It's utterly impossible for them to dispatch all their experts to Pine Prefecture. Emoshio's brows knit together tightly. If it isn't the Pale Sword Sect, then who could it be? When he spoke up to hear, he seemed to have thought of something, and his expression suddenly changed. High Lord Lu gazed at Emoshio when he noticed the change in Emoshio's expression. What? Emoshio spoke in a low voice. I thought of something. High Lord Lu said, Speak. Emoshio's expression was slightly gloomy. Not long ago, I sensed the aura of the Origin Heart here and I brought it here. However, when we arrived here, we didn't see the Origin Heart and we only saw a person. A person? High Lord Lu frowned slightly. Who? Emoshio said, Yi Xian. Yi Xian. High Lord Lu's eyes instantly narrowed slightly when he heard this. Emoshio spoke in a low voice. We really did sense the aura of the Origin Heart that day, but we only saw Yi Xian when we arrived here. At that time, I thought that it was utterly impossible for Yi Xian to obtain the Origin Heart without making a sound. So, I felt that I might have sensed wrongly. But now it seems like... When he spoke up to hear, he shook his head. That can't be right. Yi Xian is merely the Sword Emperor. It's utterly impossible for him to have taken away the Origin Heart. Not necessarily. High Lord Lu suddenly spoke coldly. This person has always been mysterious. If it was anyone else, then I would definitely not believe it. Even if it was the Pale Sword Sect, I wouldn't believe it. But I believe this person. Emoshio looked at High Lord Lu. High Lord, you think that it's very likely that the Azure Prefecture's Origin Heart is in Yi Xian's possession? High Lord Lu nodded. If you're not wrong, then it's very likely to be in his possession. Then where is Yi Xian now? Emoshio turned around to look at an old man, and the old man spoke in a low voice. He's with the Pale Sword Sect now. High Lord Lu spoke indifferently. Gather everyone and follow me. As soon as he finished speaking, he turned around and left, and over 30 true defense realm experts followed behind him. In next to no time, High Lord Lu led the members of the Realm Defense Alliance to a hill on the other side. At the top of the hill, Qin Beihan walked in front of High Lord Lu and smiled. High Lord Lu, why aren't you waiting for the birth of the Origin Heart? Why are you here? High Lord Lu glanced at Qin Beihan. Where's Yi Xian? Yi Xian? Qin Beihan smiled. Why is High Lord Lu looking for him? High Lord Lu replied indifferently. Just a question. Qin Beihan was about to speak when High Lord Lu suddenly interjected. Qin Beihan, I don't want to talk nonsense with you right now. I just want to see Yi Xian. Qin Beihan's smile gradually turned cold. At this time, a voice came from the side. High Lord Lu is looking for me? High Lord Lu turned around and saw a man walking over from not far away. It was Yi Xian. Beside Yi Xian was a woman, Yu Qi. High Lord Lu's gaze fell on Yi Xian. Is the Azure Prefecture's Origin Heart with you? Azure Prefecture's Origin Heart? Hearing High Lord Lu's words, Qin Beihan and the others were slightly stunned. Even Yi Xian was dumbfounded. Origin Heart? What Origin Heart? High Lord Lu stared at Yi Xian. Yi Xian, don't play dumb in front of the old man. Is the Origin Heart with you or not? Yi Xian said in a deep voice. High Lord Lu, are you crazy? How can the Origin Heart be with me? Look at me, do I look like someone with the Origin Heart? High Lord Lu was about to speak when Qin Beihan suddenly said, High Lord Lu, are you joking? High Lord Lu looked at Qin Beihan, his face extremely cold. Do you think I look like I'm joking? Qin Beihan smiled. Then do you think a mere Dharma-controlling realm like him can obtain the Origin Heart? If the Origin Heart is so easy to obtain, would your Realm Defense Alliance go through so much effort? High Lord Lu looked at Yi Xian. He should know whether he obtained it or not. Yi Xian said seriously, High Lord Lu, the Origin Heart is with me. Hearing this, everyone was stunned. At this moment Yi Xian grinned. Lord Lu, I'm sure you want to hear this. So, I just said it to make you happy. Hearing Yi Xian's words, Yu Qi shook his head and smiled, sly. Qin Beihan and the others also couldn't help laughing. At this time, High Lord Lu suddenly walked not far from Yi Xian. He stared at Yi Xian. Yi Xian, the Origin Heart is with you, right? Yi Xian said with a smile, It is with me. High Lord Lu narrowed his eyes. You admit it? Yi Xian smiled. You definitely wouldn't believe me if I said it isn't, so I can only say it is. High Lord Lu stared at Yi Xian for a long time, and then he looked at Qin Beihan. My Realm Defense Alliance is taking this person away. Taking him away. Just this one sentence caused the atmosphere to instantly become tense. Qin Beihan shook his head and smiled. High Lord Lu, you really know how to joke today. High Lord Lu looked Qin Beihan in the eye. I'm not joking with you. My Realm Defense Alliance must take this person away today, and no one can stop us. Qin Beihan smiled. Then I can only say that you're overthinking it, High Lord Lu. Yi Xian is a disciple of my Pale Sword sect. So long as we old fellows are here today, you can forget about taking him away. High Lord Lu nodded slightly. Since that's the case, then let's fight. Qin Beihan smiled. Anytime. At the side, Yi Xian suddenly smiled. High Lord Lu, you haven't asked for my opinion before you want to take me away. High Lord Lu pointed at Yi Xian angrily. Cut the crap, I've been unhappy with you for a long time. Today, even if the person behind you appears, this old man will kill you. As soon as he finished speaking, he directly charged at Yi Xian. Chapter 316. Yi Xian sneered at the sight of Lord Lu's attack. Just as he was about to make his move, Qin Beihan suddenly stood in front of him. Qin Beihan looked at Lu Xun with a cold smile. Lu Xun, aren't you ashamed to bully a junior? Let me play with you. As soon as he finished speaking, he took a step forward and pointed a finger at them. Swoosh! A flying sword flew out from his sleeve. It was so fast that Yi Xian couldn't catch the flying sword's trajectory. Sword immortal. Yi Xian's heart skipped a beat. Only a flying sword like this could be considered a real flying sword. Opposite Qin Beihan, Lu Xun waved his hand and a wave shield suddenly appeared in front of him. Boom! Heaven and earth suddenly trembled. Qin Beihan's flying sword was blocked. Qin Beihan glanced at the shield in front of Lu Xun and smiled. Come to think of it, this should be Lu Xun's Yuanin shield. Lu Xun glanced at Qin Beihan indifferently. Now, if your Pale Sword sect hands over Yi Xian, we can temporarily stop fighting. If your Pale Sword sect really wants to protect him, then you can accompany him in death. Qin Beihan smiled. Do you think I'm scared? Lu Xun narrowed his eyes. If that's the case, then accompany him in death. Dozens of people suddenly appeared in the surroundings. All of them were true Imperial Dharma realm. Behind Qin Beihan, 17 people also appeared. Among them Yi Xian saw some familiar faces such as Zhang Tai, Gu Shishu, Yu Qi, Zhang Xian and some he didn't know. However, these people were all true Imperial Dharma realm experts. Yi Xian's face sank because he didn't see great uncle Jian Xian. In the air, Lu Xun looked down at Qin Beihan. Come, let me see how much a great sword immortal has improved after so many years. Qin Beihan smiled. As you wish. He turned into a sword light and soared into the sky. Below, Yu Qi turned his head and glanced at Yi Xian not far away. Stand down. Yi Xian hesitated and was about to speak when Yu Qi said, Stand down. This time his voice was a little stern. Yi Xian grinned. All right. With that he turned around and left. In the sky, several experts of the Realm Protection Alliance directly chased after Yi Xian, but very quickly Yu Qi and the others rose from the ground and directly blocked in front of them. The battle began. High above the clouds, Lord Lu and Qin Beihan looked at each other from afar, both expressionless. Supremacy Lu suddenly extended his right hand. In an instant, the clouds beneath him began to gather towards his palm. Not long after, a huge cloud vortex appeared beneath him. In the distance, Qin Beihan's right thumb, ring finger and pinky suddenly bent. In the next moment, a sword howl resounded from within his sleeve. Supremacy Lu said coldly. Come, let me see the sword in your sleeve. As soon as he finished speaking, he suddenly spread out his right hand. In the next moment, the huge cloud vortex suddenly shrank into a palm-sized vortex in the center of his palm. In the blink of an eye, he suddenly slapped his palm toward Qin Beihan, who was opposite him. As soon as his palm hit, the space within a radius of 1,000 zhang suddenly became illusory. At the same time, a huge cloud palm print shuttled through the sky. It was faster than lightning. Not only that, but wherever this cloud palm print passed, the space directly twisted into a twisted shape. Opposite Supremacy Lu, Qin Beihan suddenly pointed forward with a finger. From his sleeve, a sword suddenly flew out and a sword light appeared. Buzz. A sword howl suddenly resounded through the sky. At the same time, the sword light soared into the sky, and in an instant this sword light directly covered the entire sky. Boom. A shocking explosion suddenly resounded in the sky, and the space within a few thousand zhang trembled as if it was about to collapse. It was extremely terrifying. A true expert. Somewhere below, Yi Xian's blood was boiling as he watched. At this moment he finally realized that Supremacy Lu was actually so strong, and with his current strength, it was impossible for him to go against Supremacy Lu. Moreover, it was the first time he'd seen such a battle. This kind of expert could really destroy the heavens and extinguish the earth. Although he'd seen the mysterious woman fight before, every time she attacked, it wasn't earth-shattering, and it was always a matter of a single move. Above the clouds, Qin Beihan glanced at the distant Supremacy Lu and said indifferently, "What a great move." Supremacy Lu's face was expressionless. "After so many years, your sword in the sleeve has improved a lot." Qin Beihan smiled. "Then let's continue." As soon as he finished speaking, he took a step forward. In an instant, over 100 energy swords suddenly appeared behind him. Qin Beihan pressed his fingers together and pointed at Supremacy Lu. "Go!" As soon as he spoke, the 100 energy swords shot out, and in an instant the entire layer of clouds in the sky was instantly torn into pieces by the energy swords. At the same time, rays of dazzling sword light blotted out the sky and covered the entire horizon. On the other side, Supremacy Lu's face was expressionless. He stretched out his right hand, and it didn't take long for an illusory shield to suddenly appear in his palm. In the next moment, the illusory shield expanded with the wind and instantly reached a height of over 100 zhang. Ripples kept appearing on the surface of this huge shield, like ripples on water. Soon the energy sword slashed down. Boom, boom, boom. Deafening explosions resounded in the sky once more. At this moment, the clouds in the sky shook violently, and cracks even appeared in the space in some places. Just like that, the explosions continued for a very, very long time before the sky gradually calmed down. However, it wasn't long before more explosions resounded. Below, Yi Xian took a deep breath. An expert. At this moment, he deeply realized that he was actually still very weak. He hadn't realized this in the past because he hadn't seen the true experts of the firmament world. All this time he had thought that he was very strong. In fact, he wasn't strong at all. At this moment he was somewhat glad that he hadn't challenged Old Man Lu to a duel. Otherwise he would definitely have been beaten to tears. However, he wouldn't belittle himself. He was still young. If he was given some time, let alone Supremacy Lu, he could even fight the mysterious woman. When he thought of this, Yi Xian was instantly filled with confidence. It was as if there was no one in this world that he, Yi Xian, couldn't defeat. In fact, he had no idea how strong the mysterious woman was. As if he had thought of something, Yi Xian glanced at the prison pagoda. At this moment, Xiaoling had run to the top of the pagoda. Xiaoling seemed to be hugging a box. She was mumbling something to the box and seemed to be very happy. At this moment, Xiaoling seemed to sense something. She hurriedly put away the box and glared at him. "Don't peek at me, Yi Xian." After a while, Yi Xian didn't bother with this little girl anymore. This little girl had been very mysterious lately. He would ask her when he was free in the future. Yi Xian raised his head and looked into the distance. There, the experts of the Realm Defense Alliance were already fighting with Master Wuxia and the others. Although the Pale Sword sect had fewer people, Yi Xian discovered that the Pale Sword sect's battle strength was extremely strong. They weren't at a disadvantage at all. Swordsmen. One had to know that swordsmen's battle strength had always been very strong. He had to do something. Yi Xian looked around and was about to make a move. At this moment he seemed to think of something and the corners of his mouth curled up slightly. In the distance, Wuxia was fighting with 3 true Imperial Dharma Realm experts. Wuxia wasn't just at the true Imperial Dharma Realm, he was also a sword immortal. For an expert like her, One true Imperial Dharma Realm expert couldn't possibly stand against her. 3 true Imperial Dharma Realm experts could only barely stand against her. At this moment there was a sudden change. The true Imperial Dharma Realm expert on Wuxia's left suddenly had a drastic change in expression. He turned around abruptly, and at this moment, a sword silently pierced through his throat. The true Imperial Dharma Realm expert's head flew straight into the air. Sensing this scene, the other 2 true Imperial Dharma Realm experts' expressions changed drastically as they retreated. The 2 looked around warily. There was no one around them. Soon, cold sweat appeared on their foreheads. At this moment, one of them suddenly turned around. However, there was nothing in front of him. This person clenched his fists tightly and said fiercely, "Who is it? Come out, old man." There was no response. At this moment, Wuxia, who was not far away, suddenly drew his sword. The 2's expressions changed slightly as they hurriedly turned around. The moment they turned around, a sword silently pierced through the back of the old man who had just spoken. Fresh blood spurted out from the old man's neck. Chapter 317. The surroundings suddenly fell silent. The other old man looked around in horror. At this moment, his heart was already extremely shocked. Because the old man had died right beside him, but he hadn't discovered who had done it. It wasn't just him, even Wuxia was slightly taken aback. Who was it? In her impression, the Blue Sword sect did not have any assassins. And at this time, 100 zhang away, the head of a true defending magic realm expert of the Realm Protection Alliance suddenly flew off. Blood gushed out like a fountain. After a few breaths, 200 feet to the right, a true control Dharma realm cultivator of the Realm Defense Alliance was pierced through the heart by a sword. Just like that, in less than a dozen breaths of time, 5 experts from the Realm Defense Alliance had perished. At this moment, all the experts of the Realm Defense Alliance panicked. They weren't afraid of fighting in the open, but they had to be afraid of this kind of dirty trick in the dark. Because it was impossible to guard against. Furthermore, it was so mysterious. There was no trace of it at all. In next to no time, the experts of the Realm Defense Alliance stopped in succession and moved closer to each other. At this moment, they didn't just have to face the experts of the Pale Sword sect, they also had to be on guard against those hidden in the shadows. It could be said that they were too distracted, so their strength was greatly reduced. As a result, the Realm Protection Alliance was at a complete disadvantage. Seeing that the situation was not good, Mo Xiu hurriedly informed Supreme Lord Lu. However, he did not receive a reply. This was because Qin Beihan had pinned down Supremacy Lu. Neither of them dared to be distracted in their battle. One moment of carelessness and he would be consigned to eternal damnation. The members of the Pale Sword sect were stunned as well because they didn't know who was helping them from the shadows. But it didn't matter, it was a good thing anyway. On the desolate mountain range, the battle was still ongoing. However, the Realm Defense Alliance was completely suppressed and could only passively defend. In the sky, the battle between Lord Lu and Qin Beihan was still going on, and there was still no clear winner. In the dark, Yi Xian did not attack again because the experts of the Realm Protection Alliance had already gathered together. If he were to attack now, they would definitely join hands to deal with him first. Now he could only wait for the right opportunity. In any case, it was the Realm Protection Alliance that should be anxious. Just like that, the experts of the Realm Defense Alliance died one after another. Although the Pale Sword sect had also sacrificed some people, it was far less than the Realm Defense Alliance. An hour later, a deafening explosion suddenly resounded in the sky above the clouds. Very quickly, 2 figures fell from the sky and landed on the ground. Boom! The entire ground shook violently, and the place where the 2 of them landed directly collapsed. Everyone stopped and looked at Lord Lu and Qin Beihan. If a victor was decided between the 2 of them, it would mean that the battle was about to end. On the ground, Qin Beihan waved his sleeves, then looked at Supremacy Lu, who was not far away, and said with a smile, "Supremacy Lu, I'm afraid it won't take a few days and nights for us to fight to the death." Supremacy Lu stared fixedly at Qin Beihan with a malevolent expression. "If you don't hand over Yi Xian, I guarantee you that your Pale Sword sect will be annihilated." Qin Beihan smiled and said, "Your Realm Defense Alliance has been trying to destroy my Pale Sword sect for a long time. But my Pale Sword sect is still doing fine, isn't it?" Supremacy Lu sneered, "Qin Beihan, you will pay a painful price for your foolish actions." With that, he swept his eyes around. "Yi Xian, I know you're hiding in the dark. Let me tell you, if you don't hand over the Origin Heart, my Realm Defense Alliance will hunt you down for eternity. No one will be able to protect you." With that, he looked at Qin Beihan. Just you wait. With that, the group of people turned and left. A moment later, all the experts of the Realm Defense Alliance disappeared into the horizon. Below, Qin Beihan looked up at the sky. No one knew what he was thinking. A moment later, he suddenly said, "Where's Yi Xian?" "I'm here." At this time, a voice suddenly sounded from afar. Everyone looked over and saw that it was Yi Xian. At this moment, Yi Xian was grinning, but no one knew what he was smiling about. Seeing Yi Xian, everyone shook their heads and smiled. This guy was really slippery at times. Yi Xian walked over to Qin Beihan and bowed slightly. "Sect leader." Qin Beihan nodded slightly. "Come with me." With that, he walked into the distance. Yi Xian hurriedly followed. Beside him, Yu Qi hesitated for a moment but also followed. On a hill, Qin Beihan stared at Yi Xian. "Is the origin heart with you?" Yi Xian nodded. Seeing this, Yu Qi couldn't help but glance at Yi Xian. She wanted to say something, but in the end she didn't say anything. Qin Beihan's expression became slightly complicated. The Realm Defense Alliance went through so much trouble to obtain the origin heart, but I didn't expect it to fall into your hands in the end." Yi Xian said with a smile. "Fate?" Qin Beihan hesitated for a moment and then said, "I want to destroy this origin heart to avoid future troubles." "Destroy it?" Yi Xian hurriedly shook his head. No. At the thought of destroying Xiaoling, Yi Xian really couldn't bear to do it, but he couldn't do it. Although that girl was a bit mischievous, she wasn't a bad person. Qin Beihan glanced at Yi Xian. "If I don't destroy it, I'm afraid something big will happen in the future." Yi Xian smiled bitterly. "Sect leader, the origin heart is only willing to follow me because I promised to protect it. If I want to destroy it now, I can't do it. As a person, I have to be trustworthy, right?" Qin Beihan was silent for a moment and then asked, "It followed you willingly?" Yi Xian nodded. Qin Beihan looked deeply at Yi Xian. Needless to say, he was still slightly shocked at this moment. Because he truly never imagined that the Qingzhou's origin heart would actually follow Yi Xian. It should be known that this kind of spiritual object, in general, was very resistant to humans. Mysterious. The feeling he got from Yi Xian had always been one of mystery. A short moment later, Qin Beihan spoke in a low voice. "The Realm Defense Alliance should have guessed that it's you, and they won't let the matter rest. You must return to Pale Sword Sect with me." Yu Qi nodded. "Yes." Qin Beihan continued, "If you stay in Qingzhou, then you won't be able to protect yourself at all. I'll give you half a day to deal with the matter in Qingzhou. It's best if you make those friends of yours go into hiding or return to Pale Sword Sect with me." When he spoke up to here, there was a trace of worry in his eyes. For the sake of this origin heart, the Realm Defense Alliance will definitely do anything. Yi Xian fell silent for a moment and then he said, "If I go to Pale Sword Sect, then the Realm Defense Alliance will definitely act madly against Pale Sword Sect." "This?" Qin Beihan shook his head. "You're already a disciple of my Pale Sword Sect, so your matters are naturally my Pale Sword Sect's matters. Moreover, even without you, once the Realm Defense Alliance achieves its objective, they still won't let my Pale Sword Sect off. Quickly go deal with your own matters, and we'll return to the Central Divine Prefecture in half a day." Yi Xian intended to say something else when Yu Qi suddenly said, "Quickly go. Don't waste any time." Yi Xian smiled and then he turned around and left. After Yi Xian left, Qin Beihan spoke softly. "I never expected that the origin heart would actually fall into his hands." Yu Qi gazed at Qin Beihan. "Don't use him." Qin Beihan shook his head and smiled. "Little junior sister, do you think your second senior brother, is such a heartless person in your heart?" Yu Qi spoke softly. "He isn't a bad person. If he's willing to stay in my Pale Sword Sect, then his accomplishments in the future wouldn't be inferior to eldest senior brothers." Qin Beihan nodded. "I know. That kid's biggest problem is that he acts on impulse. If he doesn't manage the affairs of the sect and wholeheartedly cultivates, then his accomplishments in the future will definitely not be inferior to eldest senior brothers. But if he becomes the next sect master, then I'm afraid he'll lead the Pale Sword Sect to fight every day." Yu Qi shook her head slightly. She had a rough understanding of Yi Xian's character, and he really wasn't an ordinary kind of irritable person. Even though he usually laughed and laughed, was thick-skinned, and sometimes even schemed a little, but if he was infuriated, then he would erupt like a volcano. Qin Beihan suddenly said, "Forget it, these are matters for the future. It's too early to talk about it now." As he spoke, he looked at Yu Qi. "Do you know who attacked from the shadows earlier?" Yu Qi shook her head. Qin Beihan nodded and didn't say anything. On the other hand, Yu Qi glanced in the direction that Yi Xian had left in. After leaving the desolate mountain range, Yi Xian returned to Ning Kingdom at the first possible moment. In Tuoba Yan's chamber. Tuoba Yan looked at Yi Xian and frowned slightly. Hide. Yi Xian nodded. Both of you must. Otherwise both of you can come with me to the Pale Sword sect. Tuoba Yan and Ji Anji exchanged glances. In the end Tuoba Yan spoke solemnly. Is it very serious? Yi Xian nodded. Very serious. The Realm Defense Alliance is probably going to fight me to the death this time. Just as Qin Beihan had said, he could sense how much the Realm Defense Alliance valued the Origin Heart. However, it was absolutely impossible for him to hand it over to the Realm Defense Alliance. Because even if he did, the Realm Defense Alliance wouldn't let him and the Pale Sword sect off. Moreover, if he did hand it over to the Realm Defense Alliance, then who knew what terrifying things the Realm Defense Alliance would use it to do. So, he and the Realm Defense Alliance were irreconcilable enemies now. Tuoba Yan fell silent for a moment and then he said, I want to stay here. However, Ji and I will go into hiding. Yi Xian spoke softly, You don't want to go to the Pale Sword sect with me? Tuoba Yan shook his head, If we leave just like this, then what will happen to Ning country? Even though I will have to hide if I stay here, I can manage Ning country in secret. Yi Xian thought for a moment and then he nodded, All right. However, both of you must not show yourselves. Besides that, notify the others of Blue Waves Academy to not show themselves. Tuoba Yan looked at Yi Xian, You have to be careful, understand? Yi Xian smiled, Don't worry, I won't die. As soon as he finished speaking, he hugged Tuoba Yan lightly, Wait for me to return. As soon as he finished speaking, he seemed to have thought of something, and he hugged Ji Anji once more before turning around and leaving. You will definitely return, right? Tuoba Yan asked. Yi Xian stopped and smiled, Wait for me. As soon as he finished speaking, he vanished through the door. Within the hall, Tuoba Yan stared at the door for a long time and didn't leave. Half a day later, a huge event occurred in Firmament World. The Realm Defense Alliance declared war on the Pale Sword sect. Chapter 318. The Realm Defense Alliance had declared war on the Pale Sword sect. Before this, although the two families had already started fighting, they did not openly declare war on each other. But this time the Realm Defense Alliance had declared war. This meant that both sides had no other choice but to fight to the death. As for Yi Xian, he followed Qin Beihan and the others back to the Pale Sword sect. At this moment, the Pale Sword sect had entered the highest level of alert. All the disciples were on standby. Because the Realm Defense Alliance could attack at any time. Cloud's Word Peak. Yi Xian was helping Yu Qi tidy up the sword techniques and notes in the inner hall. What Yu Qi did every day was to study these sword techniques, make notes and sometimes improve them. One had to admit that following Yu Qi really did allow one to learn many things every day. As for Yi Xian, he wasn't always at the Cloudy Sword Hall. The current him was already familiar with the Blue Sword sect. From time to time he would stroll around here and there. Every day he was very carefree. But after returning to the Central Divine Continent, the Realm Defense Alliance was strangely calm, without the slightest movement. Realm Defense Mountain. High Lord Lu arrived at the rear hall. There was a black vortex in the rear hall, and within it was a boundless starry sky. High Lord Lu walked up to the vortex and bowed slightly. My lord. A moment later, a voice came from within. Failed? High Lord Lu nodded. Failed, but I know who has it. After a moment of silence, the voice suddenly said, At all costs, understand? High Lord Lu nodded slightly. I might need my lord's help when the time comes. There is a mysterious woman behind that person who once told my lord. She's no ordinary person. She appears. Didn't I give you a clone? The voice asked. High Lord Lu smiled bitterly. He wanted to say that this clone was far from enough, but he didn't dare say it. After hesitating for a moment, High Lord Lu nodded. Understood, but I'm worried that the mysterious woman isn't ordinary and has some other power behind her. So, just in case, I ask my lord to give me another clone. The voice said, I've only managed to cultivate 2 clones. I've given one to you, but I have other uses for the other one. If you don't have the confidence, I'll let my left and right protectors come and assist you. Hearing this, Lord Lu quickly nodded. That's great. Apart from that, I would also like to request for a group of golden guards. I only need 10 of them. After a moment of silence, the voice said, Approved. Supremacy Lu heaved a sigh of relief. This way the Grey Mia Sword sect would be more confident. In the endless starry sky, a star cloud ship suddenly stopped. Not far away from the star cloud ship was an ancient city, and in the sky above the ancient city, there were 3 large words: Realm Defense Alliance. On the Nebula warship stood an old man and a middle-aged man. The middle-aged man glanced at the ancient city in the distance and said softly, "This star field is under the control of the Realm Protection Alliance?" The old man nodded. This Realm Protection Alliance was not simple in the past. Its founder was just an ordinary young man, but he created a new cultivation method. This method was the power of faith. The more devout the people's faith in him, the stronger his martial Tao was. Unfortunately. Saying this, he shook his head and sighed. After that person, no other amazing talent appeared in the Realm Protection Alliance. As a result, its power is not as great as before. Now it can only be considered a third-rate faction. The middle-aged man smiled. This has nothing to do with us. Our mission this time is to find that young man. AI, to find a person in this vast star field is more than 100 times harder than finding a needle in a haystack. Our Spirit Void Star Palace is really unlucky this time. Hearing this, the old man smiled bitterly. There's nothing we can do. That mysterious woman descended from the sky and found us. Who told us that we can't beat her? Hearing the old man's words, the middle-aged man smiled bitterly. They couldn't beat her. They couldn't beat her at all. That mysterious woman's strength had completely exceeded their understanding. A moment later, the middle-aged man said softly, "Let's go." As his voice sounded out, the Star Cloud ship flew above the Realm Protection City. Soon, a black-clothed old man appeared before the Star Cloud ship. The black-clothed old man looked warily at the middle-aged man and the old man. "You two are." The middle-aged man smiled. "I am Spirit Void Star Palace's Lin Songyun. This is my Spirit Void Star Palace's enforcer, Qin Zhen." Spirit Void Star Palace? The black-clothed old man frowned deeply. "I've never heard of it." Lin Songyun smiled. "My Spirit Void Star Palace is too far from this star field. It's normal that you have never heard of it." As he spoke, he released his powerful aura. Beside him, Qin Zhen also released his aura. Seeing the two's auras, the black-clothed old man's expression changed. "You too," Lin Songyun smiled. "We have no ill intentions. We just want to ask your Realm Protection Alliance for a small favor." "A small favor?" The black-clothed old man hesitated for a moment before saying, "What favor?" Lin Songyun said in a low voice, "To find someone." As he spoke, he waved his right hand and a portrait appeared in front of the black-clothed old man. If Yi Xian was here, he would definitely be shocked because the person in the portrait looked exactly like him. The black-clothed old man said in a low voice, "Do you have an exact location?" Lin Songyun shook his head. "No." Hearing this, the black-clothed old man shook his head. "It's too difficult." Lin Songyun smiled bitterly. "The two of us know that it's too difficult, but there's nothing we can do about it. This person is extremely important to my Spirit Void Star Palace. Please help us." The black-clothed old man glanced at the two of them. He hesitated for a moment before nodding. "I will send people to search. However, the old man cannot guarantee that he will definitely be found." Lin Songyun smiled. "Thank you very much." As he spoke, he looked down. "The two of us would like to stay here for a period of time. Is that convenient?" The black-clothed old man smiled. "Of course." As he spoke, he hesitated for a moment before saying, "My Realm Defense Alliance is about to go to war with another power. If it's convenient for the two of you, I hope that you can lend us a hand. What do you think?" Lin Songyun and Lin Songyun looked at each other. Lin Songyun smiled. "Of course. However, the matter of finding someone," the black-clothed old man said seriously, "don't worry. My Realm Defense Alliance will do its best to find that person. If that person is in this star region, then my Realm Defense Alliance will definitely be able to find him." Lin Songyun smiled. "Thank you very much." The black-clothed old man smiled lightly. "Please follow me." As soon as he finished speaking, he turned and left. His face was filled with a smile. Lin Songyun and Qin Zhen were obviously not ordinary experts. When the two of them participated in the battle, the Firmament Sword sect would definitely be destroyed. When he thought of this, the black-clothed old man's smile grew even brighter, and he became even more courteous towards Lin Songyun and Qin Zhen. The Firmament World. Yi Xian strolled around here and there every day. In the end, he arrived at the Sword Tomb. When the old man who guarded the Sword Tomb saw Yi Xian, his eyelids twitched, and he hurriedly stood in front of Yi Xian and said cautiously, "What are you doing?" He hadn't forgotten that Yi Xian had devoured many swords when he came here, and there were even heaven-grade swords among them. This fellow can devour swords. Yi Xian chuckled. "Nothing, I'm just here to stroll around." The old man said indifferently, "There's nothing to stroll around here. Go back." Yi Xian said seriously, "I'm just going in for a stroll. I have no other intentions." The old man glanced at Yi Xian with an expressionless face. "No." Yi Xian sighed softly. He had no choice but to turn around and leave. Actually, he could sneak in silently, but it would be too boring to do that. Heaven grade swords. What he needed the most right now was a heaven grade sword. As long as he had a heaven grade sword, he could enter the true defense realm at any time. Once he entered the true defense realm, his strength would definitely increase greatly. Other than that, he had yet to condense the Sword of Space. Other than the World Prison Pagoda, his strongest attack was the Sword of Earth. If he could successfully condense the Sword of Earth and use life and death in one sword, he was 90% confident that he could instantly kill a true defense realm powerhouse. The Tao of Space was clearly above the Tao of Earth. If he could condense the Sword of Space, it would definitely be even more powerful. But now, he wasn't confident that he could condense the Sword of Space, because his cultivation level wasn't high enough. He had to reach the true defense realm. And he needed swords. Where could he find swords? The sword tomb was out of the question. This was because this place was the accumulation of the Pale Sword sect. If those swords were left there, they could improve the swordsmanship of the Pale Sword sect disciples. He definitely couldn't let him continue devouring. He had to think of something else. Who was he thinking of? Yi Xian thought for a moment. Soon he came to Weapon Forging Peak. Sword Dao Yi Xian. Zhan Tai said impatiently, "What are you doing here again?" Yi Xian grinned, "I'm here to pay my respects to Uncle Master Zhan." Scram. Zhan Tai waved his hand, "Scram quickly, I have nothing here." After he finished speaking, he turned around and disappeared on the spot. Yi Xian. A moment later, Yi Xian came to Array Dao Peak. Inside the hall, Yi Xian walked to Uncle Master Gu and bowed. "Greetings, Uncle Master Gu." Uncle Master Gu glanced at Yi Xian. "What's the matter?" Yi Xian hesitated. "There's something, but it's a little hard to say." Uncle Master Gu said indifferently, "Then don't say it." Yi Xian's face darkened. Why didn't this Uncle Master Gu play by the rules? After hesitating for a moment, he said, "I want a heaven-grade sword." Uncle Master Gu glanced at him. "There's only one. I'll use it myself, do you want it?" Yi Xian smiled bitterly. How could he want it? He bowed slightly, then turned and left. At this moment, Uncle Master Gu suddenly said, "Go find your master, she has a way." Yi Xian was stunned, then he hurriedly flew out of the hall. Soon he returned to Cloud Sword Peak. In the hall, Yu Qi was silent for a moment, then she turned and walked into the inner hall. After a while, she walked out again, waved her right hand, and two swords landed steadily in front of him. Heaven-grade sword. Yi Xian was stunned, then he said embarrassedly, Still, isn't it enough?" Yu Qi asked. Yi Xian hurriedly nodded. He could be thick-skinned to everyone, but when it came to Yu Qi, he really couldn't be thick-skinned. Yu Qi was silent for a moment, then she said, "Follow me." After saying that, she brought Yi Xian to the sword tomb. Seeing Yi Xian, the old guard of the sword tomb was stunned, but he ignored Yi Xian and looked at Yu Qi with a somewhat kind expression. "Little junior sister, why are you here today?" Yu Qi said indifferently, "Give me a few heaven-grade swords." The old man glanced at Yi Xian, a little hesitant. "Is there a problem?" Yu Qi asked. The old man hurriedly said, "No problem, I'll go get it for you." After saying that, he turned and left. At the side, Yi Xian was dumbfounded. P.S. Actually, I know many people have been dissatisfied recently, because there are fewer updates. But, to be honest, everyone has a holiday for the new year, but what we write really doesn't have a holiday. It's year-round, it's not an excuse, I just want to explain to my friends who understand. After all, it's the new year and I'm still in the hospital, now waiting for my father's wound to heal. I don't know how long it will take. If you can understand, then understand, but if you can't, then scold. Thank you. Chapter 319. In a short while, the old man walked out of the sword tomb with a box in his hand. The old man passed the box to Yu Qi. She opened it and saw 4 swords. All of them were heaven grade. Yu Qi turned around and passed the box to Yi Xian. "Is it enough? Is it enough?" The old man's eyes twitched when he heard Yu Qi's words. Yi Xian thought about it and said, "It should be enough." Yu Qi turned to look at the old man. "Give me another one." The old man was speechless. Yi Xian was speechless. A moment later, the old man took out another one. It was also a heaven-grade sword. Thus, Yi Xian obtained 5 swords in one go. Yu Qi didn't say anything and just turned around and left. Yi Xian was silent for a long time before he grinned. This master is really nice. He felt very warm in his heart. Yu Qi didn't ask what he wanted the swords for. This was trust. This feeling of being trusted and believed in was really good. The old man glanced at Yi Xian with an ugly expression. He didn't say anything and just turned around and left. Yi Xian had to admit that he was a little emotional at the moment. He didn't know why Yu Qi wanted so many heaven-grade swords, but he knew that without Yu Qi he definitely wouldn't be able to obtain so many heaven-grade swords. At this moment he realized why so many people wanted to join some big powers. Because big powers really had a lot of resources and they were very good. If he was still an independent cultivator, even if he had 10 billion top-grade spirit stones, he wouldn't be able to buy 5 heaven-grade swords. It's good to have an organization and a backer. It's too tiring to fight alone. I have to find more backers in the future. Yi Xian grinned, turned around and left with the sword in his arms. Yi Xian returned to his room on Cloud Sword Peak and then entered the prison pagoda. Devour. Inside the prison pagoda, as soon as she saw Yi Xian enter, Xiao Linger hurriedly put away the box. She looked at Yi Xian warily. I didn't do anything. Yi Xian was speechless. Thinking that Yi Xian didn't believe her, she quickly added, I really didn't do anything. Alright. Yi Xian waved his hand. I know you didn't do anything. Now, I want to cultivate, don't disturb me, understand? Little Ling nodded her little head, not really understanding. Yi Xian sat cross-legged on the ground, then took out a heaven-rank sword and stabbed it into his chest. Upon seeing this, Xiao Linger's eyes widened in shock. She covered her mouth with her small hands in shock. Once the heaven-grade sword entered his body, a powerful energy immediately spread out from his body. Soon, his body began to absorb this energy frantically. Invincible sword body. He remembered that the mysterious woman had once said that if he cultivated this technique to the end, his body would be like a sword and no sword could penetrate it. As for when he would be able to cultivate to the end, he didn't know. In any case, he just had to cultivate first. At the side, Xiao Linger was dumbfounded. She flew around Yi Xian, touching Yi Xian from time to time. Her eyes were filled with curiosity. As if she had thought of something, she suddenly floated to the box in front of Yi Xian. Then she grabbed at the air with her 2 small hands. Soon a sword slowly floated up. Then, under her control, the sword was pointed at herself. Just as the sword was about to stab down, a force suddenly enveloped Xiao Linger. Xiao Linger was stunned. At this time, a voice sounded from the first floor. What are you doing? It was the voice of the god on the second floor. Xiao Linger blinked. Playing? Who plays like you? The voice of the god on the second floor was a little harsh. Xiao Linger pointed at Yi Xian. He plays too. The god on the second floor was speechless. At this time, Xiao Linger suddenly floated to the second floor and saw the god on the second floor. Around the body of the second floor great god, there were strange golden runes. These runes were like ropes that trapped the second floor great god. Xiao Linger floated in front of the god on the second floor, giggling. Then she took out a spirit fruit and handed it to the god on the second floor. The god on the second floor glanced at Xiao Linger and didn't say anything. Xiao Linger hesitated for a moment, then said, The guy on the 4th floor asked me to pull out the 3 swords at the top of the tower to play. Can I pull them out? Hearing this, the god on the second floor's eyes twitched. Azure Sword Hall. There were only 3 people in the hall, Qin Beihan, Song Xian and Zhan Tai. Qin Beihan looked at Song Xian. Still no movement from the Realm Defense Alliance? Song Xian shook his head. No. But according to my guess, it won't be long before they make a big move. Qin Beihan nodded slightly. The Celestial Sect of Wonders and the few sects in the upper world have not responded? Song Xian smiled bitterly. If it doesn't affect their interests, why would they make a move? Moreover, at this time, everyone can't wait for our Azure Sword sect to fight to the death with the Realm Defense Alliance so they can reap the benefits. Qin Beihan said softly, It seems that our Azure Sword sect can only rely on ourselves this time. As he spoke, he paused for a moment before continuing, I'll have to trouble Junior Sister Gu for the next few days. Ask her to fix the 2 formations, especially the one left behind by the Ancestral Master. She must fix it. This matter is urgent. Song Xian nodded. I understand. Junior Sister Gu should also understand. She has been busy with this matter recently. Qin Beihan suddenly asked, What about eldest senior brother? Eldest senior brother? Hearing this, Song Xian's and Zhan Tai's expressions changed subtly. Song Xian smiled bitterly. Of course, after he sent Shang Yu and Bo Yi back to the sect, there was no news of him. But if our Azure Sword sect is in trouble, he will definitely help. Qin Beihan nodded. Of course, he went to the demon race because he doesn't want Shangyu to die there. He is afraid that our Azure Sword sect will have no successor. As for him, let's not bother about him for the time being. He will definitely appear when it's time. Song Xian smiled. That's true. Now that the war between our Azure Sword sect and the Realm Defense Alliance is imminent, there's no way he won't appear. Qin Beihan said softly, I just don't know what trump card the Realm Defense Alliance has this time. This battle concerns the life and death of our Azure Sword sect. Hearing this, Song Xian's and Zhang Tai's expressions turned grave. Life and death. If Azure Sword sect lost this battle, there was no need for the Realm Defense Alliance to take action. The other forces of the Divine Central Continent would completely devour Azure Sword sect. The Azure Sword sect couldn't afford to lose this battle. A moment later, Qin Beihan said in a low voice, if necessary, tell Yi Xian, Shangyu, Nangong and the others to leave. No matter what happens to us, Azure Sword sect cannot be destroyed. Song Xian nodded. Understood. Any force would leave behind a few seeds. Qin Beihan slowly closed his eyes, while Song Xian and Zhang Tai got up and left. Only Qin Beihan was left in the hall. A moment later, a black-robed man suddenly appeared in the hall. The black-robed man glanced at Qin Beihan and shook his head. Qin Beihan said softly, never mind, there's no need to investigate. Since I have chosen to believe, I can only believe until the end. The black-robed man nodded and quietly left. Cloud Sword Peak. Inside the prison pagoda, Yi Xian was still frantically devouring. He had already devoured 3 heaven-class swords. The aura around his body was growing stronger and stronger. Inside the prison pagoda, some people were happy while others were worried. The happy one was naturally Xiao Linger. She was unrestrained every day and could stroll around the pagoda as she pleased. There was even food to eat. The worried one was the god on the 2nd floor. Because Yi Xian had activated the prison pagoda time and time again, the seal on the prison pagoda was weakening. Logically speaking, she should be happy because the loosening of the seal was beneficial to her. But she knew very well that if the seal in the pagoda completely disappeared, the people in the pagoda would definitely kill Yi Xian first. Once he was killed, no one in the pagoda would survive. In the entire pagoda, only 2 people knew of the mysterious woman's existence. One was her and the other was the other. However, the other party was very arrogant and had threatened to find the mysterious woman for revenge. From her point of view, this was a joke. The strength displayed by the mysterious woman was just the tip of the iceberg. Moreover, according to her guess, the reason the prison pagoda had fallen into such a state was probably related to the mysterious woman. They actually didn't know when the mysterious woman had come to the prison pagoda. This was because when they were imprisoned, the prison pagoda was in perfect condition. The seal at that time could make them sleep forever until they died. Therefore, even the people in the pagoda didn't know what had happened to the prison pagoda to turn out like this. All they knew was that when they woke up, the prison pagoda was heavily damaged and the seal was weakening. Moreover, it had a master and this master was King Weak. To put it simply, other than the god on the 2nd floor and the person who was being suppressed by the mysterious woman, no one else knew that there was such a powerful person behind Yi Xian. The pagoda would break, Yi Xian would die, and before long, everyone would die with him. After a moment, the god on the 2nd floor looked at Yi Xian who was on the 1st floor. Right now, Yi Xian's aura had reached an extremely powerful level. If this aura was outside, it would definitely cause a commotion. But in the prison pagoda, no matter how strong his aura was, it would be suppressed by the pagoda. Days passed in this way. On the 3rd day, Yi Xian, sitting on the ground with his legs crossed, suddenly opened his eyes. Swoosh swoosh. 2 rays of sword light suddenly shot out like lightning. At the same time, a powerful aura suddenly emitted from his body. Yi Xian waved his right hand and the aura suddenly disappeared without a trace. Disintegration. Spatial flying sword. True defense realm. Finally, he had reached the true defense realm. Inside the pagoda, Yi Xian took a deep breath. At this moment he felt like his body was filled with power. Not only that, but at this moment his mental energy and divine sense were vastly different from before. It was as if everything around him had become clearer. Moreover, he could clearly sense space. As long as he wanted to, he could change the space around him at any time. It was a very casual kind of change. True defense realm. The corner of Yi Xian's lips curled up slightly. Now he had finally reached the true defense realm. However, Yi Xian still had one question. Was he a sword immortal? Chapter 320. Now, as long as he was willing, his sword could transform into heaven and earth. However, whether this was a sword immortal or not, he still did not know. After a moment of silence, Yi Xian decided to ask Yu Qi. At this time, the voice of the god on the second floor suddenly sounded in his mind, "Be careful of the one on the fourth floor." The fourth floor? Yi Xian was stunned. What do you mean? The god on the second floor said, "It asked Xiaolinger to pull out the sword." Pull out the sword? Hearing this, Yi Xian's face suddenly darkened. Pull out the sword? It must be the sword at the top of the tower. If those swords were pulled out, who knew what would happen? Yi Xian hurriedly called Xiaolinger in front of him. He said seriously, "The guy on the fourth floor, it asked you to pull out the sword?" Xiaolinger nibbled on a spirit fruit, then nodded her little head. "Yes, it said the sword is fun." Yi Xian said seriously, "What do you think?" Xiaolinger looked at Yi Xian, blinked. "I." As she said this, her eyeballs rolled. At this time Yi Xian said, "Don't lie." Xiaolinger hesitated, then giggled. I want to pull it out and play with it, then put it back, can?" Yi Xian was speechless. "What do you think?" Xiaolinger suddenly clapped her hands, her eyes lit up. "You agree?" Yi Xian was dumbfounded. Did he agree? At this time Xiaolinger directly flew out, then climbed to the top of the tower. Yi Xian hurriedly dragged her back. Looking at the little one in front of him, Yi Xian was speechless. How did this little one understand his words? Yi Xian took a deep breath, then said seriously, "That sword, you can't pull it out, understand?" He did not know whether Xiaolinger could pull it out, but what if she could? If it was pulled out, it would be a big problem. Hearing Yi Xian's words, Xiaolinger blinked and asked curiously, "Why not?" Yi Xian said solemnly, "If we pull it out, something big will happen." "Oh." Little Ling nodded her little head, looking as if she understood. Seeing Xiaolinger nod, Yi Xian heaved a sigh of relief. At this time she said, "If I can't pull it out today, can I pull it out tomorrow?" Yi Xian nearly fainted when he heard that. Why did this little guy keep thinking about drawing his sword? In the end, Yi Xian was completely defeated by this little fellow. He didn't care about this little guy anymore. He could only ask the second floor's god to pay more attention to this little guy. If he didn't get killed by the Realm Protection Alliance, he would be toyed to death by this little fellow. After leaving the World Prison Pagoda, Yi Xian came to the Cloudy Sword Hall. Inside the hall, Yu Qi was studying a sword technique. Her brows were slightly furrowed as if she was thinking about something. Just as Yi Xian was about to speak, Yu Qi suddenly said, "What's the matter?" Yi Xian nodded. "Speak." "I suspect I'm a sword immortal." Yu Qi put down the scroll in her hand and turned to look at Yi Xian. "Sword immortal?" Yi Xian nodded. "Just a suspicion. I'm not sure." Yu Qi walked in front of Yi Xian and looked at Yi Xian. Yi Xian moved his mind, and in an instant, the entire room was filled with his good and evil sword intent. Seeing this scene, Yu Qi was stunned. Yi Xian asked softly, "Is it a sword immortal?" Yu Qi glanced at Yi Xian and shook her head. "Not completely, only half." Yi Xian. At this time Yu Qi suddenly said, "True Imperial Law Realm." In her eyes, there was a trace of disbelief. Yi Xian grinned. "That's the use of the 5 swords." Yu Qi looked deeply at Yi Xian and said softly, "I still underestimated you." With that, she pulled Yi Xian's arm and immediately left the Cloudy Sword Hall. Under Yu Qi's lead, Yi Xian came to the back mountain of the Cloudy Sword Peak. Yi Xian had also been to this back mountain before. There was a bamboo forest and a sea of flowers, which seemed to be planted by Yu Qi. In the bamboo forest, Yu Qi looked at Yi Xian. "Release your sword intent." Yi Xian nodded and then released his sword intent. In an instant, the entire forest was filled with his sword intent. After a moment of silence, Yu Qi said softly, "Do you know what stage you are at now?" Yi Xian shook his head. Yu Qi said softly, "The first stage is to comprehend sword intent, the second stage is to materialize sword intent, and the third stage is to transform sword intent into heaven and earth. The so-called transforming sword intent into heaven and earth means that your sword intent is no longer limited to your body, but can already fuse with heaven and earth. In other words, before, your body was actually a limit to your sword intent, but now, your sword intent has broken through this limit and has infinite possibilities." Yi Xian said solemnly, "Isn't that a sword immortal?" Yu Qi shook his head. "Only half." "Why do you say that?" Yi Xian asked. Yu Qi said softly, "To become a sword immortal, transforming sword intent into heaven and earth is only the first step, and the most important step is the second, which is the heart of the sword." "Heart of the sword?" Yi Xian was a little puzzled. Yu Qi explained, Right now you have a clear heart of the sword, which means that your heart of the sword is flawless, but to become a sword immortal, you need not only a clear heart of the sword but also a bright heart of the sword. Bright heart of the sword. Yi Xian frowned slightly. A state of mind? Yu Qi nodded. A state of mind that is extremely difficult to understand. Moreover, everyone's state of mind is different, so no one's bright heart of the sword might be different. Of course, different paths lead to the same goal and the final result is the same. Yi Xian asked, "Is this bright heart of the sword difficult?" Yu Qi nodded, "Difficult." The senior brother who guards the sword tomb has been stuck here for more than 10 years. More than 10 years? Yi Xian's expression turned bitter. More than 10 years? This meant that to become a sword immortal, he would probably have to continue enduring. At this moment, Yu Qi suddenly laughed. "You don't need to be discouraged. For you to be able to reach half-step sword immortal at this age, you are already a genius. You must know that before eldest senior brother's realm dropped, he was also slightly inferior to you." Yi Xian laughed. "If I were a sword immortal now, I would be of great help to the sect." Yu Qi lightly patted him on the shoulder. "I'm very happy that you think like this, but you don't have to worry too much about the sect's matters. Us older generation will solve these matters ourselves. What you need to do now is to cultivate properly, understand?" Yi Xian hesitated for a moment and then said, "What are our chances of winning?" Yu Qi shook his head. "I don't know. In any case, even if the chances of winning are 0, we still have to fight. We have no other choice." Yi Xian nodded. "I understand." Yu Qi said, "If there's nothing else, you can go to the depths of the sword tomb. The founding ancestor once cultivated there, and the existence of the founding ancestor's sword intent should be helpful to you." Yi Xian laughed bitterly. "The martial uncle who guards the sword tomb won't let me go." "What?" Yu Qi was slightly puzzled. Yi Xian laughed awkwardly. "I went there once and devoured some swords." Yu Qi frowned. "I only devoured some swords. You are one of us. Is a person not as important as a sword? Come with me." After that, Yu Qi brought Yi Xian to the sword tomb again. Seeing Yu Qi and Yi Xian, the elder's eyelids twitched. He hurriedly walked to Yu Qi and smiled. "Little junior sister, why are you free to come here today?" Yu Qi glanced at the elder. "Senior brother Lin Qiu, why can't my disciple come to the sword tomb? Why, do you have a problem with me?" The elder called Lin Qiu laughed bitterly. "Little junior sister, what are you talking about? It's just that you know the rules here. You have to get the sect leader's approval before you can enter." Yu Qi frowned. "Are you using second senior brother to pressure me?" Lin Qiu's smile became even more bitter. "Little junior sister, we are from the same sect. If you say that Yu Qi was about to speak when Yi Xian suddenly said, "Uncle Master Lin Qiu, I devoured the swords without your approval previously. It was my fault. I apologize to Uncle Master here." Lin Qiu glanced at Yi Xian. "I'm a little surprised that you can admit your mistake." As he spoke, he paused slightly. "Although you improved because of that time, these things belong to the sect after all. You devoured them without informing us. This kind of behavior is not acceptable." Yi Xian hurriedly said, Yes, I know my mistake. I will definitely not do such a thing in the future." Just as Lin Qiu was about to say something, a voice suddenly rang in his head. "Let him in. In the future he can enter whenever he wants to. Train him with all your might." It was Qin Beihan's voice. Hearing that, Lin Qiu's expression changed. "Train him with all my might." He knew very well what this sentence meant. Lin Qiu looked deeply at Yi Xian then said, "Go in." Yi Xian bowed slightly. "Thank you." As he spoke, he turned to Yu Qi. "Master, I'll go in first." Yu Qi nodded. "Go deeper." Yi Xian nodded, then walked into the sword tomb. Yu Qi glanced at Lin Qiu. "He has already reached the true defense realm. Do you understand?" There was a tinge of pride in his voice. True defense realm. Lin Qiu was stunned. Yu Qi turned and left. True defense realm. Lin Qiu was stunned for a long time where he stood, then he shook his head and smiled. "Monster! Such a young true defense realm. In the younger generation of the divine central continent, apart from a few families and Shen men in the upper worlds, basically no one could compare to him." In the sword tomb, Yi Xian kept walking deeper. The size of the sword tomb was slightly beyond Yi Xian's imagination. After walking for around an hour, Yi Xian stopped. He had reached the end. And here, he felt a faintly discernible sword essence. At the same time, the Lingxiu sword in his body suddenly trembled, as if it had sensed something. Yi Xian said softly, "This should be the place where the firmament sword master once cultivated." As he spoke, he sat down cross-legged. Gradually Yi Xian entered a meditative state. At this moment, he could clearly feel the faintly discernible sword essence around him. This sword essence was slightly special, but he couldn't tell what was special about it. Enlightenment. What he needed to do now was to comprehend. Just as Yi Xian was comprehending in the sword tomb, two old men suddenly came to World Shield Mountain. The two old men wore dark golden robes and there were 12 people behind them. These 12 people all wore golden robes. In the hall, Lord Lu suddenly opened his eyes and said softly, "Yi Xian, you should die. P.S. I want to write a poem." Chapter 321. Early in the morning. A red sun slowly rose on the horizon, awakening all things. On this day, all the Realm Protection Alliance's true defensive realm powerhouses were mobilized. Their target was the Pale Sword Sect. The Level Protection Alliance didn't launch a sneak attack, because it was useless at a time like this. After all, the Pale Sword Sect had always been on guard against them. Supremacy Lu didn't want to launch a sneak attack either. He wanted to destroy the Pale Sword Sect openly. As the Realm Protection Alliance's powerhouses moved out, the entire Central Plains was shocked. The great battle was upon them. The Pale Sword Sect. At this moment, the Pale Sword Sect was on full alert, everyone ready for battle. This was a battle of life and death. If they lost, the Pale Sword Sect would be destroyed. When the nest was overturned, how could there be an unbroken egg? As disciples of the Pale Sword Sect, the only choice they had was to fight to the death. The clouds above the Pale Mountains suddenly dispersed, and Supremacy Lu and the others soon appeared in the sky above the Pale Sword Sect. Two old men stood on both sides of Supremacy Lu. Both of them wore dark golden robes and held a walking stick in their hands. Behind them were 12 people, all dressed in golden robes. Their faces were hidden beneath their robes, making it impossible to see their formation. The auras of the two old men and the 12 were as vast as the ocean, unfathomable. Behind them there were still 32 people. These 32 people were all true defensive Dharma realm experts. Supremacy Lu looked down from the clouds, his face expressionless. In truth, compared to the Pale Sword Sect, he hated Yi Xian even more. It could be said that he hated him to the bone. Moreover, Yi Xian's rate of growth made him a little apprehensive. He'd watched Yi Xian grow up, and this speed was even more terrifying than the Pale Sword Sect's most dazzling sword Shen back in the day. Especially now that Yi Xian was being nurtured by the Pale Sword Sect. Once such a monster received good resources, his progress would be absolutely skyrocketing. In this world, some people were so freakishly unreasonable. Meanwhile, the old man on Exalt Lu's left spoke abruptly, "The Firmament Sword Sect should have been annihilated a long time ago." Lord Lu glanced at the old man and said with a smile, "Left Protector is right. It's just that our Realm Defense Alliance has always been planning for the Lord's great matter, so we have not touched the Ashen Sword Sect. But now the Ashen Sword Sect is acting recklessly, daring to protect Yi Xian who has seized the Origin Heart. But this is good, this time we can wipe them all out." The Left Protector nodded slightly. "However, we still can't be careless. This Blue Sword Sect isn't simple. Don't fail miserably in an easy task." Lord Lu smiled. "Of course." As soon as he finished speaking, he looked down. Meanwhile, a ray of light shot into the sky, and it didn't take long for a middle-aged man to appear before them. The person that had arrived was the sect leader of the Blue Sword Sect, Qin Beihan. Qin Beihan glanced at Lord Lu and the others and smiled. "Everyone's presence really brings light to my Blue Sword Sect." Lu Xun said indifferently, "Qin Beihan, I'll give you one last chance. Hand over Yi Xian, otherwise your Blue Sword Sect will be annihilated today." "Annihilated?" Qin Beihan smiled. "I still remember that when the ancestor was still alive, your Realm Defense Alliance also said the same thing. And now, the corpse of the Lord who said that is still at the foot of Blue Mountain. Do you want to go take a look?" Lu Xun sneered. "Unfortunately, your Blue Sword Sect doesn't have a second Firmament Sword Master." Qin Beihan nodded. "Indeed, the later generations are disappointing. There isn't another person like the ancestor, but you still have some backbone." As he spoke, he looked at Lu Xun and smiled. "Let's not waste any more words. Between the two of us, let's decide the winner and loser today." Lu Xun said indifferently, "As you wish." Qin Beihan laughed out loud and dashed towards Lord Lu directly. Lu Xun was expressionless. His body trembled and he turned into a streak of light that shot out. Very quickly, a deafening explosion resounded in the sky. In the air, the Left Protector glanced at Lu Xun and then looked down. "Is there anyone else from Blue Sword Sect?" Below, a sword light suddenly shot into the sky. Very quickly, a middle-aged man appeared in front of the left protector. The middle-aged man wore a black robe and held a giant brush in his hand. This person was Imperial Brush Mountain's Lian Bixin, the third senior brother. Lian Bixin glanced at the left protector. "Please enlighten me." The left protector sneered, "Wrong. It should be deaf." As soon as he finished speaking, his right foot stomped on the ground. The space around Lian Bixin shook violently, and in the next moment he retreated hundreds of feet. Seeing this scene, the expressions of everyone below instantly turned serious. In the air, Lian Bixin glanced at the left protector. "Amazing!" As soon as he finished speaking, he suddenly pointed his brush forward. In an instant, a drop of ink appeared, and in the next moment, a jet black sword energy suddenly tore through the sky and arrived before the old man. The old man casually slapped out with his palm. Bang! The old man retreated by over 30 feet. When he stopped, the old man glanced at his palm. There was a drop of ink in his palm. In fact, his palm had been pierced. The old man raised his head and looked at Lian Bixin, who was not far away, and said indifferently, "Interesting, continue." As soon as he finished speaking, he suddenly vanished. In the distance, Lian Bixin struck again. Below, the members of Blue Sword sect were slightly worried, because they noticed that Lian Bixin was obviously at a disadvantage. At this moment, another old man from the Realm Guard Alliance who wore a dark golden robe stood out and looked down coldly. Next. This person was the Realm Guard Alliance's Right Reverend. At this moment, Zhang Tai appeared in front of the Right Reverend. He glanced at the Right Reverend, and without a word, he directly drew the huge sword on his back and slashed at the Right Reverend. The Right Reverend laughed coldly as he raised his hand and slashed out. Bang! The entire sky trembled violently as Zhang Tai retreated repeatedly. But in the next moment, Zhang Tai charged forward once more. Below, Yuqi frowned. This was because the strength of these two old men that had just appeared was a little beyond her expectations. Regardless of whether it was Lian Bixin or Zhang Tai, both of them were slightly inferior to these two old men. As time went on, it would be extremely disadvantageous to them. Meanwhile, Emoshio suddenly spoke indifferently, "Attack." As soon as his voice fell, the 32 true Imperial Dharma realm powerhouses behind him charged towards the Blue Sword sect below. Group battle. Right at this moment, a voice suddenly resounded from within Blue Sword sect. "Activate the formation." As this voice fell, the entire Blue Sword sect was suddenly filled with countless spirit swords that soared up into the sky. There were at least 100,000 of them. The expressions of Emoshio and the others changed drastically when they witnessed this scene, and they retreated in succession. In next to no time, numerous explosions resounded incessantly in the sky. In the grand hall of Array Dao Peak, Marshal Ant Gu sat before a sand table, and the terrain of the entire Blue Sword sect was displayed on the sand table. Moreover, there were tens of thousands of violet source crystals in her room. After a short while, she suddenly formed a seal with her hands and shouted, "Change the formation." As soon as she spoke, the countless swords in the sky above Blue Sword sect suddenly transformed. In next to no time, the swords suddenly condensed into 10 huge swords that were 300 m long. Moreover, every single one of these huge swords was extremely powerful, and the true Imperial Dharma realm experts didn't dare to go head-on against them. Meanwhile, Yuqi suddenly said, "Attack." As soon as Yuqi's voice resounded, over 10 rays of sword light shot into the sky from below Blue Sword sect. Countless experts had gathered outside Blue Sword sect as well. However, these experts weren't from the Realm Defense Alliance, and they were from various forces. It was impossible for the top forces of Blue Firmament World to not pay attention to the battle to the death between Blue Sword sect and the Realm Defense Alliance. Because this time, it was very likely to change the power structure of Blue Firmament World. In the sky above Blue Sword sect, the 30-plus experts from the Realm Defense Alliance were all entangled by the flying swords. With the addition of Yuqi and the others at this moment, Blue Sword sect wasn't at a disadvantage. Of course, this was because of the sword formation. And at this moment, the head of a true Imperial Dharma realm expert from the Realm Defense Alliance suddenly flew out. Noticing this scene, Emoshio's expression suddenly changed. It appeared again. That mysterious killer had appeared again. Emoshio hurriedly said angrily, "Be careful, there's an assassin in the dark." Before he finished speaking, the head of another true Imperial Dharma realm expert from the Realm Defense Alliance flew out. When this expert's head flew out, his eyes were still wide open. Clearly he had died with a grievance. Emoshio hurriedly said, "Return to defend, gather together." Very quickly, the 27 true Imperial Dharma Realm experts hurriedly gathered together. They weren't afraid of a head-on confrontation, but this kind of sneaky move, it was impossible to defend against. Yuchi glanced at his surroundings. Just who was helping him in secret. Without thinking much, she looked at Emoshio and the others. Now attack. The moment her voice landed, she and the experts from Blue Sword Sect behind her directly charged towards Emoshio and the others. But at this moment, the 12 experts in golden robes who hadn't attacked before suddenly disappeared on the spot. Boom. Below, the hall of Array Dao Peak suddenly collapsed. Not only did the entire ground collapse, even half of Array Dao Peak collapsed. Following the collapse of Array Dao Peak, the spiritual swords in the sky above Blue Sword Sect disappeared without a trace. And when these 12 people joined the battle, the situation instantly reversed. Blue Sword Sect was directly suppressed. Because the battle strength of these 12 people was actually much stronger than the true Imperial Dharma Realm experts. And following the addition of these 12 people, the experts from Blue Sword Sect gradually began to fall. At the same time, among these 12 people, 3 of them directly surrounded Yuchi. Suppressed. If it was one-on-one, Yuchi wasn't afraid, but now it was 3 against 1. Yuchi was clearly helpless. Routed. Along with the addition of these 12 people, Blue Sword Sect started to be routed. Right at this moment, a ray of sword light shot into the sky from below. After it flew into the sky, it trembled violently and transformed into a huge sword net. A sword formation. It was Martial Ant Gu. Even though Array Dao Peak had been destroyed, she wasn't dead. In midair, the huge net of swords appeared out of thin air above the 12 gold figures, and then golden sword energy instantly slashed towards them. Bang, bang, bang. Rumbling resounded incessantly in the sky. However, a short moment later, the sword energy and net in the sky vanished, whereas those 12 people were completely unharmed. The faces of the experts from Blue Sword Sect instantly turned pale when they witnessed this scene. Meanwhile, a figure suddenly flew out from afar. Was Yuchi. Yuchi flew over 1 kilometer away, and when she stopped, a wisp of blood instantly seeped out from the corners of her mouth. However, 3 experts in golden robes had appeared in front of her again. Yuchi's eyes narrowed slightly, and she was about to attack again when Yixin appeared in front of her. Yuchi was instantly infuriated when she saw Yixin. Let's go. Chapter 322. Let's go. Yixin's heart suddenly felt warm when he saw the furious Yuchi. It could be said that coming to Pale Sword Sect and getting to know Yuchi was the most worthwhile thing he'd done. Yixin didn't think too much about it, and he suddenly pressed his fingers together and pointed forward. Boom. 2 swords suddenly slashed out from the sword chest on his back. In the distance, 3 experts attacked in unison. Bang. In practically an instant, both of Yixin's swords were slashed flying. Yixin's face instantly sank when he saw this. These people in golden robes were absolutely not experts at the True Defiance Realm. Or perhaps they weren't ordinary experts at the True Defiance Realm. Yixin was about to attack again when Yuchi suddenly pulled him behind her. In the next moment, she pressed her palms together, and a ray of sword light shot out from her palms. In the next moment, Yuchi leaned forward, and then she pressed her palms together and slashed them forward. An illusory and enormous sword slashed out from her palms. In the distance, the 3 of them stopped, and then they slapped their right palms forward at the same time. 3 golden palm prints tore through the sky and smashed directly onto the enormous sword. Bang! The enormous sword shattered with a bang, and the entire sky trembled. In the next moment, the 3 of them charged directly at Yuchi. They were extremely swift, and their auras were like monstrous waves that were extremely terrifying. Yuchi's pupils constricted when she saw this scene. She was just about to attack when Yixin suddenly descended to the ground of Pale Sword Sect. Yuchi heaved a sigh of relief when she saw Yixin leave, and she was about to attack. But right at this moment, a powerful aura suddenly appeared from below. At this moment, countless people in the sky were stunned. Yuchi looked down. Yixin was standing on the ground, and countless strands of the energy of the earth were converging towards him like a tide. The 3 experts opposite Yuchi stopped as well, and they looked at Yixin with a trace of vigilance in their eyes. In next to no time, a golden sword suddenly appeared in front of Yixin. Haurangaya carrying the power of the earth. Yixin held the Haurangaya in his hand. At the same time, his sword will surge towards the Haurangaya. At this moment, the sword in Yixin's hand gave off an aura that far surpassed that of a true Imperial Magic Realm expert. Yi Xian grinned malevolently and raised his head to face the three golden-robed experts. "Come take my sword." As soon as he finished speaking, he stomped his right foot. The earth shook violently. Boom! A sword-emitting golden sword light soared into the sky, tearing apart the horizon. Everywhere this sword passed, space trembled violently as if it was about to be torn apart, and it was extremely shocking. Yuqi's beautiful eyes were filled with disbelief when she saw this strike because the might of this strike had greatly exceeded her expectations. On the other hand, the three people opposite Yuqi also had solemn expressions. None of them were careless, and the three of them suddenly formed a hand seal. In the next moment, three enormous palms that could prop up the heavens suddenly descended from the sky. If these three giant palms were to fall, the entire Azure Sword Peak would probably be razed to the ground in an instant. At this moment, Yi Xian's sword arrived. The sound of something tearing resounded abruptly in the sky, and then one of the enormous palms was directly shattered by Yi Xian's sword. However, another enormous palm smashed forcefully onto Yi Xian's sword. Bang! Yi Xian's halcyon armor trembled violently, and then the entire sword became illusory. However, the enormous palm was instantly shattered, and it transformed into a golden wave of air that shook through the sky. Meanwhile, another enormous golden palm smashed onto Yi Xian's halcyon armor. Bang! The ground trembled once more, and then it fell swiftly to the ground in front of Yi Xian. At the same time, the enormous palm in the sky became slightly illusory, but it didn't shatter. The enormous palm descended straight towards Yi Xian. Below, Yi Xian's expression was extremely solemn as he sensed the earth before him. He'd still underestimated the strength of these 12 people. If he fought them head-on, then unless he utilized the World Pagoda, otherwise he wouldn't have any chance of winning. On the other hand, he didn't have any chance to launch a sneak attack. Because Mo Xiao and the others had banded together, so it was difficult for him to kill them without anyone noticing. As for these 12 people in gold robes, their strengths were above Mo Xiao and the others, so it was even more difficult to assassinate them. Right when Yi Xian was pondering, the enormous palm was already over 100 m above him. Meanwhile, Yuqi suddenly pressed his fingers together and pointed towards the sky. Boom! A ray of sword light slashed up diagonally, and the enormous palm was instantly shattered. After he slashed the enormous palm into pieces, Yuqi lowered his head to look at Yi Xian. "Let's go." His tone was indisputable. Yi Xian shook his head. How could he leave at a time like this? Yi Xian grinned. "Master, how about this? You fight two, I'll fight one." Yuqi was just about to speak when Yi Xian had already charged towards one of the experts. A head-on battle. A true defense law realm expert wasn't a challenge to him now, and he wanted to fight an expert. Live combat was the best at improving a person. Especially battles of life and death. Because battles of life and death were usually able to stimulate a person's potential. When one faced a moment of life and death, anything was possible. Yi Xian held a heaven-rank sword in his hand as he charged directly towards that expert. That expert had a calm expression as he pressed the fingers of his right hand together and pointed forward. Bang! The space where Yi Xian resided instantly warped. Meanwhile, Yi Xian directly utilized the spatial Dao law, and under the influence of the spatial Dao law, the warped space instantly returned to normal. That expert's brows knit together slightly when he saw this scene. Meanwhile, Yi Xian's sword was already a few inches away from the space between his brows. This sword strike was extremely close to the space between the expert's brows, yet it was unable to pierce through. This little bit of distance seemed so close yet so far away. Meanwhile, that expert suddenly vanished. Yi Xian's expression changed drastically, and he hurriedly withdrew his sword and slashed diagonally. A fist smashed onto the blade of Yi Xian's sword. Bang! Yi Xian instantly retreated explosively by 300 m. After he stopped, he suddenly leaped up, and then two flying swords suddenly slashed out from within his sword chest. The swords were extremely swift, and they arrived before that expert in the blink of an eye. But just like before, the swords seemed to have been obstructed by something when they arrived before that expert, and they were unable to advance at all. That expert glanced at Yi Xian and said, "Monstrous indeed. Unfortunately, he's too young." As soon as he finished speaking, he took a step forward and arrived directly in front of Yi Xian. Then a fist smashed onto Yi Xian's stomach. Bang! Yi Xian's figure arched as he was blasted flying, and he flew for over 600 m. Moreover, blood sprayed incessantly from his mouth. The gap. Yi Xian hadn't expected that there would be such a huge gap between him and his opponent even though he had already attained the magical suppression realm. There was a gap. But it didn't mean that he couldn't fight. Yi Xian roared furiously. The next moment, the entire ground trembled violently, and then boundless energy of the earth converged towards him. Moreover, he had condensed a Haoran Gaia in his hand. The expert narrowed his eyes at the sight of this. Yi Xian had used this technique just now and it was extremely powerful. On the other side, Yi Xian held the Haoran Gaia in his hand as he leaped to the expert's head, and then he slashed down. One strike to determine life and death. This strike contained 2 types of sword will, and 1 strike to determine life and death. This strike could be said to be his strongest strike besides the World Prison Pagoda. The sword stopped when it was 10 inches away from the expert's head. But in the next moment, the space around the expert suddenly trembled, and then something seemed to shatter. In the blink of an eye, the expert was instantly pushed back 300 m. After stopping, the expert touched his forehead. Fresh blood was slowly flowing down his forehead. After a moment of silence, he looked at Yi Xian with a gloomy expression. No wonder the High Lord said that you must die. You are only at the magical suppression realm, but you can already hurt me. If we let you continue to grow, the Realm Protection Alliance will be in big trouble in the future. In the future? Yi Xian grinned. The Realm Protection Alliance will be in big trouble now. As soon as he finished speaking, he rushed out again. At this moment, the expert suddenly disappeared, and in front of Yi Xian, the space suddenly fluctuated violently like waves. Sensing this, Yi Xian's expression changed, and he slashed down with his sword with both hands. The moment the sword fell, the expert just happened to appear in front of Yi Xian, and at the same time he punched out. This punch was like a volcanic eruption, and a domineering force poured out from his fist. Boom. The entire sky shook violently and then 2 figures rapidly retreated. That powerhouse quickly stopped. However, Yi Xian was still retreating violently. This time he had retreated more than 1,000 feet. As soon as he stopped, blood flowed out from the corner of his mouth again. Yi Xian, on the other hand, grinned crazily. Reality proved that he could fight. If he was afraid from the beginning, then he might not know that the gap between him and his opponent was not as big as he thought. It was okay if he could not win, but he must dare to fight. Of course, many times if he could not win, then he should not fight. But at this time, there was no other way because the opponent was coming to kill him. If he fought, then he might have a chance to live, but if he did not fight, then he would not have a chance at all. Yi Xian wiped the blood from the corner of his mouth, and then he stomped his right foot on the ground and charged at the expert again. At this moment, the expert's expression had turned ferocious. Since you're courting death, then I'll fulfill your wish. As soon as he spoke, he suddenly spun his hands, and in an instant 2 powerful auras swept out from between his hands. At the same time he suddenly vanished. Boom. In the sky, a figure flew out without any warning. It was Yi Xian. However, in the next moment Yi Xian charged at the expert again. But in no time he charged out again. In the beginning Yi Xian was completely suppressed. However, as the battle went on, the expert discovered to his shock that Yi Xian seemed to be growing stronger and stronger. After a quarter of an hour, Yi Xian flew out again. Just as he was about to charge out again, a familiar voice suddenly rang in his ears. Let me help you. Yi Xian nodded. Okay. As soon as he said that, a sword suddenly stabbed into his back. Yi Xian's body stiffened. P.S. I checked last night and found that since the new year, many readers have rewarded and voted. This directly brought me back to 9th place on the monthly votes list. I've seen every single one of the readers' rewards and votes, so I can't write them all here. Sorry. I'm really grateful for everyone's support. Life can be difficult at times, but you must face it with determination. Chapter 323. It was Guxi's voice. He was very familiar with the person who had stabbed his junior with a sword. Because this person was none other than Nangong. Nangong. Noticing this, Yu Qi's expression changed drastically. Just as he was about to turn back, he was blocked by the 3 powerhouses. Below them, countless Azure Sword sect disciples were stunned. How could Nangong attack Yi Xian? This was what Yi Xian wanted to know. Behind Yi Xian, Nangong's expression was ferocious. You seem to be very confused. Yi Xian nodded. Nangong smiled. Do you know? It wasn't easy to shatter Shang Yu's Dantian and greatly reduce his strength. Who would have thought that another person like you would appear? With you around, I will never be able to stand out in the Azure Sword sect. Since that's the case, what's the point of me staying here? Speaking of this, his expression became even more ferocious. Don't think that I don't know how biased the sect leader is. You can enter the sword tomb whenever you want, and you even obtained several heaven-grade swords from it, right? Right? As soon as he finished speaking, he suddenly thrust his sword forward, and the sword directly entered Yi Xian's body. However, that sword was slowly disappearing. Sensing this, Nangong's expression changed drastically. He was about to retreat when Yi Xian suddenly turned around. A sword was pressed against his forehead. Nangong's body stiffened, his eyes filled with disbelief. How can you be fine, you? Yi Xian smiled. Do you want to know? Nangong was about to speak when Yi Xian grinned. I'm not going to tell you. As soon as he finished speaking, he held his sword and stabbed it forward. The sword pierced through Nangong's forehead, causing blood to flow out. Nangong stared at Yi Xian, his eyes still filled with disbelief. He could not understand how Yi Xian was not only fine after his sword pierced Yi Xian's body, but also swallowed his sword. He couldn't figure it out even when he died. Yi Xian did not care about Nangong. Instead, he turned to face the golden-robed expert. He had always been at a disadvantage in the battle just now. The strength of the other party had completely exceeded his expectations. Although it was very strong, he was excited. Because after so long he had never truly fought with anyone in a true sense. Although he had been suppressed in the battle just now, he had fought to his heart's content. Battle. Yi Xian stomped on the ground with his right foot and dashed out again. Seeing this scene, the eyelids of the strong man not far away twitched. He had already changed from looking down on Yi Xian in the beginning to taking him seriously. Because Yi Xian's battle prowess was really strong. Most importantly, Yi Xian was a little unafraid of death. He was playing with his life. Once he put his life on the line, there would definitely be a boost to his battle prowess. Not to mention Yi Xian, if any ordinary person put their life on the line, they would be feared. In front of Yi Xian, the expert was completely enraged. Experts who could reach this level were definitely not ordinary people. Once they faced Yi Xian directly, Yi Xian's chances of winning would be reduced. Soon the two of them fought again. However, Yi Xian was still suppressed. In addition, because of the addition of these 12 people, the Azure Sword sect was completely suppressed. In the air, the battle between Qin Beihan and revered Lord Lu was still undecided. Therefore, if the battle continued, the Azure Sword sect would definitely not be able to win. Not only that, Zhang Tai and the others were obviously inferior to the left and right guardians of the Realm Defense Alliance. At this moment, the sound of a sword suddenly resounded from the distant sky. Then in the air, an expert wearing a golden robe appeared. This chapter is not finished, please turn the page. The golden-robed expert's head flew off in an instant. Seeing this scene, the nearby Mo Xiao and the others' expressions changed greatly. Soon, a middle-aged man appeared in the sky above the Azure Sword sect. This person was Jian Xian. Yu Qi and the others heaved sighs of relief when they saw Jian Xian. There was no doubt that Jian Xian was the most capable person in the Azure Sword sect. On the other side, those golden-robed experts looked at Jian Xian. Their eyes were filled with seriousness when they looked at Jian Xian. Jian Xian held his sword and looked coldly at those golden-robed experts. He didn't waste his breath, and in the next moment he slashed forward swiftly with his sword. His sword was extremely fast, so fast that it was impossible to see the trajectory of the sword light. In the distance, the expression of one of the golden-robed experts changed greatly. He overlapped his hands and suddenly pressed forward. At this moment, the space in front of him actually shook like a wave. At this moment, Jian Xian's sword arrived. Under everyone's gazes, the sword directly cut open the space in front of them. Bang! The entire space shook violently, and then a powerful force blasted the golden-robed expert away. This flight covered a distance of several thousand feet. However, Jian Xian didn't stop. He pointed with his fingers, and a strand of sword light suddenly tore through the sky. A few hundred meters away, a law defense realm expert of the Guardian Alliance was instantly pierced between his brows. The expert's eyes were wide open, and he died with everlasting regret, because he didn't realize how the sword had pierced through his brows until he died. Jian Xian was about to attack when a furious shout suddenly sounded out from nearby. "How dare you!" As the voice fell, an old man suddenly appeared in front of Jian Xian. The old man was the left guardian of the Guardian Alliance, and on the other side, Lian Bixin, who was fighting him, had appeared as well. But at this moment, Lian Bixin's face was pale, and there was blood at the corner of his mouth. Obviously he was injured. Lian Bixin spoke softly when he saw Jian Xian, eldest senior brother. Jian Xian nodded slightly. "Go help Zhang Tai." Lian Bixin nodded, and then he transformed into a ray of sword light that charged towards the right guardian of the Guardian Alliance. Jian Xian turned to look at the left guardian and sneered, "I thought that the Lord of the Guardian Alliance would come personally, but I didn't expect that he would only send 2 pieces of trash like you." The left guardian narrowed his eyes. "Lord? Jian Xian, do you think that someone like you is worthy of the Lord to come personally?" As soon as he finished speaking, he suddenly flew up, and in the next moment he formed seals with his hands, and in an instant numerous black streams of air appeared in the surroundings. The left guardian suddenly roared furiously, "Condense!" As soon as he finished speaking, the black streams of air in the surroundings were about to condense, but right at this moment, Jian Xian suddenly slashed forward with his sword, "Break!" As soon as the sword descended, a ray of sword light that was 300 m long suddenly slashed down from the sky like a waterfall. In an instant, the black streams of air in the sky vanished without a trace. The left guardian's expression changed greatly, and he hurriedly dodged backwards. With this dodge, he dodged a few hundred meters and completely pulled away from Jian Xian. Jian Xian glanced coldly at him. "Come, I'll give you another chance to use it. Don't say that my Azure Sword sect is bullying you." The left guardian's expression was extremely unsightly. "Jian Xian, you'll pay the price for your arrogance." As soon as he finished speaking, he suddenly tapped his chest. In an instant, a powerful aura suddenly swept out from his body, and along with the appearance of this aura, the entire space in the sky suddenly surged like a wave of water. This chapter is not finished, please turn the page. Come. In the distance, Jian Xian was expressionless as he held the sword in his right hand behind his shoulder. After a moment of silence, the left guardian suddenly charged into the sky, and in the next moment he slapped his palm down towards Jian Xian. His palm struck out. A palm print suddenly pierced through the layers of space and approached Jian Xian. This palm print directly pierced through space, so it was so fast that besides Jian Xian no one could see it clearly. At this moment, Jian Xian attacked. A sword stabbed forward. It was a very simple sword strike. As soon as his sword stabbed forward, the space at the tip of Yi Xian's sword suddenly split open, and a pitch-black rift appeared there. In next to no time, a world-shaking explosion resounded. Rumble. The entire sky trembled violently, and the left protector was forced to retreat continuously. This time he retreated several hundred meters. As soon as he stopped moving, Jian Xian suddenly appeared in front of him, and then a sword stabbed straight towards the center of his forehead. It was like a bolt of lightning and it was extremely swift. The left guardian's pupils constricted while he was shocked in his heart. At this moment he was utterly unable to dodge and he could only take this attack head-on. In next to no time he suddenly roared furiously, and then he smashed his fist forward. Bang! As the punch landed, an explosion resounded in the sky like a clap of thunder. Jian Xian's sword shattered into pieces, whereas the left guardian was 300 m away. At the same time his entire right arm had been chopped off. Blood flowed incessantly from his left shoulder. The left guardian stared fixedly at Jian Xian while he felt extremely fearful in his heart. He hadn't expected that Jian Xian would actually be so formidable, and it was to the point that Jian Xian could be said to have exceeded the scope of the Azure world. Jian Xian didn't attack the left guardian again, and he turned around and slashed down instead. The head of a true defense law realm expert from the Guardian Alliance that was over 100 m away instantly flew into the air. At the same time, the head of another true defense law realm expert that was over 100 m away flew into the air as well. Instant death. It was an instant death. The expressions of the experts from the Guardian Alliance changed drastically when they witnessed this scene, and they retreated successively and didn't dare attack again. On the other hand, the left guardian had a solemn expression on his face as well. If he didn't deal with Jian Xian, then not only would the Azure Sword sect be unable to be annihilated today, all of them would probably perish here. When he thought up to here, he hesitated for a moment before he withdrew a transmission talisman and crushed it. Call for reinforcements? Jian Xian spoke indifferently from not too far away. Let me see how many more experts your Guardian Alliance has. But I'll deal with all of you first before that. As soon as he finished speaking, he was just about to attack again. Right at this moment, the left guardian suddenly sneered, Jian Xian, someone can deal with you. As soon as he finished speaking, 2 formidable auras suddenly appeared in the sky above the Azure Sword sect. Jian Xian frowned when he sensed this scene, and then he raised his head. The space in the sky suddenly split open, and then a middle-aged man and an old man walked out from within. They were Lin Songyun and the Left Guardian Alliance from the Spirit Void Star Palace. The Left Guardian flew over to them and pointed at Jian Xian. Both of you, this person's strength is extraordinary, so I'll have to trouble the both of you. Lin Songyun glanced at Jian Xian with a trace of surprise in his eyes. I never expected that such an expert would actually exist here. The left guardian's expression changed. Meanwhile, Lin Songyun added, we can deal with him for you, but that's just a matter of searching for someone. The left guardian hurriedly said, leave it to the Guardian Alliance. Lin Songyun nodded slightly, and then he glanced at the surroundings. In the next moment he seemed to have been petrified. End of this chapter. Chapter 324. Lin Songyun's eyes opened wide while he was stunned on the spot, and he was staring fixedly at a single person. It was Yi Xian. Yi Xian. Beside Lin Songyun, Qin Zhen was also stunned when he saw Yi Xian. In the next moment, Lin Songyun appeared in front of Yi Xian. Jian Xian frowned slightly when he saw this and he was about to attack. However, Lin Songyun suddenly waved his right hand and blasted the gold-robed expert who was about to attack Yi Xian flying. Everyone in the surroundings was stunned when they witnessed this scene. What the hell is going on? On the other hand, the left protector's brows were knit together tightly. As if he'd thought of something, he suddenly withdrew a drawing, and it was the one Lin Songyun had given him. The person in the drawing was Yi Xian. The left protector's face instantly turned gloomy, and his gaze flickered as he glanced at Yi Xian. No one knew what he was thinking. Lin Songyun gazed at Yi Xian with an extremely amiable expression. May I ask if you know a woman in a plain dress? A plain dress? Yi Xian was stunned, and then he became slightly vigilant. At this moment he was extremely shocked. Who is this person? Why does he know a woman in a plain dress? Lin Songyun grinned when he noticed Yi Xian's vigilance. Don't worry, we have no ill intent. She asked us to come look for you. Look for me? Yi Xian was stunned, and then he hurriedly said, where is she now? Lin Songyun and Qin Zhen exchanged glances, and there was slight excitement in their eyes. Because Yi Xian's words represented that he knew the woman in a plain dress. Lin Songyun gazed at Yi Xian and smiled. She's at Spirit Void Star Palace right now. Can you go look for her with us right now? Yi Xian hesitated for a moment before he shook his head. What? Lin Songyun hurriedly asked, is there a problem? Yi Xian nodded. I can't leave yet. As he spoke, he faced Mo Xiao and the others from the Realm Protection Alliance. The Realm Protection Alliance will not let me leave. Lin Songyun glanced at the left protector and the others, and then he said indifferently, don't worry, they won't dare to touch you with the two of us here. His voice was very loud and everyone in the surroundings heard him clearly. Obviously this was purposely said for the Realm Defense Alliance to hear. Not far away, the left protector looked at Lin Songyun. Sir, this Yi Xian is someone that my Realm Protection Alliance must kill. Someone I must kill? Lin Songyun's eyes narrowed. You said that he is someone that your Realm Defense Alliance must kill. The left protector nodded. Yes. Lin Songyun coldly laughed. Ignorant. Let me give you a word of advice, your Realm Defense Alliance better not touch this person, otherwise. Otherwise what? Just then a voice rang through the air. Then Supreme Lord Lu appeared not too far away from Lin Songyun. At the same time, Qin Beihan appeared over 100 feet away from Yi Xian. Obviously the two of them were evenly matched in strength. It was impossible to determine life and death in a short period of time. Supreme Lord Lu stared fixedly at Lin Songyun. My Realm Protection Alliance must kill this person. No one can protect him. How dare you? Lin Songyun frowned. Your tiny Realm Protection Alliance really doesn't know the immensity of the heavens and earth. Let me tell you, if you dare touch this person in the slightest, then my Void Spirit Star Palace will annihilate your Realm Protection Alliance. Void Spirit Star Palace? Supreme Lord Lu frowned. He turned to look at the left protector. The left protector shook her head. It isn't a force from our star region. I don't know what force it is. This chapter is not over. Please turn the page. Supreme Lord Lu looked at Lin Songyun. Sir, my Realm Protection Alliance has no enmity with your Void Spirit Star Palace, nor do we wish to become enemies with you. But my Realm Protection Alliance must kill this Yi Xian. I hope that you will not stop us. Lin Songyun looked straight at Supreme Lord Lu. I said that no one can touch this person. Supreme Lord Lu's expression instantly turned gloomy when he heard this. At the side, Yi Xian hesitated for a moment and then he said, That senior, she asked you to come find me? Lin Songyun smiled. Yes, she is at Void Spirit Star Palace at this moment. It will only take a month from here. Yi Xian hesitated for a moment and then he said, Then can you notify her now? Lin Songyun shook his head. To cross star regions. The two of us don't have the ability to do that. So, the two of us hope that you will return to Void Spirit Star Palace with us. She is waiting for you right now. Obviously, he hoped that Yi Xian would return to Void Spirit Star Palace with him right now. After all, he wanted to report back as soon as possible. Otherwise, once that mysterious woman flared up, then Void Spirit Star Palace would probably suffer a calamity. Yi Xian smiled bitterly. Senior, firstly, I really can't leave right now. Secondly, the Realm Defense Alliance won't let me leave as well. Even though he could leave with the two of them, the Pale Sword sect was in danger, so how could he leave just like that? Lin Songyun thought for a moment and then he said, Then when can you leave? Yi Xian pointed at Supreme Lord Lu and the others in the distance. We'll have to wait to ask them. Lin Songyun turned around to gaze at Supreme Lord Lu. Is your Realm Defense Alliance really going to act against him? Supreme Lord Lu spoke indifferently. He must die. Lin Songyun gazed at Supreme Lord Lu for a short moment, and then he nodded. It looks to me like you want to die. As soon as he finished speaking, he suddenly took a step forward, and a powerful aura suddenly enveloped Supreme Lord Lu. In the next moment, a powerful force rained down from above Supreme Lord Lu's head. Supreme Lord Lu's expression changed drastically. Obviously, he hadn't expected Lin Songyun to suddenly attack. Not to mention him, no one here had expected Lin Songyun to actually attack. The powerful force above Supreme Lord Lu's head was like a mountain that pressed down upon him. He didn't dare act carelessly, and he clenched his right hand into a fist and smashed it upwards. Bang! With Supreme Lord Lu at the center, the space in an area of over 1 kilometer shook violently, and then a world-shaking explosion resounded from above Supreme Lord Lu. Meanwhile, Lin Songyun suddenly vanished. A moment later, Supreme Lord Lu's pupils constricted, and then he smashed his fist forward. Bang! In front of everyone's eyes, Lord Lu retreated 1,000 feet. He just stopped when a wisp of blood seeped out from the corner of his mouth. Supreme Lord Lu wiped off the blood on the corner of his mouth, and then he looked up at Lin Songyun. Are you really going to become enemies with my Realm Defense Alliance for the sake of Yi Xian? Become enemies? Lin Songyun laughed coldly. To be honest, a third-rate power like your Realm Defense Alliance isn't qualified to become enemies with my Spirit Void Star Palace. The expressions of Supreme Lord Lu and the experts of the Realm Defense Alliance instantly became slightly ferocious. No one had ever humiliated the Realm Defense Alliance like this. Supreme Lord Lu laughed savagely. How arrogant of you! Aren't you afraid of cutting your tongue? As soon as he finished speaking, he suddenly pressed his palms together, and then he swiftly moved forward. Destroy. As soon as he finished speaking, the space in front of him suddenly split apart, and then a palm shot out explosively from within the spatial rift and shot straight at Lin Songyun. Lin Songyun's face remained emotionless. The ignorant are fearless. As soon as he finished speaking, he took a step forward and smashed his fist forward. A ray of light that was shaped like an umbrella swept out from within his fist. If this chapter isn't finished, please continue to the next page. Come. Bang. As soon as they collided, the entire sky trembled violently, and then they exploded apart. They transformed into a powerful wave of energy that surged incessantly towards the surroundings, and in an instant, the entire sky trembled. On the other hand, Supreme Lord Lu retreated repeatedly, and he'd left the territory of the Firmament Sword sect. How strong! Yi Xian's heart shook. Lin Songyun's strength is much stronger than I imagined. It might be on par with Jian Xian. However, he didn't dare be certain. Because he felt that no matter if it was Lin Songyun or Jian Xian, both of them were definitely concealing their strength and hadn't displayed their full strength. In the air, Lin Songyun glanced coldly at the nearby Supreme Lord Lu. My Void Spirit Star Palace will not allow anyone to harm this person. If your Realm Defense Alliance wants his life, then my Void Spirit Star Palace will destroy you. What a joke. The nearby left protector suddenly said fiercely, Destroy my Realm Defense Alliance? I don't know what kind of power your Void Spirit Star Palace is, but aren't you afraid of biting your own tongue when you say you want to destroy us? Lin Songyun was about to say something when Qin Jin shook his head. There's no need to say anything more. People like them have never left this region of the stars, nor have they seen the vast space outside. No matter how much you tell them, they won't have the slightest idea. As he spoke, he looked at the nearby left protector. Then let's directly attack. Directly attack. Below, countless Blue Sword Sect's disciples were somewhat dumbstruck, including Yu Qi and the rest. Where on earth were these two from? Why were they so protective of Yi Xian? At this moment, Lin Songyun and Qin Jin were definitely protecting Yi Xian. They hadn't expected to find Yi Xian here. Since they had found him, this meant that Void Spirit Star Palace's crisis had been resolved. One had to know that the woman had already lost her patience. If there was still no news of Yi Xian, there was no guarantee that Void Spirit Star Palace wouldn't be split apart by her sword. Right now they only wanted to bring Yi Xian back as soon as possible. In the distance, the left protector looked at Lin Songyun and Qin Jin for a long time. A moment later he said in a low voice, "You two, just who is this Yi Xian? Why are you protecting him?" Lin Songyun said indifferently, "Someone you can't afford to offend." Can't afford to offend. In the distance Yi Xian stilled. Can't afford to offend me? Very quickly he began to understand. It was probably because of the plainly dressed woman. In reality at this moment he was also somewhat puzzled. The plainly dressed woman had asked him to go look for her, but he couldn't figure out why she'd asked him to go look for her. So mysterious. Yi Xian shook his head and stopped thinking about it. At any rate, the mysterious woman wouldn't harm him. The left protector glanced at Yi Xian and then he said fiercely, "I don't care who he is. He must die." As he spoke he gazed at Exalt Lu. Both of them nodded slightly, and then Exalt Lu opened his palm. A strand of white light suddenly floated out. In next to no time, a figure gradually condensed within the white light. At the same time, a wave of pressure suddenly appeared here. Bang! Countless mountains had actually started to crack and collapse. At this moment, the expressions of everyone here instantly became solemn. Lin Songyun gazed at the figure, and then he suddenly gazed at Yi Xian. "Let's go." Yi Xian was stunned. Meanwhile, Jian Xian suddenly said, "Listen to him. P.S. Some readers have told me that there are pirated versions in some places. Moreover, the author's name has been changed and they're even collecting money. Actually, I have no choice. If I sue them, I might sue myself into poverty. Just support the original version." End of this chapter. Chapter 325. Yi Xian looked at the figure in the sky, his heart shaking. Just what kind of expert could make Lin Songyun and Jian Xian so afraid? In the sky, the figure gradually condensed. Very quickly, a white-haired middle-aged man appeared in the sky. The white-haired man's eyes were a bit dazed, but they quickly cleared. Very quickly he looked down below, his eyes filled with disdain. Disdain. This was a kind of disdain from above, like a human looking at an ant. This kind of feeling was very uncomfortable. Beside Yi Xian, Lin Songyun said in a low voice, "Doppelganger." Qin Jin nodded, "Very strong." Lin Songyun said softly, "Looks like this is their head." Qin Jin looked at him, "Very strong. What do you plan to do?" Lin Songyun said in a low voice, "Report." Qin Jin shook his head, "No, too slow. A round trip would take at least 1.5 months. Lin Songyun looked at the distant Yi Xian, "Take him away." "Take him away." Qin Jin said, "You take him away." Lin Songyun wanted to say something, but at this time the white-haired man in the sky suddenly said, "Leave? Don't even think about leaving." Lin Songyun looked at the white-haired man. The white-haired man looked down at him. "From Spirit Void Star Palace?" Lin Songyun said lightly, "You probably haven't heard of it." The white-haired man said lightly, "I've heard a bit." Lin Songyun smiled, "You will regret this." The white-haired man was expressionless. Regret? Perhaps. But that is a matter for the future. Right now I will give you two a chance. Scram immediately and I will spare your lives. Scram? Lin Songyun smiled. He looked at the nearby Yi Xian. "I just said, he will be protected by my Spirit Void Star Palace." The white-haired man shook his head. "Since you want to die, I will fulfill your wish." As his voice fell, his right hand flipped downwards and pressed down lightly. An invisible pressure appeared above everyone's heads. This pressure slowly descended. In an instant, the entire space above Pale Sword Sect became illusory. At the sight of that, Yi Xian's face instantly turned serious. So powerful. If this pressure were to descend, the entire Pale Sword Sect would turn into ashes. Lin Songyun was about to act when Jian Xian, who was nearby, suddenly floated up. In the next moment, a powerful sword intent suddenly swept out from his body, and the sword intent transformed into an illusory sword that met the powerful pressure in the sky. Seeing this, there was a hint of surprise in Lin Songyun's eyes. A peak great sword immortal. If he advanced another half a step, As he spoke, he exchanged a look with Qin Zhen. There was a trace of shock in their eyes. Because if Jian Shan advanced a step further, then it would be incredible. In the air, the sword condensed from sword will soared into the sky. When it encountered that formless pressure, the sword suddenly cracked. At this moment, Jian Shan lightly stomped his right foot and pointed towards the sky. Break! As soon as he finished speaking, the sword trembled violently, and then a ray of dazzling light suddenly erupted from it. Bang! A deafening explosion suddenly resounded through the sky, and then countless rays of light shot towards the surroundings. At the same time, the entire sky became illusory as if it was about to shatter. It was extremely shocking. In midair, Jian Shan looked up at the white-haired middle-aged man with an expressionless face, and there was a ray of light flickering on the tip of his finger. The white-haired man glanced at Jian Shan and spoke indifferently, "Since the Firmament Sword Master, you can be considered to be a pretty good swordsman in the firmament world. Unfortunately, the swordsman Dao is merely a Xiao Dao in my eyes." "Xiao Dao?" Lin Songyun suddenly smiled. "You think the swordsman Dao is a Xiao Dao?" The white-haired man looked at Lin Songyun and replied with a question. "You think it's very strong?" Lin Songyun shook his head and smiled. In the past, he did not think that the swordsman Dao was very strong because the swordsman Dao that he had met were very, very few. It should be known that the swordsman Dao was harder to cultivate the higher one went, so there were very, very few truly strong swordsman Dao in the world. However, that was until he met the woman in the plain dress. Swordsman not strong? That's because you haven't met a strong one. The true peerless swordsman Dao was so strong that it made people feel despair. The white-haired man suddenly said, "Actually, I'm also very curious, what exactly is it that makes you all want to protect?" As he said this, he pointed at Yi Xian who was not far away. "Protect him." Lin Songyun smiled. "Is there any point in saying all this now?" The white-haired man said indifferently, "There is indeed no point. If that's the case, then all of you can be buried with him." As soon as he finished speaking, he flipped his right hand up again. The next moment, a giant illusory palm suddenly appeared in the sky above the firmament sword sect. This palm was hundreds of feet long, blocking out the sky and the sun. As this palm appeared, an aura that could destroy heaven and earth came crashing down from the sky. Under this aura, the countless firmament sword sect disciples below suddenly found it hard to breathe. A powerhouse that could destroy heaven and earth. Yi Xian's right hand clenched tightly. At this moment he felt a sense of helplessness. A deep sense of helplessness. Because in front of such a powerhouse, there was nothing he could do. He knew that even if he took out the prison pagoda, it would be useless. It wasn't that the prison pagoda was useless, it was that he was currently too weak. Other than that, he didn't dare to use the prison pagoda anymore. If this thing was used again, it might create someone even more terrifying than this white-haired man. Instinct told him that the existence inside the pagoda was the real terror. Otherwise, the mysterious woman wouldn't have sacrificed a part of her clone to suppress the existence inside the pagoda. In the sky, Jian Shan suddenly opened his palm. The next moment, a ray of sword light appeared in his palm. In the blink of an eye, his entire body turned into a ray of sword light that shot into the sky. The spectators watched as a ray of sword light tore through the sky and intended to pierce through the sky. The sword in midair stabbed directly against the enormous palm. Bang! The enormous palm shook violently. At the same time, countless cracks that seemed like a spiderweb had appeared on it. However, Jian Shan's attack had been blasted apart. The enormous palm descended forcefully. On the other hand, Jian Shan was actually pressed down by the pressure of the enormous palm, and even his sword intent was crushed into pieces. The countenances of the countless firmament sword sect disciples instantly turned pale when they witnessed this scene. Meanwhile, Lin Songyun suddenly soared into the sky. In the next moment he waved his right hand, and a palm-sized black seal shot into the sky. The black seal expanded explosively in midair, and then a strand of powerful force instantly surged out from within it. Rumble. The enormous palm shook violently while more cracks appeared on it. However, Lin Songyun's black seal had been blasted apart, and it transformed into countless pieces that rained down from the sky. Lin Songyun slowly clenched his right fist, and then his figure shot into the sky. A furious shout resounded in midair, and then a fist collided with the enormous palm. Bang! The fist was instantly blasted apart, and Lin Songyun fell from midair. He couldn't defeat it. At this moment, the enormous palm had arrived above them. If it were to descend, then the entire firmament sword sect would be transformed into ash. It wouldn't just be the entire firmament sword sect, everyone within it would perish. Meanwhile, Jian Xian suddenly closed his eyes. In the next moment, an illusory sword suddenly appeared above him. At the same time, a thunderous sword howl resounded through the heavens and the earth. A moment of silence ensued, and then Jian Xian suddenly opened his eyes. In the next moment, his figure vanished into thin air. At the same time, a ray of light suddenly stabbed against the enormous palm. Bah! The enormous palm was blasted apart. On the other hand, the white-haired man suddenly vanished on the spot and then, bah! Jian Xian, who was not far away, was sent flying. This time he was sent flying thousands of feet away. When he stopped, there was a sunken palm print on his chest. The white-haired man glanced at Jian Xian and spoke indifferently, "If you were given another 10 years to break through into the Sword Immortal realm, then my clone would really be helpless against you. Unfortunately, you're still too weak right now." As soon as he finished speaking, he suddenly vanished, and he was so swift that practically no one was able to see him clearly. In the distance, bah! Jian Xian was blasted flying again, and this time his body actually split apart. If he were to receive another palm strike, then his body would shatter into pieces. The white-haired man didn't hold back at all, and he immediately vanished once more. Meanwhile, Qin Beihan suddenly vanished, and he was already in front of Jian Xian when he appeared once more. In the blink of an eye, he suddenly slashed his sword forward. Bah! The sword instantly shattered into pieces. At the same time, Qin Beihan's figure was blasted over 1 kilometer away. Jian Xian was stunned when he witnessed this scene. In the next moment, he suddenly gazed at the white-haired man, and then he stomped his right foot against the air. After that, a ray of light slashed forward. The ray of light was extremely swift, and it instantly arrived before the white-haired man. The white-haired man's face remained emotionless as he raised his hand and smashed his fist forward. Rumble. The ray of light instantly shattered into pieces. Meanwhile, a sword had arrived before the center of his forehead, and it was only a few inches away from his forehead. However, it wasn't able to move forward by even an inch, because the white-haired man had clamped down on the sword with 2 fingers. The white-haired man exerted a little force with his fingers, and then a crack resounded as the sword shattered into pieces while Jian Xian was blasted flying once more. He was invincible. At this moment, countless disciples of the Pale Sword sect felt despair. Right at this moment, a furious shout resounded from below. "Activate the formation." It was Martial Ant Gu's voice. As soon as her voice resounded, the ground throughout the Pale Sword sect suddenly trembled, and it didn't take long for an ethereal platform to suddenly appear in the sky above the Pale Sword sect. Moreover, Lian Bixin, Yu Qi, Martial Ant Gu, Zhan Tai, Qin Beihan, and Sang Xian had all appeared on the platform. In the next moment, all of them suddenly stabbed their swords into the platform, and then a ray of light suddenly shot into the sky. It tore through the clouds and shot into the starry sky. A sword formation. In midair, the white-haired man glanced at the platform and spoke softly, "This is probably the immortal annihilation sword formation left behind by the Firmament Sword Master. It is really extraordinary. Come, let me see it." As soon as he finished speaking, his right hand pressed down slightly. In an instant, an invisible pressure crushed down from the center of his palm. You're tuning in to the Han Li's Wuxia Adventures YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.